Mornings in Joseon usually start very early. At this moment there was a man stretching out to exercise. Then there are those who are practicing yoga in a rather special way. In the distance, one group of people were carrying the float to hang out. The person on the other side smirked. The float opens. The man slowly walked out. He walked forward step by step, walking while looking around. He looked slightly at the people in the other room. Then he laughed. Looked towards the clear blue sky. Two guards guarding some door were practicing and guarding. Seeing that Jinyoung was walking past, one said, Grand Prince, you came for the morning practice. You replied yes. Open the door for me. The door opened, and Jinyoung slowly walked in. In front of him was the man with billowing muscles who was lifting weights. Next is the person who is practicing inhaling the soap. Those two guys just finished training and told you had started the cutting regimen. I almost didn't recognize you. You lost so much fat. The other one you had a chance. Your shoulders are wide now. The ha who shouted showed off his muscles in front of Jinyoung. Suddenly he startled slightly and turned to look. There was someone practicing running in that circle. It turned out that this person was Emperor Sejong, and he was half breathing and talking. How long has it been? A while since I had one. It seemed that Jinyoung heard something. He turned around to see a man lifting weights. It turned out that this person was the crown prince of Wen Tong. Watching him lift weights so constantly. Next is the man who is practicing lifting weights up and down. Others are practicing balancing in one position. Jinyoung watched silently as they exhorted them to practice. He gave them a frantic smile and thought that today, too, his members worked so their muscles. For a fitness trainer and instructor like me, what could be happier than this? The space now shifts to the modern world, here at the gym. Choi Young-jik, an ordinary young man from the Republic of Korea, doesn't even have a university degree in food and nutrition. Just to become a well-rounded fitness trainer. I started learning about bodybuilding when I was on duty, because being on the front lines was nothing to entertain. So going to the gym became his only hobby. His mother was surprised by her child's change. After returning to university, I also did not stop practicing, because I spent more time practicing than studying. Two people behind him looked at him and said that students of the physical education department, what to do with the history of the Joseon era, shish, it was a history student. But he didn't look like a history student, did he? Certificate of Professional Sports Trainer, named Choi Young-jik. Date of birth August 18, 19XX. Results of Category 1 Assessment. Subdivision of Bodybuilding. According to paragraphs 5 and 6, Article 9, Implementation Decree under the Law on the Promotion of Physical Education, and Article 18, paragraph 3, 2 of the decree, in accordance with the above code, it is recognized that the holder of this certificate is qualified to train in sports and lifestyle, and generally by virtue of obtaining a Class 1 certificate. It was a rare occasion when I had a congratulatory party with friends. If I say there was anything strange that day, it's just that I drank beer, something I don't normally do to keep my muscles. When he got to his room, he closed the door behind him. As he scrolled through his phone, he said if he should watch YouTube before going to bed. He clicked on the video titled Why the Great King Died Early. The Joseon Exorcist 320,000 views posted 1 month ago. After clicking it, he thought why the Great King died early, simple. For refusing to exercise, right? If so, Joseon's history will change radically. He thought of the image of a muscular six-pack army billowing. That would have been interesting. As soon as he thought about it, he immediately fell asleep. Grand Prince, it's time to get up. Hearing someone call him slowly opened his eyes and thought to himself how noisy, where is his phone? Wait a minute. Then came the sound of the rooster crowing. Light from outside shines directly inside. He sat up and cupped his forehead and said, I must have drunk too much. Suddenly he paused. Look up at the ceiling and ask what it is. It's a traditional house type. I guess I'm not awake yet. When Jinyoung calmed down, he froze and looked ahead. You're confused, 1 hour. Then Jinyoung shouted loudly. The servant sighed and said to the Grand Prince, it's time to get up. Looking at his arm that didn't have any muscles, he stammered, what? How did I naturally become a reed like this? No, this cannot be true. As soon as he opened the door, the servant standing in front said good morning to the Grand Prince. Along with that is the surprised expression of the people around. He asked the servant what his name was. Guy suddenly turned around and asked what was wrong. Then somehow said his name was Yu and his literal name was Suji. He asked the person, so my father was Yi Du, right? The other person replied yes. Yi Du, the 4th king of the Joseon dynasty. Moreover, he is commonly known as the Great King, if his father is the Great King, and his name is Yi Yu. This person is known in history with the name of the Great King Wei Zhuang. Why am I going back to the Joseon period? All the senses are very real, so Jiang Yu felt horrified. I tell the truth. At a citadel where the guards guarded very strictly, a voice said, Your Highness. Prince Jinyang begged to proceed to the palace. A public servant came forward and he was still immersed in his thoughts, still called Prince Jinyang, probably before the years of 1445. In this unfamiliar situation, it is natural to feel anxious in my heart. My heart keeps pounding every time I think of the person I will meet right now. The number one historical figure that the people of the Republic of Korea respect the most. A king with a majestic face but a very gentle look. I could not expect that I had met King Sejong the Great in person. For history students, this is the most emotional moment. So Jiang Yu thought in his heart. At this moment a solemn voice sounded. Yes, it's coming. You hear the voice judging. Hear that voice and the same very charismatic and breathing. The sound of starry breathing. Suddenly he noticed a strange detail. I had a task to assign, so I passed it to the palace. A full mouth said as he breathed. At this time, Sejong looked very big, fat all over his body. He breathed pink. You looking at me or not awake? He looked at his son puzzledly. So Jiang Yu looked at the great emperor in front of him in bewilderment. Sejong the Great. Sejong sat high up looking down at him, puzzled to ask, what's wrong? So Jiang Yu replied seriously to his father, who handled political issues wisely. The stupid child god felt nervous about how to convey his father's orders so as not to deviate from the ritual. He said to the amazement of another young man, the automatic translation skills were excellent. Sejong seemed dissatisfied with his words, don't say silly things here. I value your talents, so I will give you the right task, he said with difficulty. I intend for you to record the ministers and the details of the information. Go to Shi Heather Palace and take notes in big letters. Sejong's order makes so Jiang Yu obey the order on the surface. The child god asks to obey. In his heart of amazement, is it Shi Heather? At a pavilion called the Heather Hall, there were many ministers there. He sat by the library brooding. In his previous life, I used to go to Shi Xian Palace from time to time. While a bronze letter boy searching on the bookshelves opened his mouth to say, if the prince took notes on the main principles, I could see his powerful inscriptions. You are too complimentary, so Jiang Yu refused his compliment. If compared to me, the writing of Yang, Prince Anpyeong, is much more beautiful. He smiled and said, Hi, the humble grand prince. Either way, he pondered, it didn't matter if he understood not only words but also words. It felt like memories rushed back to the inherent owner of this body. He flipped through the pages of the book as time ticked by. Reading it, he saw that the words in the book were not small. He stared at the words on the book and thought. But Sejong the Great said that he could not see clearly. Member, King Sejong the Great, based on the standard of 15 years of experience as a coach, he first analyzed his father's body, severe obesity, BMI body mass index, greater than 35, stage 2 obesity. In addition to the fact that his face seemed to swell excessively, he examined Sejong's face. Although the early summer morning temperatures were cool, sweat still lingered on his forehead. Taken together, so Jiang Yu speculated, diabetes or suspicion may be impaired glucose intake, the earlier stage of diabetes. Later history is clear, not long after King Sejong the Great died. People grieved by the death of the great, King Mungjong reigned for 3 years, then quickly weakened by disease and death. As a result, King Danjong ascended to the throne, a king frightened by the bloody soldiers standing before him. Next, a soldier wielding a sinister bloody sword smiled and looked towards the newly crowned king. So Jiang Yu focuses on writing words. No, I'm absolutely not going to let it go like that. At this moment someone walked in. Li Hyong looked towards his imperial disciple. He looked very sick, said that it turns out that his special job is that he only likes to hunt and climb mountains every day. Emperor Li Hyong, the eldest son of King Sejong the Great, the future Wenzong. You look at him and scrutinize. He is the 5th king of the Joseon era, also his brother. Ignore me, just do your thing. He turned his back to the other direction in your puzzlement. The book that King Sejong the Great will read. Maybe you also noticed it. Huang, it has been a long time since I read these documents again. He opened his mouth to speak. Some documents are small in size, so it is difficult to read. He felt that the order to write down in large letters was really appropriate, and his firm words shocked Li Hyong. His words seemed to have other intentions. His suspicious words made him feel frightened, So obvious, even though he hadn't answered, he continued to say, do you know His Highness's presbyopia? I just guessed that, he said. Normally, His Highness always prides himself on being a wonderful person, Li Hyong helplessly said. A lot of things have changed in a short period of time. His words made him helpless. When did His Highness's presbyopia start? In response to So Jang-Yu's question was his sigh. I felt this symptom a year ago. However, I see a difference from normal presbyopia. I don't think it's just that I can't see everything up close, because no one knows about this yet, so please keep your mouth tight. Li Hyong walked to the door and didn't forget to let go of the threat. Asked by Huang Wen, he happily replied. Didn't you ignore me so naturally? So Jang-Yu worried. The prince walked leisurely. The officials in the palace sent him off, probably from talking so hard. He massaged the back of his aching neck. The back of his neck went numb. He warmed up his shoulder muscles, back muscles, and 2 hands. So comfortable. His actions made the other letters in the room feel confusing. What is the Grand Prince doing? An incomprehensible official. If the neck is numb, it must be strangled. Why do you stir the whole body? So Jang-Yu heard that, and was surprised. So you guys don't know how to reduce it. In this era, although there were some mandarins specializing in massage, high efficiency was not achieved. Speaking just right, he helplessly explained. He was writing a few days ago when he dislocated his neck. The official who heard that was worried. Oh my God. After his neck went numb, he placed his hand on the letter, the casual movement of his back relaxing. Come on, it worked, so try to follow me. He got up and walked over to the helplessness of the 2 of them. The 3 of them warmed up together. Rotate your shoulder muscles together. And let's brace. It seemed so relaxed that the faces of the 2 of them became bright. The next day in Shi-Hin Palace. There was no need to press hard on their necks like this. They didn't expect that moving their shoulders and back made their bodies so comfortable. They still laughed and talked happily, not knowing that Li Hyong had already entered the door. My stone-hard neck was moving. If so, maybe there was no need for the mandarins to massage. Their words puzzled him. The ellipsis evenly headed. The modern muscle loss exercises that Prince So-Yong passed down were spread quickly to scholars in Shi. Li Hyong looked anxiously at the crowd of people warming up their limbs in the room, which is called Kyungshinbang, which is said to have a calming effect on the pain in the neck. But Prince So-Yang's biggest worry, Choisong Jik, remains. At this time in the market at a stall, a customer asked if there were crabs. Come on, a young man called out, and So Jang-Yu looked around excitedly. Oh my, aren't you a grand prince? The salesman seems to have realized that you should be flattered. Please go this way. I came because I wanted to buy some oil. You stood in front of the boss and said, it is not like perilla oil or olive tree oil. It is like sesame oil. The boss quickly replied, if you remove sesame oil, only cow oil, you can give it to you within here until the end of the year. So Jang-Yu took out some silver candles and handed them to the boss. Collect the 5 worst quality oils and give them to me. Just now at the medical shop that day, I bought medicinal ingredients such as fish lettuce, seafill and poplar. The servant who followed him was puzzled and thought, this time I bought so much oil, I don't know what he was thinking. If I remember correctly, Prince So-Jang died of severe dermatitis. I need to have an ideal policy so that I do not have to go back to modern times right now. So Jang-Yu base thought, even if it is just simple dermatitis, it is very dangerous in this era. Now we had to do it ASAP. The Grand Prince welcomed him home. The 2 servants greeted him. It was hard work. Even if I managed to solve this problem, while I was thinking, a voice came up that cut off my train of thought. I heard that you often stop by that road these days. Yes, my lady. He turned his head to answer the lady. Wait, after looking at the book in Shi-Xian Palace, I suddenly realized something that made me want to do an experiment. He smiled and said, lady, you are puzzled. You have been hunting for a while, now you are looking for these trivial things. This lady reproachfully said, I am really curious about the general's thoughts. While leaving the palace to buy materials, the Grand Prince Gong accidentally met his wife. She said with a cold expression, brother has been hunting for a while, now you are looking for these trivial things. I am really curious about the general's thoughts. At this time, Yi Yu realized in a panic. He realized, yes, I have a wife. He smiled broadly and said, I saw a book in the Sage Palace, which said that there was an object used to wash the body in the old Song dynasty. You try to be calm. The more like this, the more natural it must be. Faced with her husband's wry smile, the lady only coldly replied, well. Yi Yu replied in a slightly nonchalant tone, I thought it was not a bad idea, so I tried it. What we need most when we enter the Joseon dynasty is soap. If modern people wear clothes that have not been thoroughly washed and exercise, will suffer with various skin diseases. Even in the Joseon dynasty, what if you exercise without soap? There will be many times more terrible skin diseases. I tried making soap at the gym where I worked before. He recalled, the owner of the building said that she did not trust soap at the supermarket, so she made her own raw soap, but, first, the soap was soap. The processing method is simpler than expected. Put the water mixture from straw burning ash into natural olive oil, mix herbal flour and heat. It is done. If it is this method, it is possible to make soap in the Joseon dynasty. The lady replied sternly, if you get oil on your body, it will be very dirty. Even in my dreams I did not expect that the material used to wash the body is oil. He smiled and replied that Win was planning to do many tests. In the book it is recorded that all the dirt attached to the collar will be removed. It is said to remove old stains, so how good is this object? The lady just bit her lip, silent as if to say something. I really hope it happens as you said, puppet. She turned away. He just called, oh, lady, what are you thinking? This couple is married life not good. Amidst the blazing sun of Joseon, Grand Prince Gong and a servant were watching intently the process of making soap on the stove. He thought that such a visible saponification reaction would first be considered successful. If you want to find the perfect ratio, you can only constantly experiment. If you ignore the appearance, it is not so bad, right? How much is its cleaning power? Oh, we have to try first. Then he went to the bathroom. Young walked into the bathtub and picked up the freshly made soap for testing. He thought again, oh, there are still many shortcomings, but the cleaning ability is very good. The smell is too good. The composition is from sesame oil, so the smell is not so bad. Once the scent is resolved, then mass production becomes feasible. Is it possible to sell in large quantities to the Ming dynasty? The next issue is Sejong the Great's health. Even Taejong Li Bangwan gave up trying to convince Sejong the Great to exercise. His Highness Sejong did not listen to his son. The great king made the prince exercise right on the great hall. Young knelt on the ground panting. Sejong the Great laughed sinisterly. It seems that your family has nothing to do, so there are many miscellaneous thoughts. I will lead the Yo Jin clan like Kim Jong-seo in the north. Otherwise, as an official in Marung Island, Yi Yu looked at the great emperor with a panicked face. Sejong the Great King continued to say, being an official in Tamra Island is not bad. At the end of his thoughts he stepped out of the bathtub, finally, to cure obesity, to be able to defeat King Sejong reasonably. Great King Gong laughed in frustration. The problem lies in this body of mine. This body cannot go to bodybuilding. He thought in his head, the dog passing by has more muscles than me, to improve persuasion. Having to achieve 300-400 kilograms exercises, about 670 pounds, Young imagines his body will be as toned as it was before this Joseon era. He stood there posing so that the two servants standing beside him didn't know what to say, just stared at him silently with puzzled eyes. Then he thought, what if I considered bodybuilding as a science? The great prince suddenly realized what I was imagining. I was also making a book containing this theory. Isn't there also a saying that Li Chen Yang Ming's dual body? This body is inherited from parents, so it must be cultivated and cared for to be called filial piety. A book that records the process of learning and equipping oneself, the name of which is Body Assistant. The view is moved to the outside of the premises. There is a voice of one person, it is Young, who, the servants in the palace are looking at Young with puzzled eyes. With his big fat body he was doing his best to swing on the crossbar. He jumped. Then think, what's this? What is this talent? He tried the exercises that modern times are used to, the 29th dips. 80-second push-up, even dragon flag. The other parts are a little talented, but pulling the core and pushing the core is beyond the strength of the average person. 15 times swinging the crossbar has no effect on this belly fat, he said as he looked at the pile of fat on his stomach. It's true, Lee Seong-gai's lineage isn't going anywhere. Suddenly someone said, Prince, I have already arrived. Young was wiping away sweat when he heard it. Rejoicing, he said, at last the dumbbell came. Your house will pay the price immediately, he said in an excited tone. To the workman said, this is the first time you have done it, glad you like it. Saying that the two left, the Grand Prince laughed excitedly, ha ha ha. The two workers felt very strange. Prince Jinyong was already crazy. You can't believe they used 80 pounds of rice for a cast iron like this. Is there any way to know his thoughts? Even in the Marshall family there is no need for so much iron. Isn't it a gathering of soldiers? Said a panicked man. "Oh, this man, be careful of thy words. We just have to get some coins, hurry up." Switching scenes with Jinyang, he was doing weight training while thinking, "I haven't been satisfied with the exercise for a while. How long has it been since I felt so tired?" Lady Grand Duong's close servant said, "Even if it is royalty, it is too much." "Your lady just sat still and watched," she replied with an annoyed face. "All right, Bangsal, stop." Slave spoke, he said he bathed with oil. Right, 80 pounds of rice is equivalent to a farmer's living expenses for several years. I can't believe he wasted so much money on such a piece of metal. For a long time he went hunting. Now he looked for a strange object. What sin was Our Lady guilty of in her previous life? She thought again with a pensive expression and said, told to stop. "Lady," said the bewildered servant, "lady. Just made a flower arrangement." As she remembered the romantic scene of her and her husband among the falling peach blossom petals. She remembered the face of the Grand Prince who was holding the flower she wanted to put in her hair. Memories suddenly close. The memory was still there with a little image of Jinyang holding the flower. She cut the flower branch that had fallen to the ground and said to her servant, "I want to go on vacation early today. I don't need my servants, I want to be alone." The lady stepped into the bathtub, soaking. Thinking, is that something called soap? She took it. Why use this to wash her body? She felt extremely curious. I'll give it a try, too. Thinking about it, she used it on herself. Bubbles from soap fly out. She was surprised. No, this. A pair of wet feet came out of the bathroom. Choi Young Jik laughed and said, "You must have weight to exercise." Suddenly Choi Young Jik sensed the appearance of someone behind him. Choi Young Jik warily raised his eyes backwards to look at it. Choi Young Jik asked who was there. Behind Choi Young Jik was a person wearing a blue shirt. After taking a good look at who that person was, Choi Young Jik smiled lightly and said, "Oh, what is the star lady?" From the door entered a beautiful woman standing in front of Choi Young Jik. The girl immediately protested disgruntled to Choi Young Jik, "That soap I took out when it was dirty, it is really good." Choi Young Jik smiled brightly and asked the lady who tried it. Choi Young Jik's wife continued to complain, "But the problem was the smell of sesame oil. Every time I finished bathing, I thought I was the wife of the oil seller." Choi Young Jik put his hand on his chin and thought, how about using fat from pigs or cows, but both types are expensive. Not only is it sold to Ming China, but it is also something only the Yosin aristocracy can enjoy. I have an easy solution. If you take the oil of tetradium mixed with camellia oil, the scent will be more fragrant, Choi Young Jik thought in his mind. Choi Young Jik excitedly clenched his fists and continued to say that it would definitely smell better than sesame oil, and it was easy to find. Choi Young Jik clenched his fists to reveal every sharp body line and solid flesh at his wife. Choi Young Jik's wife, who witnessed such a beautiful scene, couldn't help but blush and avoid her gaze, but still couldn't hide her shame and blushed and said nothing. Moving the scene to a scene in a village after having been remodeled in a once impoverished village. A poor citizen came to talk to the approaching official, Prince Jinyang. "Why did you come to this shabby place?" In front of the surprised eyes of the poor people, Prince Jinyang said, "I still remember your face. You are the hunter who participated in the hunt last winter, right? He drove the deer out of the bushes, and there were no wounds on him. I remember people were very miserable. Now that I have come here to reward you, I have intended to live in seclusion, but it seems impossible. The full moon of every month will give you half a jar of sesame oil, 2 jars of rice and chicken. You must use it for your family." The black people shouted to heaven, "How do you pay this favor?" Prince Jin Yang continued to say that there is no need to pay, but on the full moon of every month I will come to check the height and weight of your children. The black people replied that there was nothing else they could do. Prince Jinyang thought, in my mind that I promised to distribute food to 20 families in 2 days. I recorded the height and weight of the children. More than half of them are protein. The other half of the menu is fat and carbohydrates. Then we will record the children's physical changes and mobility to make background materials. Suddenly there appeared the image of a giant mandarin. Our evil eyes said, "You again, nonsense." His son said dumbly, "Father, please take a look at these notes." He said with a frown, "This is a perfect idea." Prince Jin Yang thought in his mind that this note would definitely help somewhat improve King Seyoung's diet. Transition to a civilian forging a sword from a fiery red-hot piece of iron. Prince Jin Yang asked if he could do it. The name of the people standing next to Prince Jin Yang said that he could not read it, but looking at the picture, it can be understood. The weight of a circular iron block is 30 pounds. The weight of these 3 iron blocks is different. Then attach to the iron rod, right, Prince Jinyang said, as you just saw. Or attach 4 to 2 sides. The black man standing next to him shouted in panic, if so, wouldn't 8 sum up 240 jun be 144 kilograms? Prince Jinyang continued, actually suffering a little more. If you can withstand more than 300 jun, it is 180 kilograms. Well, this sentence immediately makes the craftsman look like he does not believe what he has just heard. Prince Jinyang took out a scroll from his sleeve and continued, I want to order one more. Roll the steel plate so that it becomes compact, then make it into an arch shape for me. Because we are wondering, with the technology of this era, whether it is possible to make guns. Blinking it was afternoon. The servant who walked beside Prince Jinyang said that if he knew the prince's virtuous heart, His Highness would surely be happy. Prince Jinyang thought to himself before returning to being himself, I will make the image of Prince Soyang excellent, if so. Truth always belongs to right. We have awakened ourselves and put everything back to its original place. Prince Soyang speaks, but you, Ma Il-young. Prince Soyang used his strength, activating the trainer's eyes. His gaze immediately glowed with a blinding yellow light. Don't you have a normal physique? Ma Il-young replied, since childhood people have called him strong. Prince Soyang thinks in your mind you can't be an official because you're just a bastard, but I think you're a talent in physical training. I really want to teach you about the nourishment method as my first disciple. If you succeed with that body in Joseon, no one will be able to compare with you. Ma Il-young imagined the future with an evil face and said, disciple, Prince, what should I do to repay this favor? Prince Soyang smiled and said, haha, what favor, trust me. Prince Soyang thought to himself that Ma Il-young couldn't even imagine the future later. Moving the scene to a palace in the imperial palace, Prince Soyang called out to His Highness. His Highness with a tired face, dark eyes said, you is coming. Prince Soyang smiled brightly, and behind him emitted a bright light in response, yes. So from His Highness with a tired face said that you seem to be much thinner over the past time. On the contrary, the upper body is very muscular. The eyes are no longer dull. I am curious why you came to see me. Prince Soyang continued, instead of hunting, I have practiced according to the new method, so the divine color looks better. In fact, I came here today to show the prince this. His Highness Prince incomprehensibly asked to practice according to the new method. What is that? Prince Soyang took out a luxurious box, opened it. Inside there was a yellow square. Prince Soyang said, its name is called soap, please try it once. The two went to a lake on the grounds of the crown prince's palace. The prince suddenly looked at his hand and said that the dirty place was washed so easily. What a miracle object. But Star Camellia essential oil. The price of that type is absolutely not cheap at all. The prince put his hand to his nose to smell the fragrance emanating from his hand after using that soap. The wife of Prince Soyang said that this is not the case, Your Highness, if you only use expensive essential oil. It costs the equivalent of 4 to 5 bags of rice. This soap is mixed with tetrarium essential oil, so the price does not exceed 2 bags of rice. The prince asked, indeed, can I try to pour a little? The crown prince smiled contentedly and wrote that. When Prince Jinyang read the will of the crown prince, Prince Jinyang created something called soap that could clean stains when bathing, which ordered the ministers not to get dirty to wash their hands with soap in the morning and evening. The crown prince continued, although soap is a bit expensive, if you are a little rich, you can also buy it, but no one knows the effectiveness of this, so it is possible that no one will buy it. So ancestor Weijuang the great king continued, so I have to make soap for all the ministers to try, so from the next word, after washing my hands, I want to take a bath with soap. The great emperor Wei thought in his mind in modern craftsmen to call this a free trial. So the emperor thought that in the soap that was widely disseminated at that time, I would make soap exclusively. I would issue a tax, so that the court could collect an additional tax. The tax collected from this soap will actually be incurred a little. The prince smiled and thought to himself in his mind, it is indeed the son of King Sejong, it is not the son of this tomorrow. The scene is changed to the former impoverished village. The people are busy preparing to do what Prince Soyang has asked. There were 2 subordinates of Prince Jinyang who came to ask if there was anything wrong with Prince Jinyang's orders, and one of the workers who was standing there quickly replied, yes, no sir. He turned and continued, yes, if you make any mistake you know what yourselves are going to be. The worker bent over and answered him leisurely. The workman standing next to him said uncomfortably that the items ordered by the prince were melted down and destroyed immediately. The worker who had just answered panicked turned to ask why. Isn't the return date coming? The damage cannot be said in words. The other guy is so angry that you mean that life is not equal to these odd dollars, do it now. We have never seen the prince. The two men just now turned and left the village. Where they went, the people panicked there and avoided them. They thought in the mind of the second prince that he could not become a prince, spending a large amount of money to buy a large amount of iron and steel. Could it be that if he trained his body all day, there would be no room for other thoughts? Prince Jin Yang, you finally revealed that dark ambition. Early in the morning in the capital, the noise and exclamation of the miracle had just been widely used by the effect of using it so effectively. You know what? The ministers were chatting about the effectiveness of the soap after I washed my hands with that so-called soap. The ink stain dissipated in an instant. You thought it was just to wash the ink, said another official. The dog oil on my face also disappeared in an instant. It was a strange item, he exclaimed as he touched his face with his hand that no longer had oil on his skin, but was extremely shiny. But do you know who made that pink stone? Well, of course it's not His Highness the Prince, is it? People are starting to speculate about the creator of this miracle object. Don't be surprised, it's Prince Jinyang. What? I thought he was a troublemaker and only good at errands. It's an unbelievable thing. At Jinyang's royal palace, the counting of the servants' name echoed, and the muscular-shouldered young man was training weights for the ancient version of the 6, 7, and 8. 9, 10, sweat soaked all over his body. He thought to himself, the weight of the dumbbell is fictional. With this intensity, I probably became stronger than before, and immediately brought the weights back to the support bar. The servant lamented that not long ago, the weak prince had for himself a strong body, extremely strong forehead. He said to say that the training of the body is also a filial piety. Holding a towel to wipe away the sweat from his face, do you think I can be lazy? He said proudly. Compared to his previous life, although the level of finishing it is not as good as the gym in the military area, but this size can also be used, although there is noise during the production process. He thought of the blacksmith kneeling down in front of him due to the urgency of the situation. I have not been able to complete the remaining blueprints in time. Prince, we will return all the favors you have given. I have heard that there has never been a delay in the set date. Is it because of the new design? It is more difficult. Closing his train of thought, he said to the servant's name, now it's your turn. Why? The servant is suspicious. He waved his hands in panic, shaking his head in protest. With this weight, he would probably be crushed to death instantly. Didn't I already say, your demonic version emerged? Is your body in need of newer stimulation? Doesn't it make the servant extremely confused and hesitant? He enthusiastically directed the servant's hand not only to use the upper part but also the lower body. Yes, come on, one. The lady in the back looked at him. She felt astonished. What had happened to her husband that could have made him such an incredible person indeed? It was a very miraculous thing. When I knew him, his figure was already very slim, but it was unbelievable that his strength had increased so dramatically so far. It was comparable to General Wanbong, and the lady behind her covered her mouth with her hand and could not hide the look of surprise and disbelief in her eyes. Called Wanbong, he suddenly turned in the direction of the voice. He was interested. Prince, stop dying. His grandfather almost forgot about the person he was holding weights for him to practice, making him afraid to try to use his strength to lift. Maybe it wasn't okay, so he shouted a cry for him not to forget him. He smiled and said that I have studied martial arts since childhood. I heard that he is a famous general under the great minister Kim Jong-seo. I think it would be good if I could bring out what I learned in the old world. Sometime we should do an exercise specifically for the military. Would it be okay? I may win if I just use simple martial arts, but if I use weapons I will definitely be defeated. This time I worry about 8 things. Let go of it with both hands. The servant panicked to the point of crying, no. Suddenly, a loud noise came in from outside the door, and the people inside looked startled at the door. The constant banging on the door makes people uncomfortable. He thought to himself, why knock on Prince Jinyang's door now? The door swung open, and the soldiers burst in. Their leader behind them felt like he didn't mean well when he entered here. The soldiers rushed in. What's the matter? The prince's wife spoke up before asking. Lady said in a serious voice, how dare you do this even when you know that this is Prince Jinyang's house, said the lady of her servant in a panic. Heaven, said the disrespectful leader. He was about to touch the lady with a cold face. The intention to intimidate her was clear that God knew so well. Lady and prince should separate. The frightened lady leaned to avoid him. She closed her eyes and endured, and suddenly, the maid's scream rang out. At this moment, the desecrator of the lady was knocked to the ground, his hand holding the stick in his hand. He thought, even if he was getting stronger, how could he push me away so easily? He stood in front of her guarding her, his voice extremely angry. You dared to joke with me with that dirty mouth? The rest of the soldiers were startled by what happened so quickly that they could not turn back, and when they came to their senses, their hands quickly touched the swords on their bodies ready to draw out to fight back against this prince. Let's get there, the right-headed man said with a smirk. After last year's hunting contest, it had been a long time since he had seen him again. The prince, the leader, wearing a feathered hat, seemed to have a feud with him. Grand Master Lee Suk Kai, what is the matter after all? He put his cane on the ground, asked him, and by the way, gave a warning. In this word there is also a ladder so that he should not be arrogant but should know how to take a step back by himself. Do not be too extravagant. If you carelessly touch my body, I will definitely not sit still. The man beside him, who had just been knocked to the ground by him, had the effect of splashing angrily, said the prince, who did not know his own sins or why, was so shameless. He continued, uttering accusations against him. With the stick he was holding now, they could make up to 20 swords. 20 such sticks. He looked at each item he made, estimated. He began to make baseless accusations. He used the things in the hunt to accuse him of using strange items in the room that seemed like a treason. What did he plan to do with it when 400 weapon bars could be made? That's not all. He paused for a moment, turning to face the soldier close to him and gesturing to him, the subordinate understanding, pushing the bound man forward. He continued. About 7 months ago, someone who didn't care about people like you did, is now willing to roll up your sleeves and go and help. Is he planning to mobilize these people to rebel? You just feel this guy is. It's a fallacy, that can't be called evidence, just based on such unfounded suspicion to dare to send troops to my palace. Even if it is a judicial constitution, this is beyond your authority. Hearing the news, he spoke with extremely extravagant words, intending to arrest him without evidence. Gossip, he said with a laugh. Laugh again, you have forgotten, we have always worked like this, the truth will be revealed. He narrowed his eyes at him. What if it wasn't true? Unfortunately for him there probably wouldn't be, until the truth came out. This madman was really evil, he didn't care what the truth was and was going to torture him. Just as he had done to the people who were tied up in front of him, he had also tortured through the interrogation of those around the royal family would not end. The people in the palace couldn't believe it, this guy was really evil. He thought to himself that being detained and interrogated, even if he said it wasn't true, it didn't mean that the interrogation would stop there, cold sweat flowing. Not that he was scared but because of the cruelty this guy had committed. This is a typical targeted investigation. He thought about it after I penetrated Prince Jinyang's body. Did anything wrong? I can't know what happened between Prince Jinyang and Lee Suk Kai, so it's true. His eyes were closed. Try to think, what do I do about this? At that moment a pair of embroidered shoes from someone walked in a hurry. What kind of situation is this? The stranger spoke up. Huang, he was startled. Huang, it turns out that the person who came is the big brother of this body. The prince said that I visited you in person as soon as I heard the false rumors about you. The appearance of the prince made him anxious to break out in a cold sweat. The prince with dark eyes approached him and said, I believe this is the method that you have prepared for physical training. The big crank prevents him from approaching. If he is having rebellious thoughts, I don't know if something will happen. He paused to look at him black-faced. Careful of your mouth, Dacian, you give him a warning. His cold eyes glanced at him. He was not that person, but my royal disciple. Gathering his deadly gaze, he asked him, there are people everywhere who do not accept the use of property for personal purposes. Yuya, please explain to me about these items. Pausing for a moment he said, if this is a heinous crime, even if you were an emperor, I will not forgive you. Likewise, if you dare to trap my brother. His name was accentuated. He inadvertently emphasized Lee Suk Kai. Be careful of your head, your warning. You carefully put your head, and in the midst of the snowy sky where the simple cabin was, a voice rang out. A young man wielding a stick struck the ground. When the disciple also needed his brother's help, so Zhang Yu asked for his elder brother's help. Bring me the body diary, he ordered the servant beside him, and the servant bowed clearly. The reason he created a regimen to take care of and train his body was just in case it really mattered. He took the book from the servant's hand and explained it to Li Hyang. Take a look at your disciple's health care method. Jinyang handed the book to the prince to take, the method of taking care of his body and health. The book talks about the importance of wellness. Li Hyong flipped open the book and looked at how filial piety is defined as the exercise that makes the body that your parents gave you perfect. It wasn't wrong, but, the prince said a little, he stopped, and the house was full of fitness equipment. I don't understand why you need a huge amount of iron. Just to create a training method, Li Hyong asked in a gentle tone, but his eyes were cold. What is the purpose of such a nuisance? From now on, only you and brother know about this. So Jiang Yu cupped his head and whispered to his elder brother. Don't you also know that our father is getting weaker and weaker? It's not good to say it. But obviously his father is suffering from some disease. Sejong is escorted by a servant to walk in the flower park. It's just an old age disease early in the day. It seems that you have thought a lot. Li Hyong heard that it was related to your father. His expression became serious. If you really have knowledge of medicine, tell me what disease it is. Yes, Your Highness, lately your father's body temperature has been increasing. Even if the weather is not sweltering, your body is still sweating. Although you are very cautious when doing this, you explain in detail the problems in your father's body. But he suspected it was Sogel's disease, and his suspicious words alarmed the prince. The cause of diabetes is an excessive accumulation of yang qi. In the middle of a white sky, a voice rang out. Moreover, his father was eating too many bending dishes. A table full of food was eaten by Sejong. He sat breathing on the chair. Moreover, his father did not exercise, so there was no way for the yang qi to escape. So the heat would affect the eyes and spread to presbyopia. So this was for the sake of the star. He handed out food to the children and heard that he was recording it. This also related to the Star Kingdom. The soldiers standing next to him were arresting a battered young man who heard this, also noisily discussed. Yes, even if just a few tablespoons of rice and a little egg are enough to gain weight, his father's health condition is like sitting on a fire. He has recorded documents related to meals and exercise regime in his body diary. So Jiang Yu kept whispering to Li Hyong. I'll let my father check for himself. Hear his disciples' words, like he's thinking something. Daesan retreated, and then Li Hyong turned to give the order. Looking at it, it seemed that Prince Jinyang had no ill intentions. That's not okay. A commander stepped forward to confront him. Discussing the state government, amending customs, investigating and impeaching the nefarious and corrupt deeds of the ministers, which is the duty of the government company, he stood in a law-abiding tone and said, His Highness said that the government company, Sahanbu, threatened by power and irrationality, dared to assert that His Highness did not want it either. Now, from Jibui, the third-level post, to Gomchul, the sixth-level position, all the talented people of the government are gathered here. Among them the newly promoted young officials. The soldiers of the government Ray also stand solemnly waiting for orders. Shouldn't it be clear what happened? But to bow down and withdraw just because it was the prince's order, Li Suk Kai said seriously, what these young officials will see and learn in the future. The god is Daesan, the head of the constitutional government, the introduction of the father who makes everyone here sweat profusely. If His Highness wanted me to relinquish this post, he was prepared to withdraw his arms. Defeat me first. Li Suk Kai pulled out his fan and ordered the soldiers, seriously. Your Highness, you can't easily ignore it just because it's a bloodline. The prince will be the next king, he reproached Li Hyong. With a decisive decision, let the people know the majesty of our country's laws. He pointed directly at you and said, Li Suk Kai, I will not climb Daesan for no reason. Now it's not just a matter of myself and the government anymore, but it becomes a place to test the qualities of the prince. Li Suk Kai like a mantis preparing to fight. You, although I don't know anything else, I need you to clearly explain the reason for buying so much iron. And the prince felt so in love and turned to ask his disciple to explain the reason. If so, yes, Your Highness, I will show you directly, I will prove it with my strength, so Jiang Yu seriously explained. His father's body was accumulating a lot of yang qi. It seemed that it had led to presbyopia. Through exercise, if it was possible to completely shake off that yang qi, everything would be solved. As everyone knew that his father hated exercise, Li Hyong nodded at the same opinion. However, if you exert strength that has never been seen in recent times, a large young man with a scarred body holding a spear stands in front of the yellow sky. Won't your father also pay attention to this? For example, if we practice physically against Hanjioic, everything we do will become innocent benefit. So if you can't convince your subordinates, then I'm sure your father won't understand either. You explained clearly to your elder brother. It seems that the prince understands. I understand what you mean. Hearing this, Li Hyong turned around and shouted at the people of the government. Prince Jinyang, because of his health, developed physical training methods. Those iron objects were also inventions for his father. The prince pointed to the pile of health training equipment and said in a clear tone, "Do you mean that is really used for physical training?" Lee Suk-kai doubted. "Practicing with an iron is heavier than a starpot. The items in the kit look very heavy." It was a good idea. The reason why we doubted Prince Jinyang wasn't it because we couldn't know the purpose of using the iron? Li Hyong actually testified for his disciple. If he saw that the true use of this pile of iron was not all natural charges that abolished itself, anyway, the constitutional court would also take the witness stand. The prince's words made the soldiers who doubted or looked at each other roll their eyes. "Let me play with him," a soldier almost stepped forward to challenge him. He had never lost to anyone in terms of strength. He rolled up his sleeves and said arrogantly, if the prince's physical strength compared to his was inferior, it was clear proof that everything he said earlier was a lie. So Zhang Yu stood up and warmed up his limbs in front of the bewildered and worried gazes of the servants. He also took off his shirt and warmed up his body to prepare for the position. The two asked for the help of others and lay on the weightlifting chair. This method of training is called UIAP, bench press. So Zhang Yu grabbed the barbell, which explains. It was used to train the strength of his arms, chest and shoulders. He didn't seem to care about his brother's explanation and laughed and examined the barbell. Wasn't it okay to just lift up? He despised. He didn't need to explain at length. Was he worried that God would win? He watched him breathe in and out of breath even more disdainfully. He was also taking a breath as hard as he could. It seemed to be so heavy that he couldn't lift it. It was heavier than it looked, but now that the honor of the government was resting on his shoulders, he panicked. Yes, very normal, but he couldn't move the barbell at all. He finally lifted the barbell, and the soldiers behind him were glad. General, of course, what about Prince Jinyang? He wanted to look over at him, hopefully thinking he wouldn't be able to lift. Suddenly his eyes widened in surprise as if he saw something in the earth. So Zhang Yu lifted the barbell with all his might, muscles all over his body rising. He pretended to be strong while still moaning. He saw that he hadn't lifted the barbell yet, the more disdainful he was. Li Hyong stood in front of his disciples' actions. So did Li Suk-kai. Even the soldiers were stunned. He felt that such silence was dangerous, so he sweated profusely. 8-9, he lifted weights and counted. He lifted up and down 89 times. After an arduous training session, Wang Zi So-young brushed off his dirty hands with each sound, brushing his hands proficiently. The palace master standing next to him took the towel and handed it to Wang Zi to wipe his sweat and said his full praise. It's wonderful, Prince. The grand army of Yangnyeong standing next to me saw that there was such a thought. It is unbelievable that even in the command, no one has ever been able to defeat me in terms of strength. The indignant gaze of the great Yangnyeong army began to shine. He had never lost such a disastrous battle before and revealed his thoughts, but in this battle I lost. Prince So-young saw that the expression on the face of the great army Yangnyeong did not seem to accept the result that he had lost. Wang Zi immediately spoke. In physical training, the number of training times varies according to the purpose of training, and you can lift 175 pounds in one go. Li Sukchi walked over to his face that was used to revealing any expression, the other Yangnyeong Grand Army in his head with the thought, what? As soon as he shouted, he couldn't, even if he won this match, don't say such ridiculous words, that's enough and go out. Hearing the shouts of the other Yangnyeong Grand Army, Wang Zi's face also became disfigured by surprise at the other's intense reaction. Li Sukchi and his guards started to leave, before leaving and turning around to tell the prince, I beg permission to finish here today, but… Li Sukchi's gaze suddenly became sinister and sharp. He continued to say, all doubts about this prince will not completely disappear. He continued to say, I will continue to do my duty. After hearing Li Sukchi's threatening words, the prince's expression returned to normal and said, you mean to keep an eye on us? Just then Prince So-young also became sharper. He said, so do I. After speaking, Li Sukchi turned and started leaving. The prince's family stood in the back looking at the shadow but was still filled with thought. But the immediate obstacle was solved. The royal brother also learned about King Seyoung's illness. Crown Prince Li Hyong was also about to leave before leaving, and turned around with a smile on his face and said, I have to go too. Prince So-young replied warmly, Your Highness walked leisurely. Wang brother also said that he would help add content to the notebook, rather turn the crisis into an opportunity. Prince So-young sighed a sigh of relief and said, It was almost a big deal. Fortunately, Lady Wang standing behind her face also became bewildered and did not understand the problem. As if realizing something, Prince So-young turned around and said to his wife in a very guilty tone, "Sorry for startling her. I will pay more attention." Hearing my husband's apology, she immediately replied, "No." Concubine was only embarrassed to realize this great significance so late. Hearing his lady's reply, thus he replied, "No such thing will happen again in the future." And suddenly looking down at his feet, his legs began to tremble as if he had lost his strength. He thought, "Well, my legs have no strength." Immediately after that, the whole body like a balanced eye fell into the lady's body, because of the sudden action, so she could not prepare mentally, causing the lady to be a little frightened and surprised. By the time Wang Zi's body approached his wife's body, his wife's gaze immediately became panicked. Faced with the surprise of the two palace people, the whole body of the prince fit in the arms of the lady, because the body and the difference in weight made it impossible for the lady to hold the prince alone, so she immediately shouted, "Wait a minute, husband." Standing in front of the two archers, it seemed that the lady seemed a little shy to say, in broad daylight. It was very awkward, and soon the two archers seemed to know what they meant, so they retreated gently. Suddenly Wang Zi's gaze became puzzled with the question, "Why do I feel so spinning?" The prince reached out and held the sides of his wife's small shoulders, and in his wife's eyes were filled with worry. Tears fell slightly, and said, "Don't do this here anymore, go back to your room." Wang's face suddenly became panicked in chaotic thoughts, so this atmosphere. The sky was falling in the afternoon light of the sunset behind the straw roofs. The sound of chickens crowing in the afternoon also resounded throughout the space. The guard behind him said quietly, "I have no face after this incident, I ask for permission to take responsibility." Li Sukchi heard the guard's words and replied, "Okay." Just then Li Sukchi continued to speak. It was not that he could not harvest anything. The guard who heard this also felt bewildered and asked again, "What is it?" A drawing of a gun was completed. Li Sukchi continued, "In that iron pile there was an unusually thin and hollow one, which looked like a 3-shot gun that had been stretched out, because we are interested in strange objects that were obviously created for other purposes. If the gun was reformed from an ancient book." Suddenly a thought popped into the mind of Li Sukchi, the prince who was developing an improved 3-star gun. It seems that an image from the past reappears. We saw it clearly in the hunting competition 1 year ago. The image of a fanged animal was immediately defeated by the prince. Prince Jin Yang. Li Sukchi's wistful gaze on the prince, now called body training for the sake of filial letters, is ridiculous. We'll have to keep an eye on him. See what secrets he hides behind the black curtain. Not long after we received the news that the blacksmith shop started making tools again, Prince Jin Yang is still living his daily life as usual. 3 months later, under the sunny pavilion as well as the fallen cherry blossom petals scattered everywhere mixed with the chirping of birds, Prince Jin Yang immediately asked, "What did the lady just say?" Immediately after Wang Prince's question was a very shocked answer from the lady. "I recently felt unwell, so I went to see Taiyi. It seems that I am pregnant." The lady who came with the palace lady met the prince with a gentle but also disturbing voice. After all, it seemed that the concubine was having a bad time that day. A very silly question full of surprise from the prince rang out. She was pregnant. Recalling the image of his best friend in modern times, holding up a beer glass said, "Children are 3 years old and do not have time to exercise." Immediately after that, Jin Yang of modern times said, "Hey, if you exercise, your life will really change. Feeling refreshed after exercising is an essential element in life." Ha, out of words. The man immediately replied, "I don't want to hear from people who are almost 40 years old who aren't married. What do you say? Don't you know I'm married? You even have 2 wives, that's it." But it's actually 2 dumbbells that he trains every day. The train of thought still runs to the present. "I used to be like this, standing in front of my daughter, she called out, 'Father.'" Just then the firm hand that went around the lady's waist lifted her up. The prince with an excited face picked up the young lady and kept repeating, "Pregnant, it's pregnant, isn't it?" Looking at the 2 concubine lovers of the prince and his wife, with a faint call, General Gong, made the 2 palace people standing beside him also feel embarrassed. The prince seemed overjoyed and said, "This good news I must hurry up and tell your highness. Oh my god. My heart is so happy that my heart is about to fly out of my chest." Immediately after that, the prince lowered his wife to the ground slowly, and then the lady said slowly, "Sooner or later, let's go together to offer incense to the Buddha. If you want to have children, health is above all clothes. You also want to get acquainted with the so-called bodybuilding." When he heard his wife's suggestion, the prince quickly replied, I think it is okay to start with simple movements that do not overwork yourself. In the afternoon light of the sunset, with his wife starting to meditate and listen to the sounds of heaven and earth, the prince said to breathe slowly, continue with the thought, to give birth safely, stretching is enough. The wife of the prince died of fever in the bath, i.e. bacterial infection after birth. This is an era when the death of mothers and young children due to childbirth was very common. Take out 2 small bowls and fill them with a wine jug, the prince thought. Just having alcohol to disinfect helps, if so, why do this? After spending a quiet night resting, when the sun had begun to rise to the brilliant sky with clouds spreading across the space of the open sky, the voice of the palace master sounded. His Highness the Prince of His Highness had arrived. Jang Yongsul then looked at the wine with the tap plugged in front of him and asked suspiciously. He said this was a bottle of soju. Looking at the cloth that was leading with a hose to a small bowl immediately afterwards, Jang Yongsul continued to speak. I didn't expect it to have such a strange shape. Just then, with Wang Zi's excited face, he approached the soju bottle and said, this soju bottle is what I think of to collect the wine neatly. It cools the elongated tube and causes the alcohol vapor to condense into dew. Immediately after that, the prince turned around and said loudly to the palace master, bringing all the soju that was in the house out here. The palace master, who heard Wang's words, quickly received the order to say, yes, prince. It had fallen early in the morning now, from the time the sun had risen till it had fallen and the shadow had fallen over its back obscured by the unicorn on the pillar. The prince sat on the table pouring a cup of wine and thought, after the distillation is finished, to check the purity of the alcohol. Looking at the 2 cups the same, but the water inside is different. One side is water and the other is alcohol. The prince thought. The 2 bowls with the same weight of water only fill 80% of the cup. Jang Yongsul and the prince sat and pondered wistfully. The density of alcohol is about 0.8, so if the wine I filter lighter or heavier than water, it will fail. For the first time put on the scale, water is heavier than alcohol. The second time put on the scale, wine is heavier than water. At the third time at last the 2 sides of the country were equal. Seeing such a result, why did Jang Yongsul's face become radiant? Okay, Your Highness Prince, successful production of disinfectant. In Prince's mind, I have been coming to Joseon for a long time. Now that the sun is shining, but everyone is still training hard, the prince immediately thought, could he be exercising, when he suddenly returned to modern times. After a while, weightlifting switched to stretching, but Wang's thoughts continued, it did not happen. In the courtyard, the prince and his wife stood under the shadowy willow tree. His wife's flat belly was now also raised high. In his mind he was still thinking about modern times. How modern times he used to live in now, and these questions still linger in his heart. The day the wife was born, the child was born peacefully. Wang's thoughts also changed. Since his child was born, he was also gradually imbued with the lifestyle of the Joseon dynasty. Time goes by so fast. In the palace the high platform is wide. In the great hall, the vassals stood on either side, and Prince Jinyong in the middle was playing. The great emperor voiced praise. Prince Jinyong has recently achieved great achievements. The great emperor, sitting on high with a puffy face, continued to speak. The soap was spread to the folk enriching the treasury of the court, who developed a so-called liquor that was of great help in healing wounds. Prince Yin Yang also said humbly, "This is your honor, your highness." Li Sukchi stood in the middle of the god pants. His eyes deepened and looked at Prince Yin Yang's direction. When he heard him, he still had a lot of shortcomings but didn't know what to do. The great was so proud of the prince that he spoke words of appreciation, who need not be so humble. Li Sukchi's gaze became more and more puzzled when he heard the emperor say, "I give you 200 taels of silver to make soap and replenish your consumed possessions." To the surprise of Prince Yin Yang, the great emperor continued to say, "Not long ago His Highness Prince welcomed his first child. This is a blessing for the royal family. In addition, Prince Yoon was able to get up after 1 week. The effect of alcohol has been proven." Immediately afterwards the great emperor gave an order, henceforth to allow wine to be widely used in the healing of children and mothers, and the gods, after hearing the emperor's orders, obeyed His Majesty. The great emperor's countenance also became lighter as he let out a breath and smiled. The prince's eyes lit up when he saw the great emperor with thought. "I thought it was just a finger." In the eyes of the great emperor he had always thought of princes as children, but now he had other thoughts, not knowing when he had grown up. Suddenly His Majesty's gaze gradually dimmed in the noise of the prince's panic. A shout from the prince sounded, "His Majesty," just then the whole mind faded. The shouts kept ringing, the calls of the people poured towards the side of the great, "Your Majesty." Choang, March 1438. To the astonishment of everyone, the great fell to the ground and fainted. Everyone quickly shouted at the palace master to order, "Hurry up and call Tai Yi here." King Sejong's condition is gradually deteriorating rapidly. Holding the cup of water in her hand, Li Hyong talked to Yu Jinyang. The prince asked how his father was doing lately. The prince replied that his father's condition was gradually getting worse. Fortunately, this time he regained consciousness immediately, but he was worried. Drinking a lot of water because of thirst, the enemy's eyesight deteriorates to such an extent that only the book in front of him can be seen. Although he drank the decoction, he did not see remission. The prince went on to ask if his father had ever talked about his symptoms, such as reduced vision or thirst, etc. The prince recalled how his grandfather had experienced in modern times when he had diabetes. The prince recalled when he helped His Highness and said no, there were no such symptoms. His father always said that he was disappointed that he could not see things in the distance. The prince thinks that if so, it is not a very serious condition. This may be a temporary symptom caused by working a lot, the prince hopes. Saying that, the prince was still insecure, rubbing his chin and thinking that even so, he still could not rest assured. Retinal degeneration or cataracts could not be treated in this era, if it continued like this. According to historical records, a year later, Sejong the Great lost his sight due to complications. The prince remembers that his birthday is on September 9, right, that day. I will give him the opportunity to change that. Seeing Yu Jinyang pondering, Li Hyong curiously asked what he planned to do at Jinyan's royal banquet. The prince replied that there were 3 exercises that used the heaviest weight in terms of muscle-to-body ratio, gong jwa, squat, etc. UIAP, chair press, deadlift, vision distance. Together, these movements are called an exercises. The shadow of the prince's back appeared on his birthday this year. I will gain 1,000 pounds in 3 exercises. The prince who heard this was astonished by 1,000 pounds of 3 exercises. It sounded very unreasonable. Remembering Jeomgun's arduous training, I asked Jeomgun to do these 3 exercises, weighing 600 pounds, and he failed. Seeing Jeomgun painfully trying to get up, not moving at all, the prince wondered how impossible. The prince said while eating chicken said that I only have 900 pounds now. 1,000 pounds is an impossible task even if you try your best. Yu Jinyang asserts that we will definitely achieve this because of our mother. Li Hyong agrees that if that's your will, I'll do my best to help. The current physics assistant has many academic shortcomings. I'll turn it into a book that pleases even my mother. The prince asked that you should concentrate on your studies too, surprising the prince. Yu Jinyang reacted harshly. You told me to focus on studying, the crown prince replied. Didn't you write Ipsen Shavisio out of filial piety? The bright-eyed prince must contain at least all of the 3 sutras, the main scriptures and reference books of Confucianism of the Ming dynasty. As the author of the main sutra, you should also study it carefully. The prince had a headache thinking about it now. Wait, the only sutras inherited from the memory of the great king from Suyong were the 4 letters and the 5 sutras. It was just the 10-3 sutras whose difficulty had skyrocketed. Remembering the scene where His Highness fell to the ground, the prince reflected again, but all this was for King Sejong. The prince looked directly at the prince. I will only trust you, brother, if I achieve 1,000 pounds of 3 exercises on my mother's birthday. I will tell my mother about the cost of physical training. You will definitely experience proportions and muscles. The 2 were happy to drink their chickens for their mother's health. In the morning, Yu Jinyang got up. Now it's time to start doing something really crazy. Increase strength by 100 muscles in 3 exercises in 6 months. I'm not sure if I can do it. The prince pinched his belly fat, thinking that even if he succeeded in the 3 exercises, if his body was full of fat, it would not be very effective in convincing the great King Sejong. Standing on the top of the mountain watching nature, the prince thought that in order to show off his muscles properly, it is necessary to lose about 8 pounds of body fat, right? The prince walks, the best way to burn calories in this day and age. It's climbing, prince accelerates climbing. Hope for the potential of this body is great. All I can do from now on is enter the special training mold. In the palace, the prince was studying the books. Just fell asleep. I didn't even have the strength to flip through books because I had to go hiking early in the morning and start my physical training. Gosh, I want to remember all this, but my mind goes blank. The reason for this situation is that of the prince. How to keep the bloodline of my mother. I have skipped the 3rd guard session in 2 weeks, so for those with excellent qualifications, 1 week is enough. Li Hyong smiled as if he wasn't smiling. I guess, you won't be dissatisfied, will you, Yuya? Dusk falls. It was time for the prince's meal to include cabbage, cucumber, red bean sesame meat, oat rice, etc. The lady was stunned why she was so frugal. Oats are the only thing here to fill your stomach. The prince replied on his father's birthday, you must prove filial piety by showing off your healthy body. It will be worrying to see that your body is full of excess fat. The prince is determined to pick up food with chopsticks, until he proves his filial piety. I will eat as I do today. Seeing this, the sad lady felt ashamed because she did not know the great meaning of the heavenly chamber, and added salt to the red bean sesame meat for fear of not having spices, which is meaningless. The prince's grasping hand froze in the air. The lady turned around and told the slave if there was anyone out there, quickly clean up the pile of food that had just been picked up and bring in a new one quickly. The lady shouted loudly, causing the prince to cry useless things. Next time do not have but season the food, do not season. Sweat fell. Yu Jinyang exclaimed. Disgusting. The prince practices without rain and wind. Study without day and night management. And time passed, the prince stood from above looking down at the palace. Jiyeon, the birthday of Princess Sohan, where the place is splendidly decorated. The writer cried out Soja's agility, look at this god. Sohan clapped his hands and laughed and liked that our district's writing skills had reached a new level. What a miracle. His Highness sitting next to Sohan laughed ha ha. His Highness the eyes of reduced visual acuity observed the surroundings. The prince said to the prince who was standing on the side discreetly that his order was the last in the great army. Everyone thought you would show your physical skills like a Sadongpai. The prince asked again, brother, have you ever talked about the cost of physical training with others? When you tell the prince in the morning that you are carrying 300 pounds, even if you don't believe it, they are still angry, so make sure to do this. My mother would have been interested in fitness too. The prince turned away. The prince agreed, Yuya. Heaven and earth are blue in harmony. In front of the great hall of gods gathered to wait for the great emperor and the queen, lanterns spread along the road. The great birth ceremony of the great emperor's wife was therefore solemnly held, gathering everyone. A chant was heard, followed by Prince Jinyang, immediately followed by the image of a man in robes stepping up and kneeling before the emperor. Behind the cloak was a whole mystery about this prince. A voice said, Happy birthday to you, mother. The gods standing beside them, after hearing this prince's words, immediately changed their colors. He said, the fact that the gods exist in this world. One side after the other, after hearing the words spoken by the other prince, changed. The countenance of everyone felt strange. He continued to speak, all by the grace of his highness and the queen. For this, train the body. A worker in front of a broom standing in front of him also turned cold when he heard the words of this prince. He did not stop to continue speaking, or in other words, as God had invented the method of nourishment by physical training. The great emperor and the queen sitting at the top listening to Prince Jinyang immediately felt a little interested. The great emperor said, You, behind you is a huge block of iron, what are you going to show me? Hearing the great emperor's words, he knew that he had awakened his inner curiosity, so he said aloud, I only prepared a small gift to repay my father's favor. The firm hand clutched a long iron rod revealing blue veins. After seeing the great emperor, he said, Little brother, you touched me so much. A hand grabbed the robe and pulled it out. The eloquent tone said, Today you will show off your wonderful body. The cloak was pulled outward to reveal his solid body. He immediately became prolific and said, which the two had bestowed upon him. In 1438, Queen Sohyeon's birthday changed the entire history of Joseon. Starting from this place, all the guards, after seeing Prince Jinyang's solid body, couldn't stop exclamating in surprise because they didn't think there would be such a perfect body. They all had the same question. This is the first time I have seen such a body. This is Prince Jinyang. Surely with iron bars neatly inserted on a wooden bar, Prince Jinyang spoke again. So he will begin, to the confidence of Wang Yang. In his eyes of admiration and surprise, could not believe what was in front of him with noisy words. What was that day going to do? Jin Yang lay down on a wooden table and raised his hand to firmly grasp the heavy double weight, making Wang Zi's muscles even more visible. Lifting the double-forming substance down and placing it in front of his chest began the performance. The faces of the gods became disfigured when they saw this bizarre performance of Prince Jin Yang. One thought, the other is a dumbbell. It is even bigger than it was at that time. Firm hands grasped the command as a familiar way it had done every day. Chest muscles heaving up and down for steady breath, holding the strength to begin to lift. A shout, of the prince was simultaneously an act of lifting the dumbbell aloft, wave after wave of hand tendons rising en masse. Her perfectly solid body with gorgeous ridges, her biceps showing features near her clogs supporting the weight was the command to lift up and down. The gods, when they saw a heavy object that Prince Jin Yang could easily use like an ordinary wooden board, they all looked at each other in panic. No, how could he? Where did he get that power? The power was terrible. After a shocking performance, the dumbbells were placed on the shelves again as they were. Prince Jin Yang sat up with heavy breaths after his best exercise. After completing the performance, Prince Jin Yang immediately spoke firmly. One of the most important things of physical training is to push weights. Through the last movement we can train the muscles of the chest, shoulders and arms. The queen consort saw the performance just now and was very interested, but there was a very unsightly expression on her face. She tried to put on a reluctant smile and said, "I don't know what I am seeing." Then she did not look towards the double dumbbell and asked, how much it weighed, asked the first question after the prince finished his performance exercise. He did not hide to quickly answer, so that it was about 40 jun and the dumbbell was about 240 jun. Afraid that everyone still did not understand very well, the prince summed up with a sentence, a total of 280 jun. Hearing this, both the queen and the great emperor were very shocked. The queen covered her mouth with her hand to reveal an unbelievable expression in her ears. What? The two mandarins were taken outside, each holding a small circle. The prince began to give orders and said, "This is a squat exercise. One end has 5 iron circles on the barbell. The other side is the same for balance, so that the weightlifter can easily balance on 2 dumbbells." Prince Jin Yang stretched out her hand in the direction of making friends that was fixed on the wooden stick and said, "It is a leg strength exercise to carry weights on your shoulders, then sit up and stand up. If we do so, not only the legs," Prince Jin Yang continued, "but we can train both the buttocks and the waist." Fearing something untoward during her birth as well as worrying about her son, the queen spoke out to hinder Prince Jin Yang's desire to continue performing, saying, The danger is too quick to stop." The prince put all his strength into this performance, causing his face to grimace along with the heavy sound of pinning. 340 juns performed the exercise of sitting down and standing up. The barbell was once again lifted from the support table and fell into the hands of Prince Jin Yang. This time it wasn't another lying position pushing the weights but lowering the center of gravity I created behind me, lifting up and down. The prince just lowered his center of gravity. His hands clutching the dumbbell at the back of his face also became more tense. His bright eyes revealed a look of perseverance, and he let out a loud cry, "Hey!" A heavy barbell combined with great strength greeted the muscles in Wang's body began to billow. Using all your strength to lift weights, this exercise is extremely dangerous if negligence can cause consequences that affect the body heavily. Weightlifting up and down, 340 jun. The queen stood idly by to see her son doing such a risky trick, and as soon as the prince lifted me up she stood up and said, "Success." In case of any possible mishaps, the great king turned to Taiyi, Yang Hongsu, and soon saw that he had said, "Yes, your highness." The great emperor continued to ask, "Is it something that can be done with a human body?" Yang Hongsu heard this, and he didn't know how to answer because he had never been tested, and he didn't know the situation, but he guessed. The bender's tone became awkward but then quickly replied, "It was related to the nourishment method." When looking at the image of Wang Zi doing his best with such an immense mask, his whole body seemed to burn in flames. After doing it, Prince Jin Yang looked at his hands on the ground and said, "The last exercise is called weightlifting." Wanting the great god to hold an iron circle for each of them when he reached the prince's place. The prince's eyes lit up, let alone speak, and he would use the heaviest weight training equipment. Hearing this, Wang Empress's expression immediately changed and said, "Is it not over?" The sounds outside began to murmur and heard the prince say the same, "The instrument has the heaviest weight. This is absurd." Just then the Prince Li Hyang immediately stood up and said, "Father." The prince turned to look at the great emperor and spoke. The child god had something to say. The child god was worried that Yu's back would be injured. Just then, Prince Li Hyang took a belt and walked towards Wang Zi's side, so he tried to fix it. The prince handed a courtier the belt and put it on the prince's body. Without protest the prince just stood still to let them help put it on. The belt was fastened into Wang's solid abs for a moment. The prince's gaze became more relaxed, no longer as tense as at first when looking at Prince So Yang. Prince So Yang also quickly turned to look at the prince's face as a thank you. After preparing the basic steps, Prince So-young continued to limit himself to his hands about to grasp the dumbbell. Still a familiar voice shouted. The weight this time was 400 jun. Before preparing, the prince looked at the direction of the great emperor, and the queen said, "Mother, father, you two have given the child god a body that can withstand such great strength. The child god will later try to take care of his body properly." The image of the iron dumbbell appeared to the sunny sky. The gods started whispering to each other about Wang Yang's performance. Prince Jinyang is crazy, 400 jun. But struggling with iron every day is not normal madness. Sweat began to fall all over Wang Zi's body. The tendons on his body began to rise en masse. The prince thought that if he didn't lose weight, he could lift his weight to more than 400 jun, but now his body is also very heavy. Immediately looking down at the belt that the prince brought to wear for him, the prince continued to think, now there is a belt that he can be a little more comfortable, but still, this is a very wild plan. In less than 2 years that reached 1000 jun in 3 main exercises. Starting the performance, Wang Zi's strong hand continued to grip the handle of the rod that was about to be raised, along with the thought, there was no other way. In addition to sumo deadlift training, Wang's whole body arches down, creating a weightlifting preparation pose. When I started lifting, my eyes were a little panicked because this dumbbell was many times heavier than a normal dumbbell. A very strong force put all the strength into the arm to lift the dumbbell, causing the force of the body to compress a lot. The heavy barbell is gradually lifted little by little, every now and then a little higher than the ground. Looking at this, the color of the real pants all turned pale with a face gaping in surprise. Okay, that heavy lump of iron that can be lifted with just the strength of one person. The dumbbell was lifted quite far across the ground with his strength. Prince Jinyang. The hands are all blue tendons and muscles that make others look at them scared. It was not unexpected, but it was completely unifying from the ground that fit on the strength of Prince Jinyang's hand. In the sunny and windy scenery, Prince Jinyang finally lifted weights with a huge amount of weight. His muscular body stood in the bright golden sunshine. His hands from trying to lift weights were bleeding. His mother, when he witnessed this scene, immediately fell on the prince in panic and exclaimed to the sky. The prince anxiously picked up his mother and called his mother. His Highness sitting next to him also became shocked by what was happening down there. Prince Jinyang lowered the weight into the beam. The ground, because of the weight of the weight, became cracked. The crack in the earth floor was spreading, indicating that the weight that Prince Jinyang had just lifted was really heavy. The air around him suddenly became calm after his lowering of weights. The ministers all eyed the letter O and mouthed the letter A, speechless at his strength. His mother became trembling. She stood up and, without saying a word, Her Highness looked over and called out to the royal consort. Prince Jinyang was also slowly getting up after putting down the weights. He raised his eyes to look. His mother walked up to him and, taking his hand, he called softly. His palm was deeply wounded from holding heavy weights continuously. His mother lamentably said that because he held these iron bars before the past 2 years, his hands became like this. What filial piety! His mother tearfully said, I have never seen filial piety more than this. Your mother cried and said, I couldn't hold back my tears when I saw you train your body to this extent. The palace maids, when they heard his mother say this, could not hold back their tears and exclaimed to the royal consort. She went on to say that the martial arts practitioners sometimes showed off their abs, but, not expecting your muscles to be so obvious, the ministers exclaimed to see if each muscle was visible. Your Highness said that, you has proven the method of healthcare, or also known as physical training. I have worked hard a lot. Your Highness went on to say something I would like to ask. What is the purpose of the healthcare you are undertaking? Prince Jinyang looked at His Highness and said that having a healthy body given by his father and mother was the motivation for him to train himself. Your Highness says there is a perfect body, that lifting 1000 jun, 600 kilograms, as you do today is taken as the standard. If that is the case, I am concerned that physical training will put pressure on those who are not strong enough. Prince Jinyang replied that it wasn't really like that. The reason why he started physical training was to get rid of excess fat in his abdomen. His strength only increased naturally during training. He clenched his fists and said after 3 months, the limbs began to move more flexibly, and the feeling of fatigue completely disappeared. Your Highness nodded and said, yes, I know that you have written a book with the prince. I will read it and analyze its pros and cons. His Highness said I would discuss with the ministers the physical training in the palace. Prince Jinyang heard this, and replied with joy to His Highness's grace. Your Highness continued, I am not satisfied with the title of Prince Jinyang. You have achieved much by inventing healthcare, taking the first letter Su in Suyangbu. Suyongbu is the old name of Haeju, Wamha Province. His Highness decided to take the name Prince Suyong. The moonlight illuminated the night at the palace. His Highness put his hand on the book and said it was indeed a special book. His Highness said that although it helps a lot, I still don't understand when you got this knowledge. The child god also felt admiration many times when reading this book. The child god simply wrote a book explaining Yu's methods of muscle training. His Highness said that unlike other books, there is such a thing as a diagram at the end of the first book. Today I will only check this one. His Highness read the book while secretly thinking that the bodily changes in eating habits observed through the maturation of children in the poor neighborhood of Gaichin, the collection and analysis of data when making policy decisions are exactly the same. According to the book, if cooking rice with 1 mal of rice, about 6 kilograms, mal is the unit of measurement of rice, cereals, liquids, flour. Adults can be full for 10 days, children can be full for 20 days. On the other hand, overeating will become obese. If the child eats a glass of sesame oil every day, the body will be full of energy. On the other hand, if he eats too full, he will gain more than half a pound in a month, so he will be overweight. His Highness rubbed his big belly and thought to himself, overweight. Morning at the palace. Prince Suyong saw the prince and asked how things were. What did his father say? The prince said it slowly. Prince Suyong was anxiously waiting to see what the prince would say. The prince smiled happily and said his father said that he would also learn how to train physically. Prince Suyang's bright eyes said truthfully, Wang Yang. Prince Suyong pointed behind his back and said happily, as you can see, everything is fully prepared. He has fully arranged the weights and training areas. Prince Suyong took the dumbbell and said that today is the first day, so I will instruct His Highness how to do it. But His Highness said that since there is a lot of government work to be done now, we will discuss this later. Prince Suyong said in bewilderment. He thought to himself what this was. His Highness's eyesight was getting worse and worse, to the point that he would become blind in just a few months. His Highness told his servants that I was a little tired today, brought me a plate of malt. He secretly thought of a saying like this: the most difficult thing is to go to the gym. If the great King Sejong does not come, then let the child god come to him. Thinking about it, he immediately took all the necessary equipment for training to His Highness. The prince who followed said, "You, wait for me to come along." The ministers kept saying, "The great prince, what is this?" Grand Master Li Sukchi said that there are certain things to do in the palace, but there are also things that must not be done. Please get up quickly. At this time Prince Suyong is stripped naked in the upper half of his body and kneeling in the sun in the middle of the palace. He said seriously, "If you can drive me out by force, do it." The ministers tried to pull him to his feet and said, "Prince, your Highness will enter the palace soon, don't do that." His Highness came in and asked loudly what was going on. Both he and the ministers respectfully bowed to His Highness. His Highness said angrily in broad daylight, "What is the commotion in the palace? Don't you know how to save face?" Prince Suyong spoke up to his father, and he had something to tell him. "Your Highness said that about the matter of physical training. I have read it. I will definitely try it when I have time." The ministers looked at each other and chattered and seemed bored with what His Highness just said. Prince Suyong replied that he was very grateful for his attention. Nevertheless, he looked at His Highness seriously and said, "When it comes to physical training, it is extremely important to start today and do it regularly." Prince Suyong and His Highness seemed to be fighting eyes. "You want to tell me to start training today? Your Highness is stubborn to say that I said I was busy." His Highness narrowed his eyes and said, "Suyong, you suspect that I am sick, so you made me practice right away." Prince Suyong replied that he had begun to see signs from him, with the whole room better than cure, father. His Highness looked back and said to Yang Hongsu, "You quickly tell me what symptoms I have." The doctor replied that because the king is busy taking care of his subjects, he sweats a lot, also called Hanwu, the sweat of the king. You just need to drink a lot of water. He secretly thought there was a reason why Sejong the great king brought his benders here. His Highness said, "You have heard, isn't my health very normal?" He secretly thought he had read the diagram written in the physical training book, and began to think seriously about his illness. Except that he didn't want to exercise. His Highness hated exercise. He decided that he had to launch one last move now. He said the child god thought his father's disease was Sogol's disease. Sogol was diabetes and the like. He said the child god tried to make his body a state similar to that of a diabetic. His Highness and the bender were both startled to utter something. Prince Suyong and the Crown Prince both looked at His Highness. The prince suddenly exclaimed. The prince thought to himself, when Prince Suyong said that he had tried to make his body in a state similar to that of Sogol. His Highness exclaimed in a panic. He said Sogul is a disease that causes oxygen in the body to accumulate and destroy the body. Candy or sugar is also used as a medicine to replenish positive qi. He slowly explained to his nervousness, eating too much gummy malt or malt candy would result in temporary diabetes, the result of trying to be diabetic this way. He said that he made the child god so thirsty that he drank a whole bucket of water, because he was too tired. The child god's eyes darkened and the child god fainted on the spot. His Highness was shocked and stunned when he heard what Prince Suyong had just said. He said these symptoms, not very similar to those of his father. He thought to himself, of course, trying to make the body a state similar to that of a diabetic person is a lie. I simply tell what I know about diabetes in modern times. He secretly thought that it was all just to convince the great King Sejong, so this was a completely reasonable lie. He even accidentally deceived the great king. The prince glanced at him and secretly thought, when did this little Prince Yu finally end? His Highness said, if I started training like a leopard, how long can diabetes be cured? He replied, about 6 months. His Highness said. His Highness decided that if nothing changed after 6 months, I would be found guilty of deceiving the king. He calmly replied, Father. He said his father, who should ride a little faster. His Highness thought wearily that if he had to ride this fast, his body would be turned upside down. When he saw that his Highness intended to give up, he shouted to his father, who must not bend over. Your Highness said these words, those words again, just bending down a little or already reminded. You tell me to straighten your back, father. Your Highness secretly thinks how long I have to continue doing this. You said, father, it's been over half an hour, so we're temporarily over here. Your Highness is glad to say, great, it's finally over. He said to move on to the warm-up exercise. This sentence was like lightning striking across his ears to His Highness. His Highness lifted the barbell and said 1 or 2, 1 or 2. Prince Suyong roared angrily and sped up. He told him to exhale when he used his strength and inhale when he relaxed. His Highness gritted his teeth and said, too tired, huh, I see. He said it's okay for you to do this about 20 times. Pay attention to your breathing. Remember to pay attention to the width of your legs. Don't tilt your upper body forward. Your Highness seems to cry. The servant said, Your Highness, it's time to dine. Your Highness replied, oh yes, hurry up and bring it here. In front of His Highness were all dishes in meager quantities and frugal. His Highness slammed his face at those dishes. His Highness ate while secretly thinking about the texture of rice. What is this? This straw-like creak is horse food. His Highness slammed his spoon on the table and shouted obnoxiously, Is anyone outside? Call the colonel right here for me. The servant bowed his head and replied, Yes, Your Highness. Your Highness shouted where the colonel was. His Highness angrily ordered to hurry up this table, and bring me the usual table of food. What an obnoxious joke that. The servant did not know what to say in this case. Your Highness messed up the casserole in the soup. Why is there only tofu and radish slices? There is only one meat dish without any fat. I can't accept it. Prince Suyong slowly appeared behind the door. The door gradually opened. Prince Suyong heard more and more clearly His Highness's complaints. His Highness shouted at these things to throw all these things to feed the horses. How embarrassed. Prince Suyong appeared with a frightened expression and said he didn't like to eat rice, father. His Highness was startled when he saw Prince Suyong coming. He said that these good benders were specially made for him. He explained that to control sugar levels, so both malt and honey are eliminated, trust the child god, who will not gain weight. This brown rice keeps people full for a long time and tofu is a great substitute for meat. His Highness angrily shouted, how could I get rid of all such important spices? Prince Suyong said steadfastly, Father, don't we have a contract, who must absolutely follow the instructions of the child god for 6 months? He speaks as he knows. In the discourse it says that the prince regards promise as life. He looked at His Highness with eyes that seemed to burn with fire and said that he was even willing to take all the family members with him to live a life of exile for the rest of his life if after 6 months the training did not work. But his father could not keep his promise in just 6 months. His Highness was frightened by this attitude of his. His Highness immediately ate the rice in tears and said, well, His Highness secretly thought why this little prince had naturally become so harsh. His Highness's room at night was still lit up. His Highness is sitting down to write something. His Highness carefully wrote one word at a time. Your Highness said that since I have moved the wrong palm, you should send it to Jojiso to make a new one. His Highness's servant standing outside answered me for obedience. Jojiso was the manager and in charge of paper production during the Joseon dynasty. His Highness shakily picked up his pen and thought to himself that he had practiced so much that he could not hold a palm tree now. Every day His Highness still works hard to train his body under the strict guidance of Prince Suyong. His Highness secretly thinks that it has been 2 weeks since he started physical training. This means His Highness's stomach rang in the silent room. His Highness ordered if anyone was outside, "Bring me dinner." A figure outside the door appeared. Someone glared at His Highness through the slit of the door. This startled His Highness and frightened him. His servant said sorry for disturbing His Highness, for he felt so quiet that he thought something had happened. His Highness finished speaking and then walked away. He thought to himself that now you almost always appeared in his dreams. The candles are out. His Highness lay on the bed thinking about training so much that I couldn't concentrate on government work. If I didn't make a deal with that little Prince Yu, there was no way I could stop practicing right away. Moonlight illuminates the clear sky of the night. There were 2 servants standing guard in front of His Highness's room, who looked at each other questioningly. They secretly said, "It's no big deal, didn't His Highness tell us to leave the palace and then snore? Just 2 weeks ago, he was constantly wondering, couldn't breathe." His Highness seemed to sleep very well and snored evenly. His Highness was training with Prince Suyong in the palace. His Highness's body was much whiter than before. Everyone was glad to see the obvious change from outside and inside of His Highness. While dreaming, His Highness smiled involuntarily. It has been a month since Sejong the Great King began his physical training. Prince Suyong opened the door and said if anyone was here. He looked at the man sitting on the table and thought to himself that he was sleeping. He looked at the wooden effigy on the table and thought to himself what else it was. The other man said, "Hehehe, how does my second child look? Oh no, I already have my second child, hehehe." He got up and said, "Wait, I was married when, in 1434. He laughed and said, "Wasn't that the time limit for the celestial sphere, bastard, hehehe." He trembled and said, Hi, Your Highness, Our Highness, if you finish repairing this time, you can go home." "No, it's okay." He suddenly glared and laughed out loud, hehehe. Why did he know that it would be? Wasn't it because he was his lower god? Prince Suyong was stunned by what he muttered. Where did he say it wrong? Oh my life, hehehe. He let out a breath. He said, "Thank you for Your Highness's grace, hehehe." He stood up and turned his head to look, then exclaimed, "Hehehe. It's the great prince, when did you come from?" He said that he was really sorry for letting the prince see this. "What is the matter with you coming here?" He is Daehagun Jang Yongsul. Daehagun Jang Yongsul started out as a farmer but was promoted quickly, a true genius who rose to the rank of triumvirate. As an inventor who made many contributions to the development of the Joseon dynasty. He is the one who is mentioned as an outstanding inventor in modern times. He thought to himself, but, looking at this look felt different from his own. Do you think inventors are all like that? The method of understanding literature. You draw a decree and say, "I want to make a machine." He said this was His Majesty's decree. Daehagun Jang Yongsul stammered and said, "Decrees, decrees, decrees." He roared. "Do you secretly think you said something wrong?" You reassured Daehagun Jang Yongsul that come on, calm down. I haven't even opened my mouth to say the main problem. He knelt down in anguish. He said, "Do you know about the healthcare method called bodyweight training? Calm down." Daehagun Jang Yongsul sniffled and said, "Who knows?" He also clearly saw what the image of the prince looked like at that time. He replied that it was really wonderful. He said, "If so, I will tell you quickly. His Highness has been practicing lately. The problem is that it is getting cold and I cannot go outside. I need to prepare for the coming winter." You say creating a machine doesn't have to go outside. I mean to create something like walking in a field in a room. Daehagun Jang Yongsul thoughtfully replied, "Because this is a device that has never been built, so it takes a long time to understand it. There is a mountain of work delayed, so it will be a few years before we can complete it." He looked at him and thought to himself that even if it was Jang Yongsul, recreating the modern treadmill would be a difficult task. He said if it took that long we would have to find a better method. We also suffered from the terrible pain of moving our limbs. He said, thinking that His Highness would have to endure the same pain. "I don't know when His Highness will be able to use the treadmill." Daehagun Jang Yongsul replied so miserably. He said physical training wasn't a way to keep his body healthy. He massaged the shoulder and neck of his neck and said, "Don't say that. The higher the level, the more bodyweight increases." He told me how many times my limbs ached badly and vomited from being upside down. Now thinking about how I shivered at the time. Daehagun Jang Yongsul thought to himself, if he trained his body with this treadmill, would it be so painful? He forced a smile and said that he wanted to refuse, but He shrugged his shoulders and said honestly, since it was a decree, there was no choice but to make it quick. He walked away and looked like he was going to cry. He said, I'm going to design the drawing right here so you come along. He saw that and asked, didn't you just say it would take years to do it? Daehagun Jang Youngsul said that if made of wood like in the painting, it will quickly break. If made of iron sheet, the weight will be 10 times heavier. He said that even moving this treadmill is very difficult if we do not have a healthy body. He finished painting and said why he thought this was its shape. He rubbed his chin and thought to himself. Prince Suyong said, well, it must take 1 month. Daehagun Jang Youngsul replied that if it is not elaborately decorated, just 10 days will be enough. You suddenly exclaimed that it only takes 10 days. I heard that you have a lot of work to do. He replied, because the decree is only a very strict order, why should you try to do your best? He remembered His Highness's terrified expression when he was angry. Then he sat down at the table and told the prince to trust and entrust it to His Majesty. 10 days later, the prince stood next to Prince Suyong and looked at the large object in front of him. The prince said that this is called a treadmill. The prince touched the treadmill and said how lucky he was to be able to continue training in the palace even in the middle of winter. I felt very uneasy because this was the first time for his father to use it. Prince Suyong replied that there is no need to worry, Wang Ying, you have already tested it before. The function is no problem. You have already tested it in fun, and how much can you say? The prince said that if everyone here is like you, how good it is. The father has not learned to practice bodybuilding for a long time. If ordinary people do not regularly train their bodies to use it first, we will feel more secure. He suddenly burst out laughing, just in time to come up with someone so suitable. The prince laughed and said, what you were telling me, don't joke like that. The prince looked at Prince Suyang's strange expectant expression and said, I don't know anything, I don't like sports exactly like my father, you. The prince ran the treadmill in tears. He shouted, can you stop now? It seems that an hour and a half has passed since I came up here. Prince Suyong replied that now only the first 15 minutes have passed, there are 15 minutes left. The prince asked if he meant that the time had stopped passing. The prince shouted, why do I have to practice even pressing weights on the bench? Prince Suyong replied happily, it was a pity to have a great body, but he did not work hard to maintain his physique. Only 3 more times, he only needed to lift up 3 more times. The prince was crying and trembling and said he was going to kill me. How could I raise it 3 more times, from 12 to 15 times? Prince Suyong said your muscles are saying it. You can do it 3 more times. The prince gritted his teeth and sighed. I will send 4 officials on the mountain down to teach you how to count. The prince said to be honest. The prince put the weight on his shoulder and said that he told me 12 times just now, but don't you intend to deceive me to continue to increase the number like when practicing weight pressing? Prince Suyong stood behind the challenge with an extremely cutting smile. He happily said that your calculation is to look at your muscles and change. If you do the right posture, the absolute number will not increase. Where in the world is that calculation? The prince staggered and said, Prince Suyong said his knees were relaxed, come on. The prince tried to hold on. Prince Suyong said his back was tilted forward too much, come on. The prince wept and begged you, please go back to the gentle image of the old days. He leaned close to the prince's ear and said that because of his brother's health, he could accept that he had become an evil demon. The prince looked at his disciple in fear. Prince Suyong said that now he can also participate in bodybuilding training with his disciple. The prince heard this and shouted, what, oh my god. The murmur echoed throughout the palace. Prince Suyong was instructing His Highness to train with the treadmill. He said that now there are only 15 minutes left. He secretly thought that at first, Sejong just needed to run a little to run out of breath. But now he is much more comfortable. He has done 12 weight presses the first time. The condition of this family is really different. He looked at Daehagun Jang Youngsul and thought to himself that this was Daeogun's great merit. He secretly thought that with the technique of this era, there is nothing better to run. Daehagun Jang Youngsul seriously took notes and said that it was all thanks to the prince. He secretly thought that because he had to find an improvement point, he asked him to definitely let him observe the actual training from this machine. He glanced at him and thought to himself, Jang Youngsul. He thought to himself that apart from the image of history, he thought he was a very different genius. He and Daehagun Jang Youngsul looked at His Highness who was eagerly training with the treadmill. He saw that Daehagun Jang Youngsul was indeed the best inventor in Joseon. He raised his ears to hear His Highness's gasps as he practiced. He was so happy that he had tears in his eyes. Prince Suyong secretly thought that he was not an ordinary responsible person. The courtiers in the palace gossip. It seemed that during his time with His Highness, I felt that the more emaciated he became, yes. They said I was worried if he was sick, that's all. They said that after physical training with Prince Suyang, His Highness was very tired, but the imperial court and the palace of course could not be pushed back. They continued to talk that if there was a new field, they would have to memorize it to satisfy His Highness. It was Prince Suyang's joke. The prince's servants looked towards them who were chattering and said that the people over there seemed to be discussing something. Your Highness, because I was afraid that His Highness was worried, I did not dare to say this, but I saw that you might be replaced. In less than 3 months, his ivory jade body had become emaciated like this. The prince said, don't say such words, just like you, I am starting to train, so in a short time I have lost excess fat. My father also went through the same process. The prince's servant said, but isn't Sogol's symptom also rapid fat loss? The prince replied. He continued to talk that of course I can't believe it, if the health care method is considered good for the body, on the contrary, it is hurting my own health. Today I will advise my father to stop practicing bodybuilding. His Highness stepped forward calmly and asked what was so noisy. Everyone turned to look, and the prince's servants exclaimed. The gossip who had been buzzing earlier was now anxiously saying to His Highness, Your Highness is now different from before. You look much more muscular and divine. Your Highness seriously said. I asked what was so noisy, followed by Prince Suyang. A man dressed in red walked in. God, the two gods were amazed to see who the person who entered was. Your Highness, the other lower gods also shouted. What's so noisy? Sejong majestically entered. The imperial temperament around him made him even more noble. Behind him was his young son, So Jang Yu. Let us end here. The lower gods, who were arguing now, are now as frightened as quail. It's over, Yu Ah. An official turned to look at the young man who had just walked up behind him. The ministers had spread that his father's change was a sign of decline. The official said as he looked towards His Majesty. You don't have to worry, he comforted them. According to the records of the internal MP, who continued to sweat profusely, but the amount of water people drank decreased instead of increasing. However, those symptoms are indeed signs of dehydration. An old official standing next to him worried, so Jang Yu shook his head in rebuttal. Only half passed in about 6 months of weakness. He just waited and watched, his muscles could not be betrayed. He used a firm tone that promised. Sejong was standing in front of the houses, the sun shining on the figure of the majestic king. In the midst of the snowy sky, a calloused hand reached out to catch the snowflakes. Time passed so quickly, he looked at the sky and exclaimed. The time that had passed in modern times was now like a dream he had just experienced. Aren't you a great army? A figure stepped forward and said. 2 of them, face to face in the white snowy sky. It looked like 2 beasts preparing to rush into battle. Today he arrived before dawn began to flash, and the official closed his eyes in exclamation. Ambassador Heian arrived so early, he asked in surprise, but there was a spark in his eyes. Haven't your Highnesses been constantly talking about fatigue lately and your views on politics are decreasing? Heian said in a serious voice. I came here to ease your Highness's burden. It's really hard, so Jang Yu said with a smile. Ambassador Heian and I have the same heart to protect your body, so luckily the devotion is the same. Not knowing if he intended to train with him, he offered. It's a pity that there is such an important task that there is no time for nourishment. Heian gracefully refuses, as a food eater of the country, so he only thinks about his own safety. As for my work, although I don't know as much as Ambassador Heian, if I carry out a 1-hour physical examination, the remaining 11 hours will be more focused on work, he said, amid the snow-white scenery that erases the footprints of the 2 of them in the snow even more prominently. It could also be the other way around, since 1 hour could ruin the work of the other 10 hours, Heian said as he exhaled. Seeing that he didn't say a word, he turned his head away and said, I just hope your Highness is resolute. His footsteps stepped heavily into the snow. Heian turned his head and walked away. Now it's almost. Nearly 6 months have passed since he grew up, so Jang Yu listened to his words and pondered. The minister, who investigates the unwarranted conduct of office holders and holds them accountable, has a building facing east. Old-fashioned styles, rumors that can incriminate high-ranking officials, someone's hurried footsteps make clamors on the floor. Without confirmation, without relying on the policy, a pensive grand official walked past the other subordinates. They just followed the rules that were the object of horror in the eyes of the officials sitting together at a long table, as if they were discussing something. Finally, tomorrow is a milestone, an official spoke up. Now he had to stop his decision. The official standing behind an annoyed official who blackened his face and advised, "Your Majesty." The officials fell to their knees and begged His Majesty and a representative to speak. "What's wrong with you coming here so quickly?" Sejong stopped his weight training and took a handkerchief from the servant and wiped the sweat. "Please stop with training." The official looked at the pile of weights next to His Majesty and begged. All academics can take a long time to grasp. In contrast to each other, the circumstances are different. Your Majesty, politics is more important than anything and training is only a small thing. The words of the great god made Sejong think thoughtfully. "I have never neglected politics because of bodybuilding," he told the minister, but he seemed to persevere in his desire to persuade him that the monarch should set a level to set an example for the ministers. "The strange learning is against principle," he said persistently. The phoenix trees bloomed red. Sejong didn't say anything. "That's Ambassador Hyun's problem," he said. "Sometimes putting too many rules can be a way of showing sincerity, not knowing if it's a challenge for the king." The officials who heard the king's words trembled. Sejong said solemnly, "Principles are principles. In fact, the reason we learn to practice is because taking care of his body so that he can become an exemplary example in the important ceremony." Sejong's words made the lower gods feel astonished. "It is not too dangerous," said an anxious official. "The law is the system that the crown prince has established. If a person who is not proficient in riding a horse may face danger." Seeing that someone has spoken, other officials also begin to speak. "Archery from horseback even for young people needs at least a year to master. If so, then I will keep the arrow next to me to avoid the risk of accidents," Sejong said solemnly. "If there is any discomfort in posture will definitely not advance, so don't worry." "Oh, but," someone wanted to say, and the king interrupted, "All right. If you set an example during an important ceremony, it will prove the effectiveness of the practice." Sejong turned his face away and said in a low voice, "So at that time, you guys also do half of me." The king's words darkened Hyun's face. Knowing that he had touched His Majesty, Hyun said tremblingly, "His Highness's feelings were vast." On the morning in Chirwan Gangwon province, soldiers lined up neatly, surrendering flags representing the flying country. "We will personally inspect the ranks in this archery session," Sejong in red on horseback solemnly said if everyone next to So Jang-yu was smiling. "Let's all move according to the previous precedent and act," the soldiers solemnly obeying the emperor's orders. "Let's gather into one and start acting." "Understood." Sejong waved his hand to direct everyone. "Yes, Your Highness," the soldiers replied in unison. Is it possible that the king had to act so quickly? The soldiers confusingly discussed with each other. "I have been in the army for many years, but have never seen such a scene." In the previous battle, he didn't just give orders from above. They remembered that Sejong had just been lying on the float and giving orders. "Then the hunt will begin. The drumming begins. His Majesty's command is given." Amidst the desolate mountain landscape, the sound of horsehooves rang out. It was worth riding with this kid. Sejong was riding a horse while having fun. "That's right, now that I understand why Taeo at the tomb told us to enjoy horseback riding." Sejong rushed like the wind on the road surrounded by green trees while thinking, "Doesn't it seem that training like this is not worth participating in learning? Even in dreams we are obsessed with the image of the king's father, with the strong way that the other man speaks." So Jang-yu presents the situation that makes him panic. Suddenly there were some strange noises on the side of the bush. The wild boar came out of the bush. It caught Sejong's sight much to his amazement. How could he clearly see things so far away? "Bring here your bow and arrow, and he commands you, and you gladly obey." "Yes, father." At this time elsewhere, a questioning official asked, "Ambassador Hyun did not go hunting with His Highness." Hyun replied that "I have my own prey, so go first." Grand Master So Young, although he kept his old assertive personality a secret, he didn't know why he had now become like a mysterious ghost. Hyun pondered, "I have not forgotten that evil nature. I am the seed of chaos that will harm Your Majesty." Originally teaching and training in preparation for war, he stared at him standing at the cliff, and in war anything could happen. No matter what, so Jang-yu didn't know that he was in imminent danger. He looked in a certain direction with a smile. Grand Army So Yang, who is the source of the rebellion that can cause difficulties for His Highness? If so, then he took the bow clenched in his hand. "Reach back and take an arrow." About to shoot, suddenly there was a cheer, "Catch! His Highness has captured the wild boar." It was a wild boar that was hit by a lot of arrows. Everyone behind cheered, "We congratulate Your Majesty." The wild boar was shot and laid paralyzed on the ground. It was already dead. Some even compared it. It was like watching the Taeo king join the battle. The people around him helped the red-armored man down from his horse. He puts his feet on the ground step by step. Suji So Jang Yu, seeing the man in red armor coming down very suddenly, asked hurriedly, "Father?" Everyone around was also very surprised to constantly ask you, Your Majesty, are you okay? Is Your Majesty injured anywhere? He opened his mouth a little. Then he laughed. This made Suji So Jang Yu very wondering and kept asking, "Father?" He laughed and replied to his son, "I've never shot a target egg. Until this age now I know that riding and hunting are so fun." Someone was worried about him and carefully reminded, "Your Highness, please take care of the body." He still laughed and answered him, "You know." When he heard the two words His Highness, the bearded Zinc sounded a little stunned. He clenched his teeth, trembling with indescribable anger. Then the bow and arrow that had just been drawn came back into the box. Then he turned and rode away. Suji Yu Jang Yu walked over and grabbed his father with one hand. "Father, please stand up carefully." He took his son's strong young hand and with difficulty stood up. He cupped his thigh with one hand so that he could stand up more easily and relieved of pain. He saw for himself that, indeed, physical training was more than just a method of nourishment. "For I have done what you think impossible, so now it is your turn to keep your promise," and the men in black who hear this have their faces wrinkled. He went on to say, "Now ye must also become masters of physical fitness." Having heard the words all answered together, "We obeyed orders, Your Majesty." Back at the palace, one pointed to the number of exercise equipment and introduced that this was the first of what he had said. It is JIK Hong Kong, which can be understood JIK Hong Kong or known as Lat Pull Dao. Do pulling exercises, strength training exercises that help develop back muscles. When he heard that his tool had been made and used, Suji So Jang Yu immediately undressed his skin to reveal his solid muscles. He said with great strength, "Well, where is it?" He stepped forward and grabbed its fist. Then, pulling down the rope with force, the solid muscles were gradually raised more pronounced. Trained to the point where drops of sweat gradually fill your back. He finally sat down and rested tiredly, stroking his hand over his boredom and breathing pink. "It has been a long time since I went back to training my back." The person behind me was also very curious with his tools and asked curiously, "How do you feel, Prince Dao?" He went over and put his shirt over his body and said to him, "I'm sorry, I'm going to check, but today is the day to train your back muscles. If you reach this level, your back muscles will be delicious. No, it will be very useful for back training." He also said, "I also learned a lot from the prince, for example, how to use motion pulleys applied to other devices." He was very surprised. "What, Jang Young Sil learned from me?" Thinking about it, this era of motion pulley technique is not used much. He also lamented this numb arm of his. He also tried to use this device, but it seemed that the armpit would tear. He shuddered at the thought of what His Highness would have to go through when using this device. But for a moment he breathed a sigh of relief. This was an order anyway, so there was nothing else he could do. He immediately opened up a wide smile to his ears. He looked at him suspiciously and asked, "Is there really no other way?" The next device is Gook Gak Tool's foot training. It seems that Gook Gak is the most appropriate. He replied, "Gook Gak is relatively easy equipment to train. Within a month it can be trained. You tell him, Daehagun, you have toiled a lot. After you have finished Gook Gak, I will convey the word to your highness so that you can rest." He suddenly refused, "No. From a slave to a court official, his highness's favor is deeper than the sea, after which he can enjoy the luxury alone. When I see your highness exercising physically, I only hope that your highness will soon recover his health and happiness." Also, the shape of the Gook Gak resembles a chair that is used when punished with leg clamping, which is a punishment for torture. Surely it will make his highness feel pain. No, isn't it? Isn't this a device that is expected to improve his health? Seeing that he thinks too deeply, he immediately called him back. "Calm down." I thought to myself, I must ask his highness to give Jang Young Sil leave. The story came to his highness's place. Everyone around asked, "Prince, how much longer does your highness need to run? He has been jogging for half an hour." At this moment he ran and turned to the soldiers and said, "If you do not run after me, that is, you violate the agreement. Do you dare to treat the agreement with the monster as just a piece of paper?" The people who ran after them were so exhausted that they sweated like water. They lamented, "Those words, utterly absurd, your highness." He turned to speak again, "Prince, thou shalt not just stand and watch the day say anything." But on the contrary of their waiting he stood there and watched the people run and laughed. "How dare anyone stop your highness?" Some of them ran to the point of anger and shed tears because they were so tired. Surely the prince wanted to avenge the storming of his house and home if not. Suddenly he unwittingly toiled a heavy lump of iron. Then falling face down on the ground with a beam, everyone rushed out to help. Mr. Japui, are you okay? Japui, that was the third-rank official in the Joseon dynasty. He couldn't hold on anymore and tried to put his face up screaming, I give up. Ye quickly follow his highness, don't be left behind. There were a series of cheers to encourage each other. Even if we had to carry on our backs, we would still walk together. But there were also those who were blacker when they had their shoes torn from running. Our shoes were torn. There were those who cried out for help, to help me. But Suji So Jang Yu remained still without a moment's movement. The only sound that could be heard was a groan, as if it was about to disappear. He thought to himself, is considered the ideal image of the Joseon dynasty. A week later in Gangmu, the home of Daesun Lee Suk Kai, there was a sound echoing from the inside out, you must go. Now what do you say? One of them said firmly, the messengers, though they didn't know what was going on, were talking about being cockroached first and exiled. The one with his back firmly with his hands behind his back sometimes said, I'm almost in my 5 ties. That means it's hard to accept new things. But now I must admit that your highness has indeed become healthy through physical exercise. Prince So Young has become a completely different person since then. Although I am unfamiliar with the affairs of the imperial court, at the same time the actions of the Yo-Jin people are very unusual. I intend to come to the school as the keeper of Hamgil Island. Tell Prince So Young, beware of the Ming imperial family's visit to the eunuch royal family. The eunuch who visited last time after trying the soap decided to order 100 pieces of soap, after which those pieces of soap fell into the hands of Wang Xuan, the eunuch of the Ming imperial family. I heard he was a hungry devil. One day I will definitely reach Prince So Young. The next day in modern times when the news that Prince So Young was a time traveler was broadcast on live television. On the Mid-Autumn Festival last year, the whole family gathered and smoothly enjoyed the folk game Seeger or Deadlift. Seeing that the grandson weighed 2 kilograms more than last year, the grandfather was as excited as a child. Mukul Joseon originated in our country. Descended from Prince So Young, the second son of Sejong the Great, that day not only developed folk games. And the first person to make soap and alcohol was also Prince So Young, some of whom have made the argument that he was a time traveler. One was Im Du Wan, director of the Joseon Historical Archives, who said that the Joseon muscle set up by Prince So Young closely resembles modern bodybuilding. From a young age, she was so talented that she looked like a time traveler, but she became increasingly lazy, causing experts to criticize her as well. If muscle Joseon is widely spread, it will not simply be a folk game, which can replace modern bodybuilding and spread worldwide. In the end, he becomes a character with no meaning apart from developing another folk game. At this time in the past suddenly Suji So Jang Yu suddenly jumped up. This surprised Li Hyang when he suddenly jumped up and stood up straight on his sweaty face, to dream of something that was so terrifying. The divine color was white. He should reduce his reading. He replied, yes brother Huang. His heart has not yet been revived by the events of the dream. What does that dream mean? There is no way in the future that I will be discovered as a time traveler. He began to wander around in thoughts he created. No, it can happen. Moreover, if I don't work hard in the future, the possibility of being criticized in the next life is great. Just like that I'll be buried dead in a pile of books. From tomorrow we'll invent a new script for Bakhtin. I recall what my father said, I'm not saying that your education is excellent, but if you have a passion for physical training, nothing is impossible. Let's do it together. Luckily because you know Sanskrit, there are many psychology books that are phonics that will be of great help to you. But thinking about it also made him a little angry. Remember the person who taught him to keep saying a sentence, he understands the mood of the child divine pine. Think about it is also very angry. Support the main yin training. But physical training also requires a lot of preparation. Li Hyong recalled the image when he babbled the sentence, Father. Yun Dong thought he was the one who came in the middle of the night. He turned to ask, your sighing habit is more and more like Dae Ho Gun. It's Jang Yong Sil. The prince put his hand on his chin and sat thoughtfully. Turning to ask, what do you think about recruiting disciples? Isn't it to say that you need a commander, coach or teacher, assistant coach? Well, speaking of that role, I think of the person whose name Ma Il-yang, although not promoted, his talent is really outstanding. That person is also good, but if there are more positions, it will be better. He said, is it necessary to have many positions? The important thing in physical training is not piety and star quality. Li Hyong said, no high position is necessary. To carry out physical training in the Eastern Palace, princes are required. He replied to the prince, if it were a prince, I would think of a person, but not to be sure if he wished to engage in physical training. What I mean here is that the man named Seo San, the third son of the dethroned Prince Yang Nyang, he was the Grand Concession, born in 1309 until his death in 1406, was a politician and prince of the Joseon dynasty. He was the eldest son of Emperor Taizong and the former empress. Although he had a special talent for literature and calligraphy, he considered himself incompetent and lacked the qualifications to be king. So he wanted his brother Shi Tong to later ascend the throne, considering it his duty to help him succeed to the throne. He realized that the ministry deliberately behaved rudely in the afternoon to show that he was unworthy of the status of prince. Conceited Ning then married a commoner wife and was finally expelled from Han in June 1, 04008. The prince of Huning Grand Army Hyo Nyang Daegun, the second brother Conceited Ning, had the same thought that Sejong was destined to become a king, so he went to the monastery. This plan was eventually brought to Korea for Son Se-jong to ascend the throne. Then Seated Ning lived a life of hermitage in the mountains here and there. After Son Se-jong ascended the throne, the relationship between the two brothers became stronger, so he often invited Ning to the palace to see Ning live as a lawyer, and died in 1462, though 68 years old. Naturally, the Prince of Yangnyang is the world but many times perversely sympathetic. He was eventually deposed and Sejong ascended to the throne. Heard that Seo San grew up acting evil just like his father. Brother, what is the matter with you calling to come here? The expression here can be understood as a cousin. This person is Li Hai. Li Xuan. Seo San Li Hai, the third son of Prince Yangnyang. Looks brighter than I thought. He assessed the person in front of him, as far as he knew that the reason why Seo San went crazy was because Prince Yangnyang humiliated his wife. It probably hasn't happened yet. The prince asked, have you ever heard about physical training? Li Hai said, yes. You know that it is the subject that you created. The great king directly introduced it to Tai Tianfu. The prince said, I intend to receive disciples to pass on this disciple. Li Hai replied, I am sincerely grateful for your noble heart. The prince turned to him and said, very well, Ma Xiaobang, yes prince. He said, we're going to stretch with the wooden stick first, then we're going to start practicing. Suddenly Li Hai said, don't come near me. That sentence made Ma Il-young a little hesitant. Li Hai said, it is good to learn physical training, but after all, you are a prince. How can you go with this lowly bat? Suji So Jang Yu looked at Ma Il-young. The two looked at each other as if they meant something or something. What are you talking about? Please sit down and execute. It was only a few minutes later that he had to hold on, carried on his shoulders with a sweaty iron rod, his legs standing. His legs were already stiff and trembling with every drop of sweat that fell straight to the ground. This time to bear it, his thighs no longer felt. Ma Il-young is still very casual and lifts a big weight on his shoulder. Don't make a joke. Ma Xiaobang, even if he lifts 6 pounds or heavier, it's not okay. He now had his body accumulated so he could only lift a mass of weights, but his body had stopped sweating softly and screamed all his coals, leaving it wrong and reducing his weight. Please. After a while he collapsed to the ground, his body without strength but breathing pink. Suji So Jang Yu said, because to carry the blood of the deposed, is it not to have lived and suffered many injustices? That injustice makes the person who gives birth to the fallen child even more unjust. Why do you behave the same way you have been treated unfairly? Li Hai trembled with her hands, sweat poured down silently, and said if she didn't do that, she wouldn't be able to live. In order to endeavor to study for something, have you been more educated than me? And have you ever participated in the affairs of the country without being promoted? I don't know if they had any thoughts in order to steal the throne. I had to live under the supervision of others for the rest of my life. To feel very frustrated because there is nothing I can do, to do anything is insecure. He stood in front of him and said, after all, the royal family can't be like that to know how terrifying the Wang family's anger is to the commoners. He cried with difficulty and said in hiccups, Ma Il-young, I am wrong, I will not behave like that later. The two of you who said that were also very pleasant and looked at him with a smile. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at the boy below. Let's learn the UIAP Movement Foundation lesson. Gong JWA. Siko from Ma Xiaobang. If the total of 3 exercises exceeds 605 pounds, I will consider assigning it to physical training in the palace. Hearing that sentence, he immediately raised his face to look at him. Physical training in the palace said. Why did he ask? Didn't the great king prove the effect of physical training on the human body? Anyone who enters the palace will have to learn physical training such as the 4 letters and the 3 sutras. The person who teaches physical training is called the commander as the coach. I need a physical training commander who can enter and exit the Eastern Palace. If not Wang's teacher, what is it called? If the disciple ascends to the throne, the people around him will still criticize the stars. Events are be interpreted as Wang's teacher. Hearing these sentimental words, Li Hai was immediately touched by it. Stuttering, to really have that chance, he clenched his fists on the tears that fell to the ground, seeping into every layer of sand. It was embarrassing, but because he was afraid of the eyes of others, he hadn't even learned the 10 sutras. He told you, me and Ma Xiaobang will help. Your Highness has approved the poem, so it will be of great help to the study of the sutra. A new clerical was placed as the principal injunction. The country's writing is different from China's, so there are many people who cannot extend their will. I feel sorry for this. So I created 228 new words. This is the letter that teaches Baixing correctly. The correct inscription of the words of the Bach nature will bring great benefits to the country. Hyo Dong's cheerful face, with an innocent smile, said, Father. Hyo Dong's father saw his son walking over and became happy, stretched out his arms and wanted to pick him up, said, Agu Hyo Dong, what are you doing here? Hyo Dong held the little yellow cat in his arms and swooped into his father's lap and said, Father, you can hold a cat now. Seeing that your son is so excited, Hyo Dong's father applauded and said, Ha ha, you are such a talented child. Hyo Dong was picked up by his father. His face became puzzled and said, But father, why do you see Jung Ho urging to lie in the same place all the time? Hearing that his son loves others, knowing how to ask his urges and laughing happily, seeing that his father hadn't said anything, Hyo Dong continued to speak. Before, he also said to save the urge, is it that the urging body is not well? The image of Zhou Ng Ho lying tiredly practicing with his bodyguard in the sunshine made Hyo Dong nod again. If he wants to exercise, the only way is to suffer pain. Muscles must hurt to develop. Hyo Dong's father carried the boy for a walk. The boy's arms, still holding a small cat earlier, walked over to Zhou Ng Ho's place. Then Hyo Dong said again, pushing the peak, every time he felt the urge to lie down, then sit again. Hyo Dong's father saw that Zhou Ng Ho put his hand up and closed his eyes during his rest. So he answered Hyo Dong. Hyo Dong's father said, It's not a big deal, because your urges come in later than others, so now even if you want to, you can't lie down. Should be Hyo Dong. No matter what subject, you have to learn it early. Hyo Dong's father thought, actually letting the 5-year-old read the document seems a bit overwhelming. Hyo Dong held the yellow notebook in his hand. His eyes flashed happily, and Hyo Dong said again, urging him to talk about this. Seeing the book in Hyo Dong's hand, urging him to say, Child, when did you become literate? Hyo Dong quickly smiled and replied. Hyo Dong said, This book was given to me by my father, do you want to read it with me? Hyo's words were applauded immediately. The urge said, Ha ha. Okay. Let's decide. Let's go this way. Hyo Dong's father looked at his son happily along with the urge. Hyo Dong's father thought, his son is already 5 years old. What does this mean? His previous life used to revolve around big and small weights. No, it was just weights and weights. The building shimmered in the bright sunshine. Each doorway seemed to be partially lit up. Hyo Dong's father thought, but now, what happens in modern times is like a dream. Looking at his dear wife who is doing hard, heavy weight lifting but still trying to hold on without letting go, Hyo Dong's father said, Now in our house, training has become a part of daily life. After raising it like a great achievement, Hyo Dong's father's wife let out a light breath and said, It's quite easy at this level now. Seeing his shadow reflected on the ground, but now suddenly quite blurry as if he was about to faint, Hyo Dong's father said, Huh. Seeing that his wife was still very normal, but after lifting the weight, he showed signs of exhaustion, Hyo Dong's father rushed to say loudly, Lady. Hyo Dong's father watched his wife's face turn pale and couldn't help but pity and hugged her in his arms and asked, Is she okay? Hyo Dong's father's wife replied with a slightly weak tone, Yes. I was a little tired. Suddenly I felt dizzy and couldn't control my body. The palace man standing beside his limbs also trembled with anxiety. The servant was stunned when she heard Hyo Dong's father's wife's words. She was also a little nauseous, hearing that a palace lady and urging suddenly said in a suspicious tone, Nauseated, don't say. After hearing the symptoms that his wife recounted, Hyo Dong's father said, This is a temporary symptom of the lack of oxygen pumped to the brain. She took a deep breath and slowly, while the two palace people behind her looked at each other with brilliant eyes, not to mention. Hyo Dong's father grabbed his wife's hand tightly, let her lie in his lap and hugged her, thinking, "It's good to have me right by my side, otherwise the lady would have been seriously injured." Father Hyo Dong's eyes became wistful, so that when he thought about everyone's training, he thought, the more popular physical training is, the more people will suffer like this. What should be done? The sky is clear blue, the clouds are also thinning but still brighten up a brilliant sky against the blue background of gentle greenery, mountains and hills in the distance. While practicing, Urjin and Wu Hyong-gong started chatting. Hyong-gong said, "I want to introduce you to this person," and then pushed to say, "Well, who is that person?" Wu Hyong-gong replied as he practiced. He said, he was the one who passed the first martial arts exam and worked at the West Door with 9 jaws, that there were rumors that he had lifted a huge block of iron weighing 150 juns, 90 kg, unharmed. The image of a man lifting a giant rock, but his face and body showed a very unusual expression. Wu Hyong-gong continued to say, after hearing that rumor he also challenged himself to lift a rock with the same weight. Wu Hyong-gong went on to say that he successfully lifted a large rock in just one time, but then fell from exhaustion. But this time failed, he collapsed and rolled to the ground. Wu Hyong-gong said, he was motionless and fell forward. After waking up, his body also changed. Wu Hyong-gong continued, after lifting the rock he could no longer straighten his back and was dismissed. Now he remembers where he heard this name. He is a talent discovered by Prince So-young after a successful coup. The image of a man wielding a majestic sword defeating all reactionaries, thinking of the scene of bloody battles covering the ground, zombies on the road. Wu Hyong-gong continued. He was the martial official who suppressed Li Shi'e's rebellion. According to the original history, this man had risen to a fairly high rank and had even been given a title, and yet was wounded. Pushing and Wu Hyong-gong switching training positions. Wu Hyong-gong was very slow, but pushing was like a machine constantly going up and down, urging to think, maybe it was because I changed history. As he trained, Wu Hyong-gong said, I heard that you cured His Highness's absent-mindedness. Paused for a while. Wu Hyong-gong continued, he is naturally a person with extraordinary health. Wouldn't it be very beneficial if you helped him? All the muscles were exposed, billowing in front of his eyes, urging him to listen to Hyong-gong's narration, but then only responding, In the simple village scene, the leaf-roofed house shimmers golden in the sunshine. A loud sound came from some drunk man. The empty wine cup was emptied and he slammed it on the table and shouted. Wu Hyong-gyu said, I hope there is no fucking Prince So-young. His face was flushed with alcoholic yeast, his breath smelled of yeast, and his expression became much more unsightly. Wu Hyong-gyu said, just because of the ridiculous rumor that made people like this. Sitting opposite Hyong-gyu, the person at the table said, you speak carefully. I heard that he taught the imperial court the doctrine of his own creation, which means that he has reached the level of the Grand Master of Military Studies. The cup of wine was slammed down and cracked a small part. The wine inside was still full. The clenched hand was covered with sinewy veins. Wu Hyong-gyu said, ridiculous. I met that Prince So-young. I will definitely ask if the prince can lift 250 jun, 150 kg, of iron over his head. Suddenly he stood up and shouted. Wu Hyong-gyu said, how can he spread nonsense rumors that make an ordinary person look this shallow, fake college? Even the dog on the street is smarter than him. And then the person at the table stammered and said, look, look. Prince So-young's smiling face suddenly appeared. Prince So-young said, not 250 jun, 150 kg. Only 150 jun, 90 kg, hiage. Just then the prince looked in Hyong-gong's direction and said, you are Wu Hyong-gong, aren't you? Talk to me a little. Following the prince's back to another place, as he walked Prince So-young said, well, this, more serious than I thought. It seems that eating more than usual to replenish his body after the back injury caused his weight to increase. The system began to analyze. Due to weak core muscles, the shoulders are hunched. Compared to the thin body, the belly is abnormally large. Prince So-young said. The weight increase along with constant riding is almost irretrievable. Standing in front of Hyong-gong is a legitimate explanation for the rumor. Prince So-young said, as far as I can see with your injury condition, starting over exercising is not a good idea. It seems that continuing to train has made the condition worse. His face was not sober due to the alcohol. Wu Hyong-gong said, so, is there no cure? Prince So-young's eyes immediately lit up. Prince So-young said, the way I have. But I'm not sure that you can completely recover. you just need to trust and follow me." Just then Prince So-young led Hyeon-gong to the gym, starting from the simplest exercises to warm-up stretches. Prince So-young said, taking his stride forward, lunge. Yohu Ryak, exercise. Mackenzie, backstretching, stick to training this way. In the thatched house the voices of the two men came out. Woo Hyeon-gong said, "Yes, I understand, however, are you sure this is the right way to train your body? Simply move your body." And soon the prince's voice also sounded. Prince So-young said, "Well, that's it, I'm sorry to tell you." Prince So-young's face suddenly wrinkled. Prince So-young said, "Even if you successfully train, you can't lift heavy things. Of course you can't get better right now, because the back of a real person has been injured for more than a year, so maybe the cure will be a little difficult." Hyeon-gong's face became suspicious. He tilted his head and asked, "It's unbelievable. Why is there no way? Why do you have to live like this and not be able to do anything? Why can't you look at her anymore?" The prince, who heard Hyeon-gong finish speaking, was a little wondering and thinking, "Princess." Immediately after that Prince So-young remembered his wife at the training session and fainted. Prince So-young thought back to what he said, "Is her lady okay?" Immediately Prince So-young's wife replied with a lethargic face, "So dizzy." Prince So-young immediately thought of something to say to Hyeon-gong. Then, "Woo-gong, I want you to find different ways to heal yourself, based on your body condition and how you control yourself." Hearing Prince So-young's words, Woo-gong immediately stammered. Why was he asked to be a Taiji? Why did he never read medical books? Even the Taiji doctors did not understand musculoskeletal well. A musculoskeletal model came to mind. Prince So-young said, "Not only people but also others have received the wrong prescriptions. I need a rehabilitation doctor who can understand the relationship between muscles and bones." Immediately Woo-gong continued with glee, "So, what a profound person. Now if anyone speaks ill of the prince, he will not sit still." Prince So-young heard this, and said helplessly, "It is better for you to be silent." In the session, people train billowing muscles, people lift weights, people stride, in the hot sky. But everyone takes them all hard to train, in a mountainous area, but the training equipment is enough. Looking at everyone's hard training, Prince So-young immediately thought, the students are also gradually gathering. Through the invention of Hangul, the body training will also be spread quickly. Just like this, everyone can strip naked and exercise outdoors. Prince So-young closed his eyes and lost his thoughts. He had to find the fabric that anyone, whether a commoner or a noble, could easily find it. Wang Zi So-young returned to the table with his wife, said, "Oh, although it is a little urgent, it is not bad." The boss heard that standing beside him. "This fabric is easy to find, so even if it is torn or dirty, it is easy to wash." Wang Yang's wife standing next to him picked up his right stomach and stared at him without saying anything. Just then her eyes looked up at the cotton and said, "No matter what, cotton is what ordinary people wear." Prince So-young immediately raised his hand to show off his muscles. His mischievous gaze looked towards the lady and said, "There are still other fabrics that must be this type. How do you feel?" The lady turned her gaze towards the prince. Her eyes became shy, her face also became flushed, and she did not utter a word, she could only stand still. Immediately exclaimed, "Oh my God, what are you wearing? This is the first time I have seen this style." The surprised lady said that. Wang Zi also quickly replied, "This is the bodybuilder-specific outfit that I have designed." Still thinking that wearing a very dark normal bodysuit but exuding the beauty of bodybuilders, he immediately said, "Well, it seems that cotton will be easy to find, can be stained." Looking at the prince's toned chest muscles, he immediately went on to say, "I chose it because it helps me function comfortably." The lady's face when she saw the prince wearing such a suit immediately flushed and did not end. Facing the prince's lady continued to speak, "Surely the noble will not be familiar with this material and will not want to wear it." Standing still for a while, the prince lady also quickly covered her mouth with her hand and said sheepishly, "I thought wrong and saw you move. It seems that this is a suitable fabric for bodybuilding." Immediately after that the prince seemed to have received the consent of the lady and said excitedly, "Of course the lady thought the same." Then the prince turned around and said to the cloth seller, "Very well, so let's make a few more sets based on this one." As soon as he received the word of the prince, the cloth seller also quickly replied, "Yes, great prince." A piece of clothing was noticed by the prince. In the mind of the prince, cotton fabric was a popular fabric frequently used by the people, so gym shirts were created. In the stillness of night in the room on Wang's desk a book was opening with intertwined writing. The prince sat on a wooden chair, his hand against his chin with thoughts in his head about his bodysuit, shouting. Wang Zi's face suddenly became bewildered and exclaimed, "This is the star body." Evening at Tanbo Temple. Under the dim oil lamplight, a man was concentrating on reading. Suddenly a man asked him, Mei Jukoan, why are you suddenly so focused on studying? The man who heard the other person ask then raised his head to look in that direction. It turned out that he was Seong Sam Moon, the scholar of Shi Shenshin, who said, It's 11 o'clock at night. Let's go back quickly. Hearing this, he stretched his shoulders and said, I was busy reading without noticing, it's already midnight. And the other person is, Shin Suk-ju, the scholar of Shi Xian. He exclamations asked, You naturally have been studying properly lately, why? Hearing Shin Suk-ju ask him this, Seong Sam Moon said, Why, being a relative of the royal family, how can you let yourself embarrass the clan? You mean referring to Prince Suyang? Seeing the name of the book, Shin Suk-ju asked curiously, Is it the Book of the Body of Body? I have read a little, the content is quite good. Then he was bewildered and turned to ask the person next to him, By the way, Dan Guy, what are you doing? Hearing him ask him, he immediately replied, This is Buwa, which appears in the body of the body. Suddenly remembering something, Seong Sam Moon asked him, Thinking about it, you disappeared early in the morning, after washing up to return. Could it be? You ran up the mountain road like in the book. You said I wanted it too, but Mount Samgaksan, it's too steep to run. Instead, I practice Miyagi, to warm up my body and drive away thoughts. I don't think that book is a good book. Apart from how to train the body, all the rest is known cassava. Then he paused, stood up and wiped the sweat from his face and continued. The book sent by the prince to harm should not be underestimated. He is Ha Wiji, the scholar of Shi Xian. Just like that, he didn't like to look at Shin Suk-ju with aversion, and Shin Suk-ju was no different from him. Only Seong Sam Moon was awkward on one side and looked at the two people in front of him. Just like that he stood up and said, Come on, you two are a little too serious, come here today, we'll discuss the new book tomorrow. The next day, when the sun has risen, illuminates everything around. In the room of 4, Seong Sam Moon spoke, You read the most books, Dan Guy, speak first. Hearing him mention him, he immediately seriously voiced his opinion. Studying exercise is not enough to appreciate the body that his parents give, the focus is to make it healthier. Shin Suk-ju on this side countered you. I haven't tried the fitness test yet, but listening to your words, there are some suspicious points. The scripture is a book containing the words of a great man. Prince So-young is such a big character. Seong Sam Moon also agreed. I also think so. Establishing a Yang name is the basic way to show filial piety. What is the reason for training the body? According to the body, illness will disappear and the body will not get tired even if the weather is too hot or too cold. We are not sure if that is true or not. It's not a bad thing to value cause and effect, but what annoys us most is that the subject uses expensive irons. Shin Suk-ju also added, saying that the body will change, but how many people have changed? Hearing this question, Ha Wiji exhaled and asked again, Don't you know? Then he calmly continued, That person was His Highness. Could it be that you, who were defaming His Highness, heard that this person was His Highness? The faces of both Seong Sam Moon and Shin Suk-ju cut off no blood in fear and shouted, How can this be? Ignoring the panic of the other two, he continued his unfinished words, After physical training, His Highness's body has changed dramatically. The eunuch said that His Highness is more enthusiastic than when he was younger. Not all the theories in the body are correct, but doesn't it make our bodies healthier? It seems to have been persuaded that someone speaks, it makes sense, but how do we do it? He went on to say, Even if you are engrossed in reading all day, you can still move normally the next day, it will also help your studies. Seong Sam Moon asked, That means, don't you want us to bring iron into the new drill temple? He replied calmly, If the situation was not favorable, ye may use stones or logs of small weight. If ye like, do it, or else you can't do it. 8 days later, outside the yard, suddenly there was a sigh along with the sound of a log being dropped. Shin Suk-ju is tired of whining, so tired, it's almost unbearable. What's good about this? Seong Sam Moon on this side is breathing tiredly. Then Shin Suk-ju shouted, I can't stand it anymore. In the time of this, we better read another book, and then he and the others just walked away, leaving him alone there. He stood there wiping the sweat from his face and looked at him. Finally everyone gave up. As for this guy who is still working each eyebrow, time passes under his observation. Yu Jin Yang realizes how physical strength changes people. So, if you regularly train physically, you will have a healthy body. A day goes by, the sun also gradually goes down. In August 1441, Yu Jin Yang stood guard over Jang Young Sil and looked around, and said happily, You have worked hard. I thought Bagap and JWA Man were difficult to make. These two guards using these two machines breathed pink. Their faces darkened. He continued, it's all thanks to your efforts day and night. Referring to this evil image of Jang Young-sil writing a notebook. How about adding weight here? Thinking of this image of him, the two soldiers who were practicing could only cry bitterly, but still had to practice. In contrast to the enthusiasm of the soldiers, Jang Young-sil heard himself being applauded, and said happily, as a subject receiving orders and perks from the imperial court, wasn't that something he should do? Then he continued, the boys in Tai Hin Fu were very hard. They even led people to check the robustness of the equipment. The two soldiers on this side were forced to train tiredly to fly, and could only sit there as if they had returned to their ancestors. Li Hyong came in from outside. He said as he went, I heard that your work has been completed, so I came to see it. Seeing you coming, Yu Jinyang happily called, Your Royal Highness. The two soldiers, who had just come out to see their grandparents, were also startled and called, Prince. Then they hurriedly said in your bewilderment, Prince, we have directly checked the safety of the device. Therefore, Prince, rest assured of physical training, so when it is not natural that you now have to take your place with the other two soldiers. Seeing that he was trapped, he immediately shouted, I can't leave this alone. Those who dare to look down on me, Yu Jinyang on this side, are happy to ponder, should I try to measure your 3-ring measurement? In the afternoon, Yu Jinyang's instruction sounded, Huang, a little more, used more force, and Li Hyong on this side was lifting weights so much that his hands were trembling. Seeing him successfully lift weights, he happily said, okay. He continued, you have reached the fitness level, you have reduced the weight of the 3 main exercises to 500 jun. Li Hyong heard you say that, it was also fun to laugh. The feeling of being recognized is really special. My body has improved rapidly. It probably won't take 1.5 years to reach 700 jun. He replied, I don't know exactly, the level of muscle growth varies from person to person. My muscles have grown steadily up to 800 jun after 3 main exercises. But then it adds nothing noticeable. He thought that he possessed the body of Prince So Yang, who had outstanding talent and had accumulated a lot of experience in modern times. Whereas the prince's brother, although he was a descendant of King Taeo, had outstanding talent but lacked experience and skills. Could it be that if you want to reach 700 jun, it will take at least 2 years, or as long as 5 years, as you said? Li Hyong on this side said happily, do you see that my arms are a little bigger? But the important thing is that it takes 2 years, or 5 years. The most important thing can also be in some other way. Then Yu Jinyang just said excitedly, Huang, practice again. Hearing this sentence of yours, Li Hyong also had to be deaf and stiff-throated. The next day, at a certain palace, Yu Jinyang sat beside his wife and asked, Lady, are you okay? Seeing her husband come to inquire, she replied, apologizing for worrying him, apparently due to food sickness and morning sickness. Sorry General Gong, but lately there is a kind of meat that concubines have not eaten. Hearing that, he immediately said, it is pork. Thinking about it, because of physical training, I only eat beef, chicken, meats without fat. Then you said aloud, you can't sit still, lady, wait for me. I'll go find the best pig for her, and then you rush out of the gate, leaving you bewildered there. This side at the pig shop, Yu Jinyang said to the boss, I will use it to prepare the dish, show me the eldest. The master heard this, and happily introduced him to a black pig, no doubt Prince, this one. Seeing the pig in front of him, he said angrily, hey, don't play with me, hurry up and bring the biggest one out here. Seeing him like this, the master was also frightened and replied, oh my god, great prince, if anyone takes out safety to joke with. Why did he put a lot of effort into raising him? Didn't he look very healthy and fat? He said, in the 8 provinces of Joseon, there is no better pig than this one. Hearing this, he thought in surprise, this is the biggest pig. Here he was, and he couldn't believe it and looked down at the little black pig that was right at his feet. In the evening outside the palace yard there was an official kneeling there reporting, he was Kim Jong-seo. The god Kim Jong-seo. Our army had defeated the northern army and was gradually advancing into the city. The king sitting on the palace smiled and praised him, Khan has worked a lot, it is almost winter, so even the enemy cannot move easily. Kim Jong-seo heard this and lowered his head excitedly, His Highness's thanksgiving. The lanterns are hung on lighting wires in the evening. On the tray of rice an elderly man and Yu Jinyang in mandarins were talking happily. He held the wine bottle and asked, can I pour you a glass on behalf of His Highness? He had no idea, of course. He told Su Yang, I have heard rumors about the prince. It seems that his appearance is comparable to that of the greatest generals in the world. Su Yang quickly poured him wine. He was too complimentary. I didn't train my muscles for archery or sword area. The old official continued, didn't the prince send an object more reliable than a bow and sword to the north? Which widened his eyes in amazement, a trustworthy object. A wooden cart in the open air is covered with a tarpaulin. The meaning of the main god is alcohol. The officers came to report. I was suspicious from receiving brandy sent from the city. They said it was an item made by the great prince, and that we should wipe the wound with some clean cotton soaked with alcohol. As a result, the number of soldiers with pus wounds was reduced, and the two of them looked at the wound that was being bandaged on the soldier's leg. Su Yang smiled in anticipation. That's why it was not allowed to use something that could rust when distilled. It was unbelievable that it could be used so effectively. The image of two soldiers sitting together under the city wall drinking alcohol. But transporting alcohol is not a good thing. Soldiers in the north often drink alcohol to dispel the cold. Those two guys drank until they were all red in the face, so there were many times when we got into trouble from drinking. Thinking about it, if you put water in alcohol it would become alcohol. He asked the old man, how did he handle this? Holding up the cup of wine, I added a very bitter herb to the wine, then. The two of them thought of the sight of the soldiers drinking and then everyone spat out. They both laughed, ha 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 ha. Even if the soldiers tried to drink it would make a strange sound and spit out alcohol. He was talking when someone came over. The old official called out to him, oh my god, Li Wan Bong bust Li Jing's name okay. Let's have a drink. He was startled, if it was Li Wan Bong. He stood by himself. Wan Bong's strength is also excellent. This time you have contributed greatly to the fight. He was Li Jing okay, but he turned his face away and replied, Shah only use all his strength for your highness. The old official laughed and praised him, a famous general at the beginning of the Joseon dynasty, famous under Kim Jong-seo. Then the old official left. Now I had to go learn that alphabet His Highness invented. Li Jing okay and Su Yang stood next to each other but each had a different expression. He glanced at him, The system is scanning Li Jing's body okay. The eyes of the fitness trainer are scanning. Excellent overall balance, solid muscles. He thought to himself, this is the first time since coming to Joseon that I have seen someone who can compare with my physique, a perfect body. Historically, when So Yong initially ascended to the throne while facing the threat of purge, he tried to raise an army by gathering the Jurchen tribe from Hamgyal Island. But he was killed by his subordinate generals. In the end the revolt failed, but he is known as the strongest figure in history in terms of strength. Su Yang was bored. Why didn't he come here? Because he had something to say. He kept glancing at him in his heart thinking, annoyed to die. If history played out like that it would be like he would die at his hands. Suddenly Li Jing okay turned to tell him, the power of the prince has been spread throughout the north. He immediately smiled sheepishly, too embarrassed. He consulted you, I am very curious about physical training. I wonder if I can visit the prince's palace. Su Yang smiled amicably and said, okay, but in her heart she was thinking, beautiful power here is a taboo of many people. Have you considered it carefully? Not as annoying as I thought. The blue sky has white clouds. In the courtyard of a house where two men were exercising when someone asked, is this Prince So Yang's palace? That tall guy made the two of them sweat all over and wonder, is this really the same person as us? Kim Jing okay said to the two of them, I have been booked before, is that Seoyok? They replied, yes. He reached out to take the dumbbell. Can I take a closer look? The guy reminded him, it's made of pretty heavy iron so be careful. Kim Jing okay picked up the dumbbell and exclaimed, it was much heavier than it looked. To that guy's surprise, he gasped and whispered in his heart, I can only do a small weight exercise weighing 25 kilograms Jun by straightening weights that this person does by rolling weights. He told Su Yang that he heard that the prince had done 3 large 600 kilograms exercises. Turning around and asking, to what extent can we do those 3 big exercises? On the doorstep of the house a woman and a son were sitting looking out at the courtyard with a voice, spoiled. Li Jing okay has the power to lift weights, edema. He lifted weights and exclaimed, this takes quite a lot of effort. The two guys next to him were surprised. I studied for 6 months but this weight I didn't even dare to dream. Then he threw the dumbbell to the ground. Su Yang saw this applause, great, for the first time in bodybuilding. You can reach 414 kilograms in a short time. In this era, if you reach this level, it is not strange to call this divine power. He sat on one side somewhat unexpectedly. He asked him, "Why are you not satisfied with the physical training exercise?" He quickly replied, "No, why have you learned a lot about how to train your body?" He heard that and laughed. "You can make a frank comment because this is a study done by me alone, so I think it has some shortcomings." His Highness said, "Prince Suyang has invented a method that can make the body perfect. It can be used in the military but—" Suyang said to Li Jing, "Okay. You mean this physical training exercise is too difficult to use in the military?" Li Jing lifted weights and explained to him, "The physical training exercise is mainly strengthening with muscles, but it seems that the muscles using weapons are not trained much." Then he left with his luggage, so there must be separate exercises for those who use weapons. He thought to himself, "I've heard about this quite a lot, muscle building just for decoration." Suyang said admiringly, "It is true that the remarks are worth pondering. Please continue." He told you, "In addition to the book, it is necessary to eat meat and exercise regularly. Whether non-general soldiers can eat meat every day." He walked away before he left, adding that the military and academia are different. Physical training is something that can only be done in academia. He walked out firmly, his physical training unrealistic. To their surprise, he said he knew nothing about the military. Prince Suyang may not be a soldier in the army, but Choi Young-jik, a member of the army, is also a reserve sergeant. The image of a six-pack muscle boy makes everyone admire. The first place we learn fitness is in the army. He made up his mind, within 3 years, that I would invent physical training exercises for soldiers. At the imperial palace, His Majesty is attentively reciting the chapter. Suyang asked his father, "What's wrong with his father?" He gave the chapter to the eunuch, who from his house wanted to buy about 100 pieces of soap, which was good news when linden trees, the raw materials for soap, were grown everywhere. The king sitting on the chair said excitedly, it seemed that they would love to see Prince Suyang, who invented soap. Although the Confucian had nothing to do with the Ming dynasty, from what I heard, he was a eunuch of the heavenly court. Suyang told his father, "Both are in our royal family. Yu was more visionary than anyone." He continued, "Let him come to the court as an envoy of comrades, father." After training was done, the man wore a fawn shirt to put down the dumbbells. The man's shirt was drenched with sweat, because he was too tired. He breathed pink. Yu Jinyang crossed his arms and stood beside him, smiling proudly. Yu Jinyang smiled and said to the man in brown and blonde, who has only started bodybuilding for more than a year and has already lifted 500 jun, 300 kilograms, and then put the teaching to next year seems feasible. The man in brown and yellow raised his face, wiped the sweat from his face, and said with a smirk, "As far as I can see, let alone teaching, even catching up with the prince to lower it is still difficult." The man in the brown and yellow seemed to remember something, asking, "Well, brother, do you remember the last time I was going to take a card?" Hearing this, Yu Jinyang replied, "Of course I remember. I wanted to get a concubine, but I gave up because I wanted to focus on physical training." The man in brown and yellow scratched his head, said, "Actually, I think I still have to take a concubine. Everyone around me is very worried because I still don't have children." Yun Jinyang was surprised, opened his mouth wide, and said, "What, there is still this?" The man in brown and yellow replied, "Yes, so I had to marry the daughter of the Hamyang Yun clan." Hearing him say that, Yu Jinyang thought to himself, in this era, it is customary to give birth before the age of 20. If you are over 20 years old and still do not have children, it is natural to marry more concubines. Sejong the Great King was also worried when he saw that his brother had his first child at the age of 23. The man in brown and yellow asked, "What's wrong?" Yu Jinyang was stunned, saying, "Well, nothing." Yu Jinyang thought to himself, would he believe it if he said that his father would soon rape his wife? Yu Jinyang said hesitantly, "Well, I have tried to predict the future based on the cycle and scriptures. If you marry a second wife, the calamities caused by man will become." The man in the brown and yellow was puzzled, asking, "Do you say that the disaster will come, not the calamity, but the human being?" Yu Jinyang asked with a smile, "Do you know what the way to prevent disaster from happening? That's the strength of muscles." The man in the brown and yellow shirt said in contemplation, "His words make sense, being broken into by thieves can also be called human." Turning to look at the woman in pale pink who was weightlifting, the man continued, "However, to give the woman a boost, there is a way." Yu Jinyang smiled, pointed at his body, said, "Look carefully, this is the martial art that I will teach your concubine from now on. Please grab my collar." When the man has already grabbed Yu Jinyang's collar, he continued, "When hitting someone, doesn't it always start with grabbing their collar?" The man in the brown and yellow laughed and said, "I have grabbed many people by the collar. I didn't intend to do this again. but I really feel sorry for you." Yu Jinyang clenched his fists, said, firmly grasping, "The martial art I invented." Then he struck down the other man's hand hard, saying, "So that you can do this." The man in the golden brown suddenly thought, "What's that?" The man yelled at me. Then falling to the ground, his mind spinning, the man said, "What's just happened?" Yun Jinyang smiled and replied, "If I press on the joint, I will not be able to avoid and withstand it. The effectiveness of martial arts has been proven very well through this, so let's take your concubine to physical training soon. Since we are both women, we just need to tell your wife." The man in the brown and yellow replied, "Yes, I know." A few days later, on the field, the woman in light pink was cracking Sosingun's knuckles. Sosingun's concubine threw up his arm, saying, "Oh, it hurts to die," said the pale pink-robed woman. This time it was her turn. Sosinguns bent the woman's arm upside down. The woman said, "I need to use more strength, Lady Yun." Yun replied, "This time, I will do it again." The woman in light pink instructed, like this. After training, the woman in light pink asked, "Do you have any difficulties while studying?" Yun let out a breath and replied, "Yes, thanks to Billion, I didn't have much difficulty while studying, but still, Billion taught me these things." The man in brown and yellow seemed to understand what Yun was about to say and replied, "I'm sure it will help a lot one day." Yun smiled and said, "I will try to learn and use it well in case a thief breaks in." The time passed until June 1442, when a servant came running in, saying aloud, "The great prince. It seems that the great army of Yangnyang is in trouble." Yu Jinyang took the book he was reading again, thinking in his heart, "It has finally arrived." The servant went on to say, "I heard that he had his left arm broken by his family, and that he had broken his teeth." After hearing this, Yu Jinyang suddenly thought, even though he learned how to defend himself, the great army of Yangnyang was still seriously injured. Then, he said, "What happened after all?" The old man who was sprawled on the chair, rubbing his stomach said, "It was surprising that Hai Seo-san studied so hard." Then he suddenly shouted, "Daughter-in-law, are you outside? Bring me a cup of tea." Yun replied, "Yes, father." Then she walked in the door with her tea, and said, "Father, I brought tea here." And the old man suddenly shouted angrily, "Damn!" spilling the tea in Yun's hand. He criticized, "You only know how to take care of your manure without caring about your father-in-law, right? You have been growing track for so long. I told you to bring me tea all the time." Because he knocked him over, Yun fell to the ground. The old man continued to scold. It was true that there was no magic at all. Then he paused, huffing when he saw Yun's water-soaked form. He was lewd, lustful, stretched out his arm to Yun, and said, "It is true that my son has eyes for choosing wives. His taste for choosing women is exactly the same as mine." Seeing his father-in-law tugging at his shirt, Yun shouted, "Then close your eyes tightly, cry, 'Father, Father.'" She stopped as hard as she could and the old man's head said, "Stop." His nose was bleeding out, his teeth were also chipped. He pointed at Yun's body, and said angrily, "You bastard." Yun twisted him, said loudly, "Hurry away from me." He angrily yelled, "Damn, you bastard." He suddenly felt that his arm bone was severed, and he cried out, "Help me." In front of His Highness, Yun was kneeling on the ground, and his father-in-law was standing beside him. His Highness asked the judge to tell me what the prohibition had learned. The judge replied, "I investigated according to His Highness's orders. In this incident, the great army of Yangnyang was beaten. The incident occurred caused serious injuries." After hearing this, His Highness said, "If so, I have something to ask. How did Yun defeat the great army of Yangnyang to break a bone?" Grand Master Yangnyang was angry, and said, "Hai and Yu, the Prince of So-Yang, taught Yun to fight. That's how to fight people." It was unbelievable that this would have happened, if the god who was an ordinary person would have been beaten to death. Yun knelt beside him, tears in his eyes. Grand Master Yangnyang said angrily, "Not only her, please punish severely those who have taught things that endanger others, Your Highness." Yu Jinyang standing beside him thought to himself, "Really, I used to say that this is my beloved nephew, but now he is like a stranger." His Highness asked Yu Jinyang, "Is it really so? Prince So-Yang, tell me in detail what happened." Yu Jinyang said, "Your Highness, it's not like that. I'm just teaching how to defend myself." After hearing the story, His Highness said, "I have heard the whole story. First of all, the method invented by Prince So-Yang was not to hit people. It seemed that it was just a way to defend himself." Then His Highness asked everyone, how everyone felt, who was at fault. The pale pink official trembled and knelt down, saying, "Our Lord Wang Wei thought." Judging by the usual behavior of Grand Master Yang Nyang, I think he may have tried to rape Yoon and should be beaten back. The red-shirted official also said, I think the head of the picture should add this section. During this mission, the Yangmyeong Grand Army committed the abuse of his daughter-in-law, which constituted rape. His Highness rested his chin and thought, shamefully. I am well aware of your actions, but there is a law in the country, and a person who commits rape will be punished as severely as I do treason. In other words, it's the death penalty. Sejong the Great King sighed helplessly, it was embarrassing. Then ordered, Yun would be punished with 20 lashes, and execute the sentence immediately. The executor replied, clearly. He rolled up his sleeves and took the whip in his hand preparing to punish Yun. The expression on the executioner's face radiated terrifyingly. Shi Yun lay trembling in fear, The whip in his hand also went up with the count, The frightened woman closed her eyes tightly. He placed the whip lightly on Yun's calf, touching her, leaving her bewildered. He raised his hand to gesture to the still surprised, apprehensive lady who looked at him and understood. She screamed in pain. Oh my God. Her scream rang out. The great army of Yangmyeong was angry at his actions and angrily shouted, Hey, that guy, what are you doing? He frowned angrily, hitting him hard. That bastard needed to be properly punished for him to wake up. Saying that, he went and threw aside the executor, causing the whip to fall to the ground, and to get out, it was useless. He picked up the whip and said, I'll beat myself. He fiercely raised his whip and prepared to strike it down. Suddenly from behind, King Sejong grabbed the whip to block his actions, stopped Wang Yang, causing him to stop suddenly. He was hard to understand, thinking, what was he doing? When he was young, in terms of strength, he certainly couldn't compare to me. He bit his teeth and nodded. No, Your Majesty, what's wrong? He continued to say, why did you do that? Are you going to let your chaotic daughter-in-law treat her father-in-law like that? The look on Sejong the king's face was angry when he heard him say that. Stop. Sejong the Great King seriously grumbled and clutched the whip. Do you want to live the rest of your life in exile? Then he let go of the whip. He fell down after he let go of the whip, He went on to tell him, the one in Hyeonrung told me never to let you into the palace, because I had pity on my brother and allowed you to stay here. Notes. The one in Hyeonrung, Taejong Li Bang won the Great King. Saying that, Sejong the Great King turned around, even in Icheon, you have done many depraved things. All the lower gods tried to advise me not to exile you further. This is the last bit of grace I give you. After saying that, he said loudly, what are you still standing there doing? Quickly put under house arrest, confined at home, the great army of Yangmyeong, obeying orders, yes, Your Highness. He screamed, but he didn't care to keep turning away. Let go of the bastards. Jun sang, you can't do that to me. Jun sang, how dare you treat me like this? Note. Jun sang, the real name of King Sejong the Great King. The last soldier murmured, Your Highness, we will carry out the execution. He said, that's enough, and Yun looked up nervously, untying her. Seosan finally expressed his gratitude, His Highness. The grace of the latter is as wide as the sea. Seosan does not know how to return this favor. I'm sorry, I'm going to prepare a new place for you, so move there quickly. Shi Yun stood there awkwardly crying. She must have gone through a lot of difficulties. Now don't worry about anything, just concentrate on convalescence. Thank you, Your Highness, thank you. So, after the house arrest of the great army of Yangmyeong, the soldier led him, but he was angry. Not long after, my second daughter, Ju Yun, was born peacefully. The weather is nice, one day, it is peaceful as usual. Great Prince, there are visitors. This is a first-time visitor, Suji asked. First-time visitor. The young man smiled and introduced himself. He asked to meet the prince. In the lower is Wiji, the lower family, descended from Jinju. Pen name is Dangye. Suji was surprised to realize, it seems that we have met many times on the way to the sage practice. You're the one who supported Sangsadogzeo, footnote Sangsadogzeo, where officials and officials rest to improve their studies. After me is Sagadoxio. Suji looked at the Wiji appraising Ly. Besides, your physique changed so much that I barely noticed. The two sat and chatted. Wiji replied, when he first started studying, his physical condition was still weak. He sat reading for a long time. His back hurt so he couldn't sit anymore, so he started to train physically. Wiji smiled and continued. At first he felt like he wanted to collapse, but gradually his body improved, so he came here to thank him. Suji waved his hand and smiled and said, thank you, I can't teach you. Wiji excitedly suggested, can you join me in the physical training with you? Suji was surprised. Suji put his hand on his chin and thought hesitantly, if it was someone else, I would agree immediately, but Ha Wiji is one of the 6 most loyal ministers. Ha Wiji has outstanding talent. The country will suffer a huge loss if he wants to practice. Suji said to Wiji, I am worried that someone with learning qualities like you, if you participate in physical training, it will be very hard. Wiji casually replied, yes, you don't need to worry. Suji put his hand on his thigh, compared to others, my knowledge is nothing special, then surely the people you are comparing are all genius minds. Suji asked again, you really want to be a physical trainer, star trainer? Wiji definitely replied, of course. Wiji said steadfastly, His Highness had already informed His Highness that His Highness would leave the Shi Sage Palace. At the training ground, Ha Wiji stood with his hands behind him and introduced himself, my name is Ha Wiji, I hope you can help. Ma Yi-yang crossed his arms and smiled and said, okay, although he is an imperial official, he still lacks knowledge of physical training. Let's watch us train and learn more. Wiji said seriously, I hope you can help. Wiji's muscles were visible, although a little shy, but logically I should still show you the results of my training. The beam, I'll start swinging first. They're surprised. Ha swing. Ha Wiji stretched out his hands and grabbed the beam in the presence of everyone. Ma Yi-yang crossed his arms without much attention. Don't try too hard. Beginners often find it difficult to do the right steps on the beam. He continued, even though he had been practicing physically for half a year, he could still only do 3 or 4. He was talking when he was interrupted by Wiji's voice, and Wiji kept inhaling the bar up and down. He winced at Wiji doing so fast and many, 5, 6, 7, 8. People commented excitedly on Wiji, well, look at his strong arms. It's not just his numbers but his swinging posture as well. 10, 11, Suji laughed excitedly. The new brother here is so talented and enthusiastic. Suji thought to himself, this will be just enough stimulation for everyone. Suji and his brother looked towards the green mountain. The disciple feels great, it is wonderful. Now if you squeeze the oil from the Bodhi fruit tree, you will get about 20,000 jun, 12,000 kilograms. If you use that as soap and sell it to the Ming dynasty, you will get a lot of silver. Suji laughed. I think I will bring something more precious than silver with me on this visit to the Ming dynasty. The disciple was surprised. What was more precious than that? Suji looked ahead and said, yes, the future of our country. Prince Suyang begins his journey to the Ming dynasty. His Highness who was sitting on the high seat said boldly, not long ago, I heard that you cured the back of a man named Wu Gong by physical training. You also cured my diabetes that even the eunuchs did not know what the exact name was. You are brilliant. I will reward you for your merits. Yu Jinyang, who was kneeling on the ground, said with a smile, thank your Highness's grace. His Highness let out a light breath, said with a smile, the physical training is very effective. I have a task for you. Before you go as a messenger, can you go to the Vizier Wan He? He asked for his resignation last month. He asked for resignation because his back was getting more and more cuffed, his eyes were fading. The situation could not be cured. There was no other way, but still, it would be good to come and see his situation. After that, Yu Jinyang went to the house of the Vizier Wan He. The person who worked in the vizier's house Wan He saw this, and suddenly exclaimed, Huck, isn't it a prince? Another servant urges everyone, hurry, hurry. Yu Jinyang stood there, stunned. The atmosphere seemed strange. In the room, Vizier Wan He coughed and said, it bothered the visiting guests by having to lie in such a place. The servant next door was supporting the Vizier Wan He and translating his words. The servant said, the prince on his highness's order came to examine his health. The Vizier Wan He coughed incessantly. He tried to say, from the age of 70, his back began to be cuffed. His extremities also weakened. It is true that there is nothing left to say. The servant next to him translated and then said, the vizier said so. After listening, Yu Jinyang said, your highness ordered me to take care of the vizier's body, but I didn't know your condition was this bad. I don't know what to do. The order was just an order. The vizier's body was the one he knew best. The Vizier Wan He started coughing again. Looking at the Go board on the table, Yu Jinyang said, this Go board is so good that he can't sit and play chess comfortably. This beautiful chessboard, if left to Wan He's eldest son, Wan Ji Shin, seems more appropriate. Then suddenly, Yu Jinyang felt something, thought in his heart, this Go board is very warm, it's like, just played chess here. Looking at the thin body of the Vizier Wan He, Yu Jinyang said, I can only say that, with this old and weak body, I cannot be cured. But instead of a cure, I have a way of keeping your body in balance. Lying in bed, the sick vizier, coughing continuously, said, "I tried my best for this old body, but unfortunately the sick body could not keep up. I can't be there to thank your highness. I will practice this method to keep my body healthy." The servant next to me was kneeling next to the bed, translating the words of the vizier Wan He, and said, "The vizier said so." Yu Jinyang stood up and said, "I also hope the vizier's health will improve well." As he was walking outside, Yu Jinyang suddenly remembered something. He paused, said, "Yes, it's good to warm the room to preserve the body, but whatever it is, if you do it too much, it will become poisonous." Even the chessboard was warmed. Hearing this, there was a look of nervous panic on the servant's face, as if someone had just played, and the vizier Wan He, who was lying on the bed, also trembled slightly. Yu Jinyang turned around and said with a smile, "Okay, here we go." On the way, His Highness went first. Yu Jinyang followed and said, "The vizier's condition is not critical. His age is old, so it is difficult to treat according to the method of the child god." His Highness said, 10 years ago, his condition was not at that level. It is a pity. If he starts physical training according to your methods, maybe in the next 10 years he can take on politics." Your Highness remembers that 10 years ago, that year, the vizier was 69 years old. His Highness told the vizier that, "Vizier, I was thinking of a policy that could increase grain production." Your Highness thought, "When I have abundant energy I should have cared more about him. If he had trained physically from his youth, how good it would have been. It would be called the centennial of the next limb as a man." Then His Highness asked Yu Jinyang, "How are your disciples?" Remembering his disciples, Yu Jinyang smiled and replied, "I have trained good disciples and are gradually seeing the results." Your Highness said, "Not long ago you must have met Kim Jong-seo from the north, right? Think about how good it would be if the soldiers in the north also had strong bodies." The red-robed official said, "I understand what you mean, Your Highness." His Highness continued to say to Yu Jinyang, "Your trip as a winter solstice envoy to the Ming dynasty. What are you going to do? After arriving in Beijing, you plan to go down to Henan?" Yu Jinyang replied, "Yes, that's right." Your Highness went on to say, "I heard that your plan is to go all the way to Nanjing and then return to sail to Hangzhou. It turns out that you have the intention of going through half of the country." Yu Jinyang said, "The greatest purpose of the child god is to understand cattle. Pigs in this era were very small in size. If they could bring pigs back from the Ming dynasty, people could easily absorb protein regardless of social status." Yu Jinyang continued, "The Chinese word yuk in Chinese always means pork. Ming pigs are easy to raise and also easy to fatten." His Highness looked at Yu Jinyang for a moment. Then turning away, said, "It seems that not only have you come to find cattle, I see that you have another purpose." Yu Jinyang thought in his heart, standing on the stance of Seozhong the great king, being away from his son for 1 year is not easy to convince. Then he said, "The dynasty is a large and densely populated country, and they also grow a lot of vegetables and cereals. The child god will collect these and will go to Nanjing to collect more documents." His Highness looked up at the sky and said, "Nanjing documents from the southern Song dynasty have been passed down through many different generations, so there are many rare documents." The eunuch at the ceremonial company looked at Yu. "He will help you on this journey. How do you feel?" Yu Jinyang politely replied, "It's good." His Highness continued, "Wang Zhen holds such power that the great officials must call him an old man. Any offer that harms his country will refuse, but if it is beneficial, he will be very willing to help you. I have never met him face to face, but I heard rumors that he is very aggressive, dangerous, and must be careful." Yu Jinyang replied, "Yes, Your Highness." His Highness turned around, looked at Yu Jinyang, and said, "Okay, Zhu Haiyon's niece is also born. Have you told this to the people in the palace?" Yu Jinyang said with a smile, "Of course." As he left, Yu Jinyang told his wife, "Lady, I will return soon." The lady was holding her child, tears in her eyes, the child standing beside her, the knob of her skirt, innocently calling, "Father, father." The lady suddenly said, "Although it is a legitimate matter, it lasts for 1 year. He has not even seen the date when the cradle will be chosen." Yu Jinyang said anxiously, "Others will hear, lady." Hearing these words, the lady said loudly, "Your Highness is too much." Yu Jinyang smiled and said, "Oh, everyone is looking at her." The man in blue said, "Don't worry about everyone at home, I'll take care of them." Yu Jinyang said gratefully, "I hope to see you again when you return." The man said, "This kid, you're taking advantage of me to go to the big guard." Yu Jinyang said with a smile, "Ha ha, can't you do that? After all, I heard that this was the first vacation of the Grand Household in 15 years. Grand Protector laughed. Haha, said, all thanks to the prince personally asking His Highness for the god, ki. The child raised the dumbbell and said, Father, this viewer, now even Hyeon Dong sees it lightly. Yu Jinyong excitedly hugged his child. Say it out loud, Yoon Suk, until your father comes back we'll try lifting it. At this moment, Yu Jinyong paused. Suddenly remembering your highness's words, from physical training methods to new cattle, documents and even grain, I am now curious in your mind what you are thinking. At that moment, Yu Jinyong replied that he had a small wish. In this land, the people who live in this dynasty, so that no one can take it lightly. The child god wants to make my dynasty very powerful. After saying goodbye to his relatives and departing as a Dongzi emissary to the Ming dynasty, Prince Yu Jinyong was floating on the sea, the waves crashing. There was a sneeze from a man in blue. The man in red standing opposite spoke. It's strange, big fat people are not susceptible to colds just because of the cold wind. The man in blue who was shivering replied, because I had inhaled too much cold air. The man in blue added, I'm sorry I'm so weak. Yu Jinyang's boat is floating in the middle of the blue sea. Prince Yu Jinyong said to the man, who followed the translator and kept coughing like this. The man replied, it's embarrassing, Prince. That man was Deputy Shin Suk-ju. Prince Yu Jinyong looked at Shin Suk-ju's big fat body and thought, I must take this opportunity to make him exercise properly to become stronger. The sails are expanding, the winds blowing through make interesting sounds. Prince Yu Jinyong looked in the distance. Prince Yu Jinyong looked at it intently and said that the land was all ready. Prince Yu Jinyong turned to ask Li Kai if the soap was moldy or damaged. Li Kai quickly replied that he had just checked. All was well. Park Hang also answered, on the contrary, the dry weather made the soap dry. When used, it also felt better. There was another man with green hair who was the squire Nam Bin. Prince Yu Jinyong clutched the side of the ship with his hand and said well. Prince Yu Jinyong smiled and said loudly, hearing that the Ming dynasty is the center of the world, let's see if it is true or not. When they arrived, the group gasped, looking up in surprise. A huge imperial city appeared right in front of them, which surprised the whole group. Compared to Hanyang, which was relocated less than 50 years ago, the difference is too big. Shin Suk-ju asked if you were sure this was done by humans. Li Kai replied that the altitude was unbelievable. It was like we were burning our faces with the Baekdudagan mountains. The eunuch who was right behind heard their conversation. Eunuch Chong Sheng laughed, the country guys. Li Kai asked the eunuch Chong Sheng when we would be able to meet His Majesty, and the eunuch Chong Sheng looked back, huh? The eunuch Chong Sheng replied that not everyone can meet His Majesty, only Prince So Yang can meet His Majesty the Emperor. Eunuch Chong Sheng put his hand on his chin in thought, letting me see what day is right. The eunuch Chong Sheng said that it was expected to be about 40 days. Shin Suk-ju suddenly asked if it would be another 40 days. The eunuch Chong Sheng reaffirmed correctly. Well, that's it. This is the tribute the prince brought. Prince Yu Jinyong asked if there was a problem. Eunuch Chong Sheng smiled happily and approached Yu Jinyong and said that I tried the soap the other day, and it worked quite well. Prince Yu Jinyong happily replied that he complimented the soap with so many shortcomings that it was so embarrassing. Prince Yu Jinyong added that I think the scent has not been completed, so this time I brought the specially improved one. The eunuch Chong Sheng asked if it has been improved, so the quantity is enough. Prince Yu Jinyong sent the person who brought the soap. I have prepared 2,000 bars of soap and brought a little more, do you want to try it? Eunuch Chong Sheng approached and sniffed. His face was full of satisfaction. With the faint scent of flowers and ginseng, 2,000 bars of soap of this kind. The eunuch Chong Sheng extended his hand to order people to retreat. It was wonderful that a rebel nation in such poverty would set such a high example. The eunuch Chong Sheng looked at Prince Yu Jinyong with an amused expression. The male king of Joseon had the appearance of a peerless mighty marshal. The eunuch Chong Sheng approached Prince Yu Jinyang's biceps, especially Prince Yu Jinyang's enlarged shoulders and muscular biceps, which resembled Zheng Jiangqian, one of the four great kings of Buddhism, which startled Prince Yu Jinyong. The hand of the eunuch Chong Sheng was still palpable, and there was a call to the great eunuch. Eunuch Chong Sheng turned around and asked what was wrong. Prince Yu Jinyang's body was frozen like a stone at this time. Shin Suk-ju answered that. Shin Suk-ju told the eunuch Chong Sheng a story that surprised the eunuch. The view moves to a small corner of the king's palace. Inside, Yu Jinyang was meeting the king of the Ming dynasty, who came from the Joseon domain, asking to meet His Majesty. Prince Yu Jinyang added, "Thanks to His Majesty's blessing." Everyone praised him. In Prince Yu Jinyang's mind, just greeting hurt all over his mouth. The Orthodox Emperor Main, with a large figure with a long beard, looked at Prince Yu Jinyang and said, "I heard that the great king of Joseon had a very outstanding son." The emperor raised his hand and said that the eunuch Chang Sheng brought the soap to me to try the other day. Indeed, the dirt on his body has completely disappeared. What is more surprising, this prince is the one who made it. The emperor added that more than 200 bars of soap must be brought here. It has already been a lot of hard work, we have discussed. In the future we will carry out the soap trade in other places. Prince Yu Jinyang was pleased to return the favor of His Majesty. The other official standing next to Prince Yu Jinyang looked at the prince with eyes full of hatred. The emperor added to step back first. Prince Yu Jinyang replied, "Yes, Your Majesty. It seems that the prince has noticed those hateful eyes. What is this atmosphere?" While Prince Yu Jinyang and Shin Suk-ju left together, their eyes became more and more intent. Shin Suk-ju asked anxiously what was going on. The officials muttered, looking at the Joseon bastards covered in the smell of urine, and their eyes were dirty. Prince Yu Jinyang was anxious to think that the people here were so hostile. There was a voice, "You finally came." Prince Yu Jinyang realized who it was. It was the eunuch Chang Sheng. Standing beside him was a long-haired white man covering his face with a fan. "We are waiting for you here." Prince Yu Jinyang and Shin Suk-ju bowed solemnly. "Indeed, the immortal name. Thanks to your grace, we can meet Your Majesty after only 10 days. Prince Yu Jinyang added that this part of the eternal descendants would like to be inscribed. The eunuch Chang Sheng smiled triumphantly, saying, "You know who this is." Prince Yu Jinyang replied that there was a great man at the ceremony hall who had resounded throughout Joseon domain, and everyone solemnly called him Old Man. The old man said, "I have heard people say a lot that Joseon's younger son is a person with a non-trivial temperament, which is true to rumors." The old man added that thanks to Joseon's soap, every day our mood is renewed. Especially this time we are extremely impressed with its quality. Other officials are also enjoying the soap. The old man asked Prince Yu Jinyang how much he wanted, and Yu Jinyang replied that depending on the ingredients, it would be different. Yu Jinyang went on to say that soap made from ginseng costs 10 mal rice. Soap made from scent is slightly cheaper, costs 5 mal of rice. The old man said that a bar of soap was about a quantity of silver. Prince Yu Jinyang replied yes. The old man asked further, "What about the method?" Shin Suk-ju frowned and thought that it was really brazen. 2,000 bars of soap is not enough, and he wants to annex the way to make it. Prince Yu Jinyang replied that soap making started from the ingredients in Hamgyal Island, much to Shin Suk-ju's surprise. Old man smiled and said that you can easily tell me, it is Joseon's main export. Prince Yu Jinyang replied that he could only do his best as a subject of the domain. However, after the issuance of the sea ban, the catch became less and less. Shin Suk-ju breathed a sigh of relief. The old man said to Prince Yu Jinyang, "In Joseon you have worked hard to make soap." The old man asked, however, if you could increase the weight of the soap and make as many cents as you could. Prince Yu Jinyang replied happily, "I know how much you want to do." The old man said 10,000 bars of soap, surprising Prince Yu Jinyang. The old man added that the quality was not changed. The weight increased a little compared to the current one. The old man's words made all the other eunuchs confused and surprised. The old man folded the fan and said that you also have to know who you are dealing with to be right, because you are the son of the great king of Joseon. The old man introduced himself as Wang Jin. The eunuch introduced himself as Wang Jin. The eunuch Wang Jin said to Prince Yu Jinyang, "I am glad that the transaction ended smoothly. I don't know if you have any more requests. I will listen to them all." Prince Yu Jinyang bowed solemnly and replied without hiding from you, "I came to Daming because I wanted to find products to bring back to our country." The eunuch Wang Jin replied, "Wouldn't you rather ask for money?" The eunuch Wang Jin went on to say that I can immediately give you 50 taels of silver. The eunuch's words made Prince Yu Jinyang and Shin Suk-ju gasp in surprise. 5 or 50 taels of silver stars. Prince Yu Jinyang thought calmly, "Calm down, grain seeds and cattle will one day be worth more than money." Prince Yu Jinyang bowed his head in response to the thanksgiving he had personally bestowed the favor. Joseon will work hard to make more soap to send. Eunuch Wang Jin held a fan against his chin. The eunuch Wang Jin turned around and prepared to leave, which was fine. Eunuch Wang Jin left with the eunuchs around. I will make your trip as comfortable as a sightseeing. Shin Suk-ju said that. I understand why the eunuchs are so passionate about scent soap. Prince Yu Jinyang asked you what you mean. Shin Suk-ju explained that in Joseon it was kept and the eunuch Daming had to be cut off. Prince Yu Jinyang panicked and exclaimed the pervert. Shin Suk-ju further explained testosterone no. Losing masculinity makes it difficult to exercise muscles. Prince Yu Jinyang replied in disbelief now that muscles are important. Shin Suk-ju said next to what he heard, they urinated incontinence. Shin Suk-ju continued, so there was always a smell on his body, and the image of the eunuchs of the great Ming around him smelled. Incense bags or absorbent towels also have no effect on the smell of apricot either. Every eunuch emits an unpleasant smell that makes everyone passing by have to cover their noses. That's why they buy so much soap. The next day, the sky was clear with white clouds. There was a carriage going in the middle of the street. A man in blue asked if you were from Joseon. Then quickly introducing myself to my duties, the superintendent of ceremonies ordered me to take care of them so that their journey would not be hindered. Prince Yu Jinyang looked at the splendid carriage and said that this dazzling carriage is not just for the royal family. Prince Yu Jinyang asked if we could take it. This blue-robed person has twice the size of the royal accompanying car, don't worry. The carriage wheel was rolling on the road. Park Hang looked down and said the carriage traveling 150 miles a day was interesting. Li Kai started coughing. Can you close the other door? Li Kai exclaimed that it's there. In Daming or Joseon, the dust is no different. Prince Yu Jinyang thought that his words were not wrong. Prince Yu Jinyang closed the door with his hand. Prince Yu Jinyang thought that except for ancient Rome, there would be asphalt until the 20th century. Shin Suk-ju looked at Prince Yu Jinyang with a worried expression. Shin Suk-ju speaks to the prince. Shin Suk-ju looked at Prince Yu Jinyang who was doing a strange act, who didn't sit down in his chair and was doing something. Prince Yu Jinyang closed his eyes and said that when you come to another country, do you miss your father and mother more? Physical training is also a way to show filial piety. Prince Yu Jinyang continued. You must not neglect your parents' bodies even for a moment. Shin Suk-ju's face darkened after hearing those words. Prince Yu Jinyang said loudly, look at you. Prince Yu Jinyang looked at Shin Suk-ju's body and said thick belly fat protruded to the waist. Shin Suk-ju couldn't say anything, just yes. Prince Yu Jinyang continued, still young with his chin folded 3. Shin Suk-ju looked down nervously at his chin, huh. Yu Jinyang's words were like stabs to Shin Suk-ju's heart. On the boat you live with a cough. On the ground, your knees hurt and you can't walk for a long time. You walk a little you also sweat and gasp. You don't think you have to improve your body. Shin Suk-ju collapsed helplessly after those words. Prince Yu Jinyang stood up and approached Shin Suk-ju. I have prepared something for you. Shin Suk-ju raised his head curiously to look. The sinister-faced Prince Yu Jinyang told Shin Suk-ju that his destination for Chang'an was still 1,500 miles away. Prince Yu Jinyang lifted his sleeves to reveal his muscular arms. A feat in 12 days, you and I can do it. Shin Suk-ju fearfully hugged himself. Hi hick. Shin Suk-ju helplessly shed tears. Quadruple A, no. The time moved to 12 days later in Chang'an. The sky was now dark, with moonlight and light from the lanterns. Prince Yu Jinyang said that you have worked hard. I don't know how to repay this favor enough. Shin Suk-ju's body seems to be deficient. The man in blue closed his hands and replied to you too much. I just followed the orders of the eunuch. There was a voice from behind that made Prince Yu Jinyang turn around. You are from Joseon, right? I received orders from the eunuch. It was the prefect of Chang'an. The prefect smiled and said that you should dine first from far away and said, the table is full of delicious but somewhat strange dishes. There was a bowl of hot, tempting noodles. The food was prepared. Park Hang said things I'd never heard of. Nam Bin wondered how strange the noodles looked. One person said that dosokmyeon, noodles are sliced with thin metal sheets replaced by knives and then cooked, which originated in the Nguyen dynasty. The next dish is displayed. On the plate are pieces of meat arranged in a beautiful circle. Li Kai took a piece of chopsticks and said that the curd is made from beef. Apparently we saw it somewhere. Li Kai put a piece of meat in his mouth and said how he felt. The pork cooked with the noodles tasted great, but the beef was too bad. Li Kai went on to say that it felt like eating dead beef due to lack of nutrition, as if the farmer didn't give it food. Behind Li Kai there was a figure gathering. Li Kai continued to whine, "This dish is made of such precious meat, so tight." Prince Yu Jinyang saw the person behind him open and holding a knife. Prince Yu Jinyang quickly put down the fire. "There should be no mistake, ha ha ha. But do you find the pork tastes great?" "Of course." Li Kai laughed and said that every day I eat this pork noodle I don't know how to get bored. View of the trip to the capital Daming in Beijing. A eunuch was kneeling down to report in the room with a strange smoke. Word came from the prefect Chang'an. The eunuch Chang Sheng reported to the eunuch Wang Jin, who had received them very sincerely, and asked him to help convey the word to His Majesty. Eunuch Chang Sheng wondered, why did he bother with people from such a small country? The eunuch Wang Jin held the amount of silver in his hand and said that I did not have any amount of silver before, but was made a eunuch. The eunuch Wang Jin looked at his reflection on the amount of silver. I used to be like that, now I can arbitrarily give away 50 taels of silver. Then the eunuch Wang Jin threw the silver out the window. The eunuch Wang Jin looked at the amount of silver he had just thrown away. Then the eunuch propped up his hand and said I had waited. The eunuch Wang Jin's face smiled and said, "Josian's son, how much is he worth?" Prince Yu Jinyang looked at the pig in front of him and asked if this was really a pig. Prince Yu Jinyang continued to say that it was so big that it could be compared to wild boars, since they did not grow fangs, so they were definitely pigs. The farmer who introduced the pigs we raised in just 2 years was more than 200 jun. Prince Yu Jinyang suddenly said it was amazing. Prince Yu Jinyang asked to cut me a pound of delicious meat so that I could check the quality of the meat, and the pig turned pale with fear. Shin Suk-ju said he thought if we brought those pigs back, maybe it would be widely used in our country, but I don't know why he was worried about such good pigs. Prince Yu Jinyang replied that when thinking about bringing pigs from the mainland into Joseon, we need to find more pigs and compare them with each other. Prince Yu Jinyang further explained that if we bring all the pigs back indiscriminately, even if we share the same bloodline, we will become nothing. The street is trading very busy. In Luoyang during the Ming dynasty, the trade scene was very crowded, but in Luoyang it was as crowded as in Beijing. Prince Yu Jinyang looked at the performers over there. Indeed, the Ming dynasty, it was hard to find people doing these jobs in the city. Shin Suk-ju wondered, but what they said was something strange. It seemed to be talking about us Joseon. After all, Prince Yu Jinyang didn't know anything. Shin Suk-ju raised his ears and listened. The performer said that everyone will have the same body as Prince Suyang. If you buy it now, I will give you another gift. Shin Suk-ju said angrily, they are selling the great prince. I heard the people here say that they are selling pills containing ginseng bought from a prince in Joseon. Just eat that to be healthy. Prince Yu Jinyang was amused. Oh. Prince Yu Jinyang took off his shirt to reveal a strong body. I have only started my journey to the Ming dynasty for a month and there have been such rumors. Shin Suk-ju dissuaded Prince Yu Jinyang. The prince would be awkward if he got into trouble here. Prince Yu Jinyang smiled sinisterly and said that if he caused trouble, wouldn't it disgrace his father? I just wanted to show them his true muscles. Shin Suk-ju worried, Prince. The shopkeeper went on to say, if you take 1 pill, you will be energized, and if you take 100 pills, you will become a heavenly warrior. This is the best pill, made with ginseng that I got from the visiting prince of Joseon. He approached and patted the shoulder of the person standing next to him, who had taken 100 pills. Prince Yu Jinyang said, what if it was 100 tablets? Prince Yu Jinyang appeared to everyone's surprise and admiration. Didn't it turn out that this was the person with the most amazing body? It was the body of an ordinary person. The shopkeeper invited, I don't know where the taste came from, but just taking 50 pills will become a heavenly master. Prince Yu Jinyang came close to face the other person, that medicine I don't need. Prince Yu Jinyang said he had come to duel with the so-called celestial master, startling the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper put the medicine away and said that the gentleman insisted that he did not need to use it. Prince Yu Jinyang smiled and said that it was made of ginseng from a prince in Joseon. Dare you? You don't even recognize me. The salesman is angry. Who are you? Why should I know? Prince Yu Jinyang flexed his muscles and said that I am. Prince Yu Jinyang crossed his arms and introduced Prince Suyang from Joseon, startling the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper immediately ordered the person standing next to him, brother, deal with that guy. The muscular man immediately rushed to the prince. The two collided with each other evenly. Prince Yu Jinyang began to use his strength to repel the other. The other person started to get weak. I have a bigger body. How can I be inferior to you? Prince Yu Jinyong breathed heavily because Prince Yu Jinyong wrestled the other person to the ground. I have more muscles. The other was lying on the ground. Prince Yu Jinyong wiped the sweat with his hand. Prince Yu Jinyong breathed a sigh of relief and looked at the person. Prince Yu Jinyong said to the other two, "You guys do 1,000 pounds in the 3 main exercises and then discuss with me about the night of heaven." The salesman is scared like he lost his soul. He has already lost. The other two immediately ran away. Quadruple A, I'm wrong. Prince Yu Jinyong, who was covered in sweat, laughed in relief. Prince Yu Jinyong began to flex his muscles. This was Prince Yu Jinyong shown amidst the cheering eyes of the surrounding people, Josian's muscles. An old man holding out a piece of paper held out his hand. "Hey, can you give me some ink paper?" It is an old painter, holding a pen in his hand to draw every detail of the prince's body. "I intend to sculpt a new Buddha statue in the Longmen cave. If I take that body as a model, it will probably be full of majesty." Shin Suk-ju prevents Prince Yu Jinyong from enjoying. "Prince, it's cold, you stop." Li Kai and Park Hang are running back. "So everyone here, Prince, have you harvested anything?" Prince Yu Jinyong continues to show off his muscles. "Maybe it's still too early to decide on a pig breed. What about you?" Li Kai is a little uninformed. Li Kai talked about what he had learned. He had discovered some ancient books, but his condition was not very good, so he planned to send them back to the country first. "We have also recovered a lot of seeds, but we don't know how long it can maintain this state." Prince Yu Jinyong exclaimed that everyone has worked a lot. "No." Prince Yu Jinyong held the book stub in his hand and said that this book is not from Baekje Shinchan. Prince Yu Jinyong smiled happily. "Ha ha ha. You have obtained the item that I am very pleased with." Prince Yu Jinyong continued, "So you must show me." Guard Nanbin thinks it seems that this is the difference between Guan Wen and Guan Wu, or educated people. Prince Yu Jinyong exclaimed, "Isn't this a biography of the Zhou dynasty General Hanshin?" The prince's words startled Nan Bin. "The sun has faded behind the mountain." Prince Yu Jinyong is still excited. "Quickly show it to me." The harvest in Loyang is also quite good. The prince's people have moved to the next location. The 11th of March 1443. At Hongzhe Lake, the stop at the Great Kangal. This is a ship or a citadel. The turtle ship is one of the most powerful ships in the world and the largest watercraft used to date. Prince Yu Jinyang's party looked up. Such ships in the Ming dynasty were only one. It was used by an Emperor Jie Young Nak to form a large-scale expedition under the command of the eunuch Zheng Hua. Prince Yu Jinyang continued, "If you go to Nanjing, you must visit the shipyard that made it." Shin Suk-ju said that now I noticed. It seems that it has been 3 months since we received the order and moved by boat here. Prince Yu Jinyang replied that it has been 3 months. It turns out that I miss my family in Josian. At this time, in Josian, the weather is no different. In the palace, King Sejong was talking to Crown Prince Li Hyang. The prince, "This is the small cannon that is currently being studied." The prince replied, "Yes, your highness." King Sejong asked if this small cannon was only meant to be used to scare, which was just a waste of time and vain. The prince replied, "No, instead of a small shape, just lengthen it and shoot forward." The prince added that if a soldier carried this type of artillery with him, he could defeat the enemy at will. King Sejong replied. King Sejong said that in the north, there was an enemy who was hit by an arrow but still had no destiny, and there was also information that he killed the man who shot him. King Sejong went on to say that he wore a leather jacket that was used against those little arrows. King Sejong continued, if he used an arrow made of lead and shot hard, the leather jacket would be punctured immediately. Shi Zi took the cannon out of thought, so he was trying to find a breakthrough for the weapon Yu gave him. The wind blew through the arm holding the prince's cannon. The prince put the cannon on his shoulder and aimed. Zhang Yoingsul drinking at a roadside shop. With a sad expression. It had been a long time since he had a vacation, but he couldn't stop thinking about His Highness. He asked as he drank and asked, "Do I have any way to please His Highness?" startling the passing woman to think this man is monologue. It turned out that he was sitting talking with the little wooden doll. Talk with him drinking. Suddenly someone took the male calf and asked what was wrong with the Zhang army, and he came here. Yoingsul didn't tell the man between the two of them what to say, so roast a delicious herring and give it to him. The other smiled and replied that he would bring it right away. A while later the person brings out an attractive nursery golden herring. But when Yoingsul said that it seemed like the fish was stale because it tasted so strange when eaten, the man took the blame, probably because it was too late to salt. so the fish tasted that way and said he would bring the mixed vegetables right away. Suddenly a thought flashed through his mind because of the late salting, so the fish was stale. A series of memories began to appear. When Jinyong introduced the alcohol used to wipe the wound that would help the wound heal faster, but if the wound lasted longer than 2 days, even using alcohol to wipe it would not work. He immediately asked the other man if the herring had been left for a few days, and the man honestly replied that he had left it in the cabin for 2 days before taking it out. He went on to ask if he could disembowel the raw fish and marinate it for half a month. Then in the sea came a busy fishing boat catching each catch of fish on board. Yoengsol is commanding the work for everyone to do. The people behind are rowing, the people in front are disemboweling the fish and salting. Everyone takes the task and follows. A recollection emerges that he is introducing how he used the moving pulley he learned to make jikingkong, lat pull down. Continuing with the boat that was fishing, a man on the boat asked Yoengsol if he marinated fish that way, he would be able to keep it for half a month, and he confidently replied of course. This is also the first time fishermen have obtained the most production in more than 30 years. The man said that even catching 100 fish would fill the boat compartment, but this time it exceeded 1,000. He said that fish storage will also increase to match the harvest, if done well. Not only the dried cheese fish but the whole Joseon province can also enjoy Jaban. He thought it would be great to have greater fishing skills here to sail far. And he decided to send a letter to the prince. A few days later the decree to Prince So-yang's disciple Ma Il-yang listened to the decree. It won't be long before he plans to create a large physical training field. And as the first disciples of Prince So-yang, 20 disciples from the Moat clan and Fu Fu were excluded from the incense competition. He ordered the man to teach them how to physically train them. A month later, Ma Il-yang is saying that physical training with the prince is really good. The man next to him said that now you must understand the difficulties of the brother when he taught you. The man agreed, but when Seo Songgun taught, the disciples' eyes lit up. And every time he picked up a teaching book, not even one glance came, no one cared. The prince, seeing this, said that those who did not pass the civil service examination next year would have to go to Hamgil. Haven't those guys happened yet? Hamgil said, well, yes. The man listened thoughtfully for a moment. Then, all the disciples must go to Hamgil. Hamgil Dao, just thinking about it, felt freezing cold. Let's warm our bodies together. Ma Il-yang said in fear that he couldn't help when he saw his disciples, he couldn't help watching his disciples live hard. The other prince asked what would you do? He said weightlifting is the answer, it's for people who refuse to study. Then the punishment was immediately imposed. He questioned a man who was under punishment what he had learned all this time, could not answer. Not okay. Ma Il-yang angrily ordered another command plate. The pupil who saw this said in fear as if he knew. Ma Il-yang how each time he added a deflection to his pupil uttered what words he would add. The other student stood unsteadily in fear. The other student cheered not to lose the weight. And he also thought to himself that he could not allow himself to be looked down upon. Those who came after him wrote that it was weights, so the answer was that weights began to spread to the eightfold path of Joseon. The 4th lunar month of the Ming dynasty, Nanjing. Beijing is the famous capital, but it seems that Nanjing is more like the capital. The man in blue said that it is not still the 4th lunar month, but there are already cucumbers, in the time of cucumber cultivation. How can rice be grown? Growing other root vegetables can make more money than growing rice. Jinyong thought that the agricultural crop of the Joseon period was rice. He had to earn a living first. Joseon was founded on wasteland due to the invasion of the Japanese and the Khmer Rouge, so there was nothing else it could do except produce food directed by the nation. However, in the future our country should also progress with this image. If you come to Gangnam, you have to fill your belly with local Gangnam produce. All follow me. I want to eat and drink as much as I can with this silver, ye know yourselves. Finish the silver that is dropped on the table. The chef and Xiao Yan were amazed. They exchanged glances. Very quickly the dish was up. This is a snake carp dish, please be careful not to touch the head of the fish. This is roast pork, which has been pulled out and the big men can enjoy it with peace of mind. Sea turtles are delicious today, so they stewed a bowl of soup. The two of them had a full meal. This is the taste of the Great Main, there are many magical ingredients. Do you see, Joseon's character, this is the delicious taste of the mainland. Scrub your whole stomach. After beating the drunken cup, the prince said excitedly, there is someone you must meet. On the seaport the slave people began to come to unload the goods, Nanjing shipyard. Prince So-yong went with his close servants to the shipyard. and after arriving at the place the prince said, "Is there anyone there? I have something to say." The shipwright saw Fang Zi coming, raised his hand and held it wistfully, then immediately said, "Huh, this is the new porter, with this body, it is okay to carry the whole ship." Hearing this, the prince immediately clasped his hands behind his calm face and said, "I am Prince So Yang, the envoy from Joseon." Hearing the name of the shipwright prince, immediately recovered his soul and said, "Yes, it is, so it is." The shipwright, after hearing such information, was sweating from trembling his whole body in fear, and immediately he spoke again, almost making a big mistake. The prince, after hearing such words, smiled. He didn't merge with those who didn't know immediately and said, "It's okay, I say, who designed the ship used in the eunuch Zheng Hua's expedition?" After learning of the purpose of Wang Prince's arrival at the shipyard, the shipwright was also relieved and immediately replied with a smile, "Yes, how proud it was to see the huge ships set sail one after another." Soon afterwards the shipwright Bang Gil Jun told the prince about how he had built the ship. He had built a 2,000 ryo ship with a displacement of 280 tons for the purpose of protecting the Bozon expedition ship, which at that time was also unexpected. Shah never thought that it would be his last achievement. There were no more expedition ships. The expedition ships that Shah created were also useless. The image of a small boat on the surface of the sea with a white sail raised to catch the wind, following the words of the shipwright, then at the early end of the sword by building small, shabby merchant ships. The prince who listened to the shipwright began to talk about his past achievements also became admiring, and soon the shipbuilder sighed and continued, "The prince of course wants to make huge ships." The prince who heard about it immediately recognized the shipwright's will. He stretched out his hand to imply that he wanted to discuss with him, and then spoke up, besides that, whether he had ever built other ships. Hearing the question of the shipwright, also answered honestly, he had learned a lot from making ships. "The day I built the ship," began to tell the prince about his achievements. The Bogson ship Fujian, in the lower also touched the Guangxian ship of Guangdong province, and of course in the lower also knew the recent ship, the Joseon ship of Zhejiang province. The distant prince has still accomplished a shipwright who has done it look excitedly said, "Those are good, but have you ever thought of making a new ship? Who is wasting his talent?" Hearing the prince's words, the shipwright also seemed to understand something, and immediately said, "You mean to go to Joseon to build a ship?" He thought the shipwright would agree, but he rejected Wang Zi's offer, thanked him for his good intentions. Building a big ship and conquering the ocean was the life of a man. Talented people are the same everywhere. Hearing the answer, So Yang's face continued, "Take a look at this picture. Take out a picture of a boat painted on it, and say, it only has a mast and oars with oars, isn't this just a small fishing boat?" The prince pointed to a small spot on the painting and asked, "But what was this?" The prince went on to speak, "The boat caught 4 times as many fish as fishing boats of other sizes," and the shipwright who heard this suddenly said, "Indeed." The shipwright hearing this said, if he wanted to use a pulley to pull the fish from the bottom, he had to put a mast. The shipwright said without a frown and then continued, "I don't know how to make this kind of boat, but I don't know how to make tools." Hearing this, the prince's eyes lit up with joy, and said to the shipwright, "If building a small ship can surpass a large ship, wouldn't it be a very meaningful thing for a shipwright? Think carefully before we return to Joseon." Looking at the vast expanse of heaven and earth, the white sail reaching the sky, the white clouds gently wandering against the vast blue sky, the voice of the prince still resonates evenly, and if you agree, please visit our place in 10 days. A farm on the outskirts of Nanjing. In the temple the green vegetable garden is a color in harmony with the blue of the earth and sky. In the distance are high peaks undulating up and down. Looking at the green cabbage vegetable field, the prince's eyes lit up and his whole body seemed to have an extra burst of strength, and said, "The cabbage here is special, it is big and fresh. Just by these cabbages we can eat a long winter." Holding a large and firm cabbage in his hand, Wang's brilliant eyes became bright with the thought in his mind, "This is probably the ancestor of the kind of cabbage we eat today. Well, then, hey boss." The prince took out a bag full of silver and sighed. His eyes became happy on his lips with a bright smile and called, "Let me give me the best seeds." Hearing the prince's words, the owner of the vegetable garden bowed reverently and said, "Agu, gentleman from Joseon, please wait a moment." A man who freed the prince went to a camp where the pigs were being kept, and soon the prince saw the fat pigs in the barn and was interested, and then he said, "This pig has been you for a few years," and the pig keeper who heard this replied, "It was not very long, in the lower house it has only been raised for more than a year." Looking at the good fat ruddy pig in the barn who was eating all the food in it, The prince immediately thought, and immediately said, "The largest growing pig can weigh more than 240 jun. 144 kg. In Joseon, clean pigs raised for more than 2 years weigh 70 jun. In terms of size, this breed of pigs is at the top." As soon as he finished thinking, the prince immediately spoke, "Can a pig be sold for 100? The pig farmer immediately raised his hand to dispel the implication that it was impossible and said, 100 a pig, why da? Then it is too difficult for him." Out of money, the prince was not lacking, so he said to the pig farmer, if there was a shortage. He kept talking, and then the pig herder knelt down and lifted the silver bag reverently and said, "The name of this pig is Gamong Black Pig, Great Master." The pig herder continued to say, "Why will he try to reach the golden ratio between female and male of 8:2 and will send it to the big man tomorrow? Not only that, but the pig herder will continue to flatter, Joseon is such a beautiful country." Hearing this, Wang Prince's eyes suddenly lit up. There was a big smile on his lips because of the pigherd's compliment, then said, "All thanks to you." Spending a day on the outskirts of Nanjing, Wang's whole body became tired. Standing in the twilight of the sunset, the prince immediately said, "Our journey to the Ming dynasty is almost over." Looking back at the silver in his pocket, the prince continued, "The silver borrowed from Wang Xuan the imperial eunuch has also been exhausted. This amount can be easily earned by exporting soap. I am worried because I don't know what he is thinking." The eunuch Wang Xuan took the fan to cover his smiling face fakely. In the twilight, Wang's face also became more wistful and said, "But it is a mountain that must be crossed to build a prosperous Joseon." The bodyguard accompanying the prince suddenly spoke, "The great prince named Bangil Jun has arrived." Hearing the announcement from the guard, the prince, who had been thinking for a while, stopped and spoke, just then finished thinking. Wang Zi turned behind the direction of the guard with a smile like the winner of some bet and said, "It seems that talented people are flocking to Joseon." Arriving in front of the port, there were 2 sons carrying luggage for the prince who were standing with their heads bowed waiting for distribution. Immediately after that, the prince said, "The luggage is ready, there are more than 400 books, so be cautious." The other 2 guards quickly obeyed the order to answer, "We are clear, Prince the great man." A series of books were placed on the ground. As soon as he saw them, the prince immediately spoke, because there would be a lot of luggage on the way from Beijing to Joseon would be very difficult. The other guards immediately responded to Wang Prince's words, it was true. The pink-robed man with a round face with a beard under his chin spoke, wondering what was wrong with Hanyang. The guard who followed beside the prince answered, "How can we read all the items?" Hearing such a silly question, the prince immediately said, Xi'an Palace has a lot of people, so you don't need to worry." Beneath the massive high hall a shout sounded from the palace man, "Your Highness." The blue-robed worker quickly rushed to skimming and calling out, "His Highness has something big." The other archer breathed as he continued, "I heard that Muokjae was in a commotion." His Highness in a red shirt held a white towel and wiped the sweat stains from his face and said calmly, "I was just about to break the record for the deadlift exercise, an exercise that uses a barbell lifted off the floor to hip level. Who came to break the rock?" Just then the man continued, "If it's not a big deal, don't blame me, what's wrong?" The eunuch standing at the side closed his face and bowed slightly to speak. Everyone had completed the journey back. The man in red continued to answer, "It was good news, but why cause a ruckus? Could there be a tiger?" Just then the eunuch went on to reply, "Yes, not that. The city heard that the pigs had escaped and the whole area became chaotic." Hearing this, the red-robed man seemed to smile hesitantly and said, If you bring it back from the Ming dynasty, it will definitely be your piglet, don't make a fuss." So the eunuch who heard this immediately stood up and closed it. Hearing this, the sweat on the eunuch's forehead began to pour more. He stammered and said, Those pigs must be about 120 jun, 72 kg, in size, Your Highness." Hearing this, His Highness in red was stunned and asked as if he did not believe what he had just heard, "What do you say?" There was a chaos between humans and the pigs in the herd running everywhere. Everyone on each side surrounded the pigs while running and shouting, catching it. The pigs also tried to run while running and shouting. The guards in the palace were all mobilized to round up the pigs running outside. A guard caught a pig and then shouted, "This is a normal pig or a wild boar? Why is it so strong?" A squire sitting on horseback, suddenly a pig came out and began to light up with the horse. The aura of the pig overwhelmed the frightened horse and cried out. The squire who had caught the pig earlier shouted to the person on the horse, "Make him catch him quickly. Tang Tang is a military officer, what are you doing?" The piglet in his hand is still struggling to stop crying out. The guard is still constantly shouting, "Because of these pigs you do not listen to me." Suddenly a pig turned to look in the direction of the squire, who was sending the pig with an angry face that wanted to rush to attack. The other squire saw this, and his pale face shouted, "God, the other pig has a face," as if to speak. The other released my husband. The pig in his hand also struck a cry, "Me. If there is danger." The squire holds the pig while shouting, "This pig is about to attack me." Just then a chaotic scene ensued. The squire lying on the ground still clutching the pig he had caught earlier, and the pig on the other side still watching with angry eyes rushed towards the squire. Just then a hand grabbed the tail of the pig that was about to rush and said, "These damn pigs." That pig that didn't have time to react was grabbed and cried out. The prince held the pig in one hand and grabbed the tail of the other and looked at the palace with a radiant face and said, "It has been a year since I came to Joseon. If I can't solve this, what is my face?" After a ruckus, the pigs finally got water neatly into the barn. The two pigs looked at each other unapprovingly. Their faces also became much more unsightly, and exclaimed. The great looked at the big fat pigs inside the barn with a cheerful face and smiled and said to the prince, "Haha, look at them, from their fierce nature to their appearance also like wild boars." A pig behind the straw that the great emperor brought before him looked at his angry face, and seeing this, the great emperor said, "Well." The great emperor looked down at the pig's gaze even more fiercely, but this made him even more interested. He said, "You have toiled from far away to the land of Joseon." The great's face became brighter when he saw the pigs lying obediently in the barn still holding out handfuls of straw to feed the pig. The pig was already angry, but when he saw the smiling expression as well as the friendliness of the great made him feel touched. His eyes turned from fierce to slightly tearful. Unable to resist the handful of straw that the great brought in front of him, it seemed that he was hungry in his stomach, so he made them fierce, and when he saw the pig begin to gnaw every piece of straw in the bundle of straw he brought to him, he said, "Haha, this one seems very hungry." After feeding, the two pigs in the barn began to talk happily to each other. "Sullen, the other seemed trustworthy," the other replied. "Sullen, he was no different from us." And the emperor, seeing that they were no longer as aggressive as before, said happily, "They are big and strong like that, later we don't need to worry too much." Just then the great's gaze deepened and said, "Choose the strongest of them for your feast." Prince So-yong followed behind the great emperor as he walked and said, "There are lost publications from the Cheon period, so the children bought them here. But most of them are related to products and agriculture, so this time the Ministry of Public Works and the Ministry of Household will be very busy." Hearing the successes after Prince So-yong returned from a year-long trip, the great emperor immediately came back to applaud. "I have worked a lot. Do you have any requests?" Right here Prince So-yong bowed slightly and said, "Yes, this time you really learned a lot. If you apply the cultivation method of the Ming dynasty to Joseon." The image of Prince So-yong and his bodyguards walking on the street to see that the agricultural products for sale are all fresh and high-yielding things come to mind. The lush green fruits on sale make Prince So-yong's mind see the potential for Joseon. Surely the food in Joseon will also change that can help solve the problem of nutritional imbalance. The next problem is talented. The Ming people brought by the prince to stand in front of the great emperor became reverent. The great saw them and quickly spoke. "Do you know the whereabouts?" After hearing the emperor's question they also quickly replied, "Yes." Knowing that they were talents from the Ming dynasty, the great treated them with tender graciousness and said, "You have traveled from the distant Great Ming to Joseon. I naturally have to arrange your own accommodation." Bang Gil-jun heard this, and laughed on behalf of the other two, answering, "Thank your highness's grace. A dedicated teacher will definitely create value." Those who used to follow Prince So-yong's exercises after hearing that the prince had returned to the temple came to welcome him. Prince So-yong, who had returned, after seeing the hard-working bodies still in even better shape than the original, made the prince feel satisfied. "Well, it's commendable that ye are still working hard." The prince walked over to Ma Jong-ho's side and looked at the closed boy. The prince immediately said, "Ma Jong-ho, you are also very praiseworthy." Hearing Wang Yang's compliment, Ma Jong-ho was not arrogant but humbly said, "No, the stance between learning and teaching is very different." Hearing this, Prince So-yong immediately said, "I have a way. In physical training, it is impossible to distinguish Seoha or Eolja as just a complete learning of filial piety." Prince So-yong suddenly became deep in thought. "So isn't it true that I have too much disregard for people with the status of children in the West? I know how to handle it." A new gymnastics equipment was launched. Looking in the sunlight that looked much rounder and shiny, Prince So-yong immediately said when he saw the equipment brought, "Well, from today I will teach you a new way of training." Everyone who saw the new equipment that had never been seen since training until now, everyone suddenly rolled their eyes and looked at the prince. Knowing such an expression, the prince immediately continued, "It is called Kyohung training. I heard that you are bored from having to repeat the same movements over and over again." Then the prince picked up the heavy iron in the shape of a circle that was a tool for doing exercises and looked at everyone's direction and said, "So if you change a lot of exercises, it will make you more focused. Look closely and follow me." The prince stood up straight and lay down on push-ups and immediately jumped up and raised his hands to the sky and took a deep breath, and immediately explained, "Sister in Daming, I came up with this dance exercise." Seeing Wang Zi's new move, everyone became more excited as soon as they practiced the old exercises that bored them. Everyone looked up and cheered. It didn't look like they were carrying a heavy object lifting 100 times temporarily. Their expressions became hopeful in this new exercise. At last that day put out that hideous dumbbell. Seeing that everyone was so excited, the prince also felt much more comfortable. He said with a smile, "Haha, it is good for you to be so excited. Now follow me." A large wooden tree trunk was placed on the ground. The prince began to flex his muscles and jump back and forth to the sides and said, after repeating burfi 20 times, bouncing and bouncing over a log across the waist 20 times. Immediately after switching to a new movement, the prince took around 20 kilograms dumbbell and began to swing up and down, also weighing 20 kilograms 20 times. Continue to create a stance to bend up and down 20 times and then speak. Then practice the exercise 20 times. After a series of continuous movements, the prince finally stopped and said, "Do this twice and then rest for a while, then do it twice." Ma Jianho's eyes became interested and lit up and said, "Today is the end." Hearing Ma Jianho's question, the prince immediately smiled and replied, "Yes, after training, you will have a rushing aura like a hurricane." Hearing the strange words spoken by the prince made Ma Jianho wonder, hurricane. Against the high blue skies suddenly a bird flew by with a very careless face that cried out, "Crow." Everyone after trying Wang's new exercise brought back at first. The excitement then immediately became tired. "I can't practice anymore, that is, the real look when practicing." One guy while training did not know how to weigh himself, vomited, oozing. Another person who saw this, his limbs also became trembling as he was about to walk to the exercise of jumping over the wooden tree, said, he seemed to be slave, vomited. After hearing the other person's condition of vomiting, Prince Soyang immediately asked again, vomiting. Then Wang Prince's face became extremely perverted and continued, "So vomit again, because I used to be like that. People are not so easy to die." Watching everyone practice for the first time, everyone becomes sluggish and nauseous, as if they want to call for help to tell them that they can't practice anymore. A book was put under the table and then Prince Soyang said, "You have been practicing bodybuilding for 5 months, now you are only short of education." Standing in front of the others, Prince Soyang said sternly, "Open the book and focus on karma. If the physical strength disappears, isn't learning also a way to remove impurities? Those people can practice every day, but they have never been exposed to history books, so when they saw the books that the prince brought in front of them, they started turning the pages and then their faces became unsightly and said, 'How can we read books with this body?' The prince continued to reply, 'Of course you must follow the orders.' The two of them began to study the scriptures and the whole person emitted the aura of light of the 10 directions of the Buddhas. The prince continued, Ma Jianho or Seo San Qian, who all have to study in this way wholeheartedly, will have a great success day. One shouted, "It's ridiculous." On the shelves are dozens of thick books neatly waiting for people to learn. Prince So-yang took a book with a cheerful face and said to Huang Ying, "Isn't this a print of a pen?" A series of volumes were put down, in response to Prince So-yang's question, and said, "It's not just the printed version of Zhou Toliang." The three of them sat in the book room. Prince So-yang took a copy and said, "There were also prints of Yan Zhenqing's Quanming Ceremony Palace and Yan Zhenqing's Can Ceremony Bai." And when he heard this, the prince sitting next to him also spoke. The writing was bold and very meticulous, he would definitely study them. The great emperor saw the positive energy of the two people and said warmly, "Next time Yang probably wants to replace you as an envoy." Hearing this, the prince immediately replied, "Of course, that the royal brother wanted to visit the patriarch where the descendants of Zhongni were worshipped." The prince quickly wanted to leave before leaving. His father was very pleased with the results of this envoy trip, so the next envoy trip will be a request for his father to give. Everyone when they heard this immediately turned their eyes to the prince. Then the prince looked at everyone and said hesitantly, "Why are you like that?" Prince So-yang immediately smiled wryly and turned to look at the prince and said, "Yang, To see how the body of the deputy Shin Suk-yu has changed, such a hard trip is not bearable. His face also became more forced, but when he heard Prince So-yang's words, he immediately agreed and said, "Yes, going to a distant country requires physical strength." Both of them looked at the prince's side at the same time, and then said in unison, "The strength of the disciple's hand could not remember the iron block at all." Hearing this, the great emperor immediately continued to speak. It turned out that Yang disciple did not know how exquisite that dumbbell was. "You, what do you think?" The person who spoke back and forth, Prince So-yang, immediately answered the emperor. "His muscles are twice as strong as before, but his calligraphy ability has not changed." Immediately the prince turned to the two and began to speak. "Well, didn't you have no interest in calligraphy in the first place?" From the outside heard the echo inside the inner hall. Giggles rang out. "I will personally help you, so stop chattering here quickly. This is to strengthen our brotherhood." Quadruple A. A newly made gun is shown to everyone. This is a gun we just made. It is a gun that an ordinary soldier can also use. The prince and the prince began to test the newly built gun. The first shot was fired carrying a faint white smoke in front of the barrel. The prince said, "Its power at a close distance can penetrate iron armor and at a distance can penetrate flesh." Looking at the bullet pinned right in the red center, the prince continued, "Its power is very strong." Then the prince asked, according to whether there was anything missing from him. The prince quickly replied, thinking. Suddenly an insider sneaked inside the house. He walked closer to the smoking incense burner. Each slow step avoided making a sound that caught the attention of others. There was a slow voice, so the insider who came to Josian this time was still doing well. The sound of the other guard quickly came out, "Yes, of course." The attractive body man with platinum hair fell down and his face also became unpredictably dark, said, "Prince Josian, he has a talent for creating good utensils like soap." Just then the other man took out a handful of silver and said, "He can make things that are not available in Daming. Follow up and then report back to me. If you write to tell me anything, I reward 5 taels of silver. The more detailed the painting, the more the bonus will increase." As soon as he finished assigning the task, he looked up with a sinister smile on his face and said, "In Daming or in Josian, there is nothing more precious than silver." Crown Prince Li Hyong was holding the cannon that had just finished firing that still had smoke at the tip of the cannon, to shoot through the flesh without having to take more than 100 steps. Prince Li Hyong tried the cannon holding positions, first placing it on his shoulder. I also thought of placing it just below his chin. But if they did, people wouldn't stand it. Prince Li Hyong held the cannon at his hip and said, so he came up with a way to shoot it by holding it between his hip and arm. Prince Yu Jinyang stroked his chin in thought. It was very similar to the firearm that appeared during the reign of King Sonjo. The timeless item appeared. Prince Yu Jinyang, who was still stroking his chin, said that according to his disciple, this type of gun is essential in attack and defense. Crown Prince Li Hyong finished putting the cannon on his shoulder and looked at the prince. Why are we discussing attack and defense while we make this gun for soldiers to wear? Prince Yu Jinyang took the cannon from the prince, because it was a weapon that could not be aimed at in the event of a sudden enemy attack. He would directly shoot and tell him again. The sky was blue with white clouds, and flocks of birds were flying away in the middle of the mountains. Prince Yu Jinyang was touching a hole, which could penetrate both iron plates and wooden panels. The power of this gun was stronger than he thought. Prince Yu Jinyang then held the cannon in his hand and said that the accuracy needed to be improved because the bullet had deflected off the target. Moreover, the way of aiming was a bit busy. Crown Prince Li Hyong stroked his chin in contemplation. Well, for ordinary soldiers, after firing one shot, there can be an injury to the shoulder. I think not only reduce the power of the gun, but also reduce its size. Crown Prince Li Hyong said to Prince Yu Jinyang. Moreover, he said that the way of aiming was not comfortable. Was there any other way? Prince Yu Jinyang hesitantly replied, that. Prince Yu Jinyang looked behind him, where someone had just left. Prince Yu Jinyang watched as he thought. It seems that he heard a rustling sound, maybe he misheard it. Prince Li Hyong asked Yu, what's wrong? Prince Yu Jinyang replied, nothing, brother. Well, you asked how to aim. In a bungalow called Park Gang is there? Yes, great prince. Prince Yu Jinyang was talking to Park Gang. Didn't you draw the crossbow of the Ming dynasty and disassemble it many times? So can you recreate the structure of the bow and arrow at that time? Park Gang obeyed the order and replied, of course. I am currently renovating the old bow. I will show it to you right here. After saying that, Park Gang immediately did his duty. Prince Yu Jinyang, Crown Prince Li Hyong and Park Gang walked out together. Prince Yu Jinyang holding the crossbow said loudly, "I will shoot this crossbow and tell you about the problems of that gun." Prince Yu Jinyang held the crossbow on his shoulder, aiming to prepare to shoot. Prince Yu Jinyang held a crossbow and fired one shot. The arrow flew in the center of the target. Park Gang was surprised. Crown Prince Li Hyong spoke up. Crown Prince Li Hyong looked at the target and said the accuracy rate increased when the eyes and gun were in a straight line. Prince Li Hyong imagined firing firecrackers, aiming guns with one hand, and then trying to start a fire with the other, which was really difficult. The prince went on to say that at that time we could not tell if the enemy had moved. It was indeed a difficult weapon to use in battles with many people moving. Crown Prince Li Hyong suddenly discovered that, so if we combine bows and arrows and guns, it will solve the problem. Crown Prince Li Hyong looked at Park Gang and said that now is not the time. Park Gang, stop all the work you are doing again. Start doing this first. Park Gang replied, "Yes, Crown Prince." Crown Prince Li Hyong, Prince Yu Jinyang, Park Gang meet together on the design table. An ordinary soldier can lose strength or be injured in the face after firing several shots. What if we pull the wooden board back and attach it to our shoulders? It can burn the helmet, so it must change the direction of the smoke. How about hanging a dagger under it in case of an emergency? It's also a good idea. It's better to be able to use a gun for a short time. 3 months later, on March 2, 1444, the weather was still clear. King Sejong is sitting on the throne. Today is the day of the prince and Yu unveils a new gun. King Sejong continued to say that the prince and Yu gathered all the military officers in the palace. It seemed that this time the two of them were very well prepared. The officers looked at each other in confusion. King Sejong continued, although the two of them are not people who work in vain, they are still very worried because guns are something that often fails. At this time Prince Li Hyong and Prince Yu Jinyang are looking at each other and laughing triumphantly. Crown Prince Li Hyong raised his hand and ordered to quickly prepare his rifle, and there was a clear response. Crown Prince Li Hyong continued with gunpowder, a soldier pouring gunpowder into the tip of a gun. Then the soldier with the gun shook vigorously. Crown Prince Li Hyong continued to order Hyonya, the soldier holding the bullet inserted into the muzzle of the gun. Other officials wondered what he was doing, the gunfire was so loud. The other officials continued to speak. After all, nothing could be done without combat experience. Only 2 officials were silent and watched. Crown Prince Li Hyong ordered the shooting. The soldier holding the gun in his hand is in a position to prepare to shoot and shoot. The gun fired, a powerful power emitted. Meanwhile, officers were pointing and laughing at the gun. A loud noise appeared. Prince Li Hyong continued to order to quickly check the target, and the soldiers replied clearly. The soldier said one shot hit the target, and there was a small hole in the target that still had smoke coming out. The officials who had been disparaging the gun earlier began to notice. It was hard to believe that the noisy thing could fire a single shot. According to him, where could that be used? The big official said just one shot later, and the official next to him replied, "What do you mean?" The big official said, "You said it was only one shot. Usually at that distance the gun had to fire 10 rounds to hit the target." Crown Prince Li Hyong continued with his performance. Next, preparing his firearm, the soldier holding the big gun was advancing. Crown Prince Li Hyong ordered, preparing to shoot. The officers were concerned. This gun could be used by ordinary people. Because the gun was so large, bullets seemed to be a very special item. So Li Hyong ordered to fire. The gun fired bullets with great power that the person holding the gun still stood. 2 shots hit the target. On the shooting target appeared 2 holes with smoke rising. The soldier with the gun smiled very brightly at that feat. There was talk nearby. At least this firearm was useful. But it would take some time to reload. While the gun fired 1 shot, skilled archers could fire 3 shots. The officers went on to talk about guns. They are suitable for use in hiding, firing 1 shot and then running away. If we put gunpowder in first, can't we wait for the right opportunity and then use it? There was laughter. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. King Sejong still sat on the throne silently. King Sejong speaks to the prince. King Sejong told the prince the rifle. The first gun you showed me was very difficult to become a firecracker. The second gun you showed me was slower than a bow and arrow. King Sejong asked us how to use it. Prince Li Hyong thought silently. Crown Prince Li Hyong said guns cannot replace bows and arrows, and it took him 10 years to become a skilled archer. Crown Prince Li Hyong continued, But these people have only practiced for 15 days. King Sejong suddenly snored 15 stars. Do you mean that you can reach that skill level after only 15 days? Prince Li Hyong replied, yes to your father. King Sejong thought that in 15 days you can't even learn how to hold a bow. To hit the target correctly you need to learn in 6 months. Crown Prince Li Hyong said to King Sejong, so, Your Highness, I have shown you gunners who have only been trained for 15 days so far. Crown Prince Li Hyong added that now, there are legs coming out. Crown Prince Li Hyong said he would show people the performances of skilled shooters.